Update 2. I told my sister I will never accept her or her life choices. July 29th update from Am I the A-hole post. So hi, this is gonna be short, but my mom did go to the police about the damages done to my sister's car and our houses, but for some reason our Ring camera and the one in the driveway were off. The police are basically making out they were turned off and telling my dad there's nothing they can do as they don't think it was anyone outside our family, so we were better off dropping it, but my dad is insisting they further investigate. My dad explained it better, but I'm just not in the right headspace to go into detail, but he and mom agreed to just sell the house then split the money. Worst part of the update is I was sexually assaulted when I went back with my dad to our hometown to collect the rest of my stuff. I went to the gas station and on my way out I got cornered by two boys saying stuff about my sister and how I was just like her but hit it better, some other sick shit I don't feel comfortable repeating. I was extremely scared. They groped me multiple times and pulled down my shorts as I was walking away, I think to humiliate me. A nice scary biker chased them away, even hit one with something. Hope he did damage. While the man in gas station called the police, I know who they are. My dad wanted to off them, but I want to press charges as I know one of them has a college scholarship and the other is 19, so imagine how that will look on his record. Hope they gets prison, but doubt it. I was badly shaken as anyone would be. I just wanted to go back to my aunt's house as it had become my safe place. Unfortunately my mother and sister were there as my dad stupidly told mom, so they came over refusing to leave for my aunt. The minute I came into the house mom ran to me hugging me while my sister stood there. I could have sworn she had a smirk on her face. I told them leave me alone, don't touch me, it's all their fault, I hated them both, just go. My mother broke down in tears calling me her baby, saying she was sorry. Then my sister told me I shouldn't blame her, and as I now know what it feels like to a woman in this world is regardless of what you do you're sexualized, so why not benefit off it? So what happened to me should be a wake-up call, and I should take this moment and reflect on how I made her feel as she was violated when they sent around her videos. As if they weren't on Pornhub. So yeah, she made me being sexually assaulted by two men, one of whom was an adult, about her like I could have been raped because of her. Did you ever have one of those moments where everything slows down and your body just reacts? Well, I head-butted her, then punched her a few times, even managed to pull her hair, then kick her in the stomach as my dad was pulling me away. He told my mother to get that thing out of my aunt's house and not come back if she didn't want the same, but this time it would be both of them and he would do it. My dad is definitely divorcing my mom if that isn't obvious, and I'm gonna live with him. I know he's putting in for a transfer at work. Hopefully this will start a better chapter in our lives before anyone mentions it was the boys who assaulted. I shouldn't blame my sister. Go F yourself. It's not like I'm letting them away with it, and I'm going after worse offenders with the bullying too legally. That is also for those of you in my messages being creepy, like asking for things that would put you on a register, sending me rape/dead treats and wishing it on me. You do realize I'm a minor. I literally have said my age multiple times, not that you should say it to anyone. Ruined a marriage and my family for revenge. I'm sure you've all heard the saying, revenge is a dish best served cold. Well, I'm here to tell you that it's true. I know this because I've experienced it firsthand. I ruined a marriage and tore apart my family in the name of revenge, and it's a story that still gives me chills. It all started when I discovered that my brother's wife, let's call her Lisa, was cheating on him. I was shocked and hurt, but I was determined to get revenge. So, I started spreading rumors, whispering hints to the right ears, and letting the truth slowly unravel. It was like a wildfire, consuming marriages and tearing apart a family. But that wasn't enough for me. I wanted to watch their lives crumble. So, I decided to get a private investigator involved. He uncovered deep secrets, discovered hidden financial discrepancies, and hinted at affairs within their social circle. The gossip mill went into overdrive, painting an indelible scarlet letter on Lisa's reputation. At first, I savored the destruction I had caused, but amidst the wreckage, I realized a bitter truth. Revenge may have felt sweet in the beginning, but it left a lingering taste of regret and emptiness in its wake. What had I really gained from ruining their lives? Just when I thought everything was falling into place, someone uncovered my role in this wicked game of emotional destruction. The game was exposed, not by any of them, but by a completely unexpected source. And let me tell you, the fallout from this revelation was a whole new level of chaos and danger that I never saw coming. So, there you have it, folks. A tale of revenge that ignited a wildfire, consuming marriages and tearing apart a family. But remember, revenge is a double-edged sword, and as the smoke clears, we must ask ourselves, was it truly worth it? I'm sure you're wondering what happened next. Well, I can tell you that it was a wild ride. I was left with a choice that would shape my future, and the future of my family, forever. I could either accept the consequences of my actions, or I could fight back. What will I choose? That's a story for another day. I see you're a chubby man. Yeah, lol, a little. Hit the gym. Men should be in shape. So I'll see you there? Are you calling me fat? You shouldn't comment on a woman's weight. I'm not fat, I'm curvy. I'm going to report you. You're going down. The bigger they are, the harder they fall, I guess. Teachers, what has been the most horrifying moment in your classroom? The most horrifying moment in my classroom came in my second year of teaching in 1969. Students were doing class work, and I was working at my desk when I looked up to see a young man showing another young man what looked very much like a handgun. To get a better look, I got up to sharpen my pencil. When I was sure what I was seeing, I walked to a very good student's desk. I bent over as if helping him with his work. I whispered very quietly, "Go get Mr. Fowler, assistant principal. Walk to the outside door, then run." He didn't look up but said, "I will." I saw. Next came the most horrifying part to me, trying to stay calm while wondering what Steve's intentions were, and how I could protect the most students if he did start shooting. Surprisingly, I thought more about how to protect them than about how to protect myself. Luckily, I never had to find out if my plans would work because Mr. Fowler came to the door and asked to see Steve in the hall. I held my breath as he got up and walked to the door, but nothing happened, and soon we heard them walking away. When we could no longer hear them, everyone started talking at once. Most of the students had been aware of what was happening, and several of them asked me how I stayed so calm. I told them it was the best thing to keep them safe. The boy that Steve was showing the gun to asked me if I wanted it. I said yes. He told me that he put the safety on, and brought it to my desk where I opened the bottom drawer and he put it in. Not long after that, Mr. Fowler was back and asked if I knew where the gun was. I opened the drawer and he took it out. It dawned on me later that he was wearing gloves. He also told me outside the door that Steve admitted to planning to kill his math teacher. He had math next. The next period was my planning. I went immediately to the teacher's lounge, where I collapsed. I was shaking, and when my friends asked what was wrong, I told them that I just had a student with a gun in my classroom planning to kill the math teacher, which caused all of my friends to freak out. When I calmed down again, I went to the office to ask if I could possibly go home for the rest of the day. The principal said they had already called a sub for me. I went home and took my dog for a very long walk to work off the nervous energy. My girlfriend was up unusually early this morning. I wish I never found out why. I'm going to take out the trash, my girlfriend Monica announced as soon as I entered the kitchen that morning. I hadn't expected to see her up this early. Certainly not after how late she must have gotten home last night. After spending Friday nights bar hopping with friends, Monica usually slept in until lunch. Okay, honey, I said, without particular interest. Thanks. Grabbing the cereal box from the counter and plopping down on one of the kitchen chairs. I wondered if she had returned home earlier the previous night and I'd simply missed it. I mean, I normally woke up as soon as I heard the key turning in the lock, but perhaps that night she'd been particularly quiet? Or maybe she'd stayed with one of her friends? How was your night? I asked, as soon as I heard the front door click shut. What time did you get home? Silence. I raised my head from my bowl, waiting for her to emerge from around the corner, but the corridor was empty. Honey? I tried again, my voice saturated with uncertainty. Monica appeared in the doorway, her expression unreadable. She didn't look disoriented or drunk, but she didn't seem quite right either. Her hands were fidgety, and her eyes wouldn't meet mine. Monica? I grunted, trying to tame the lump in my throat. What's the matter? She took a deep breath and parted her lips, as though she was going to speak, but then hunched her shoulders and shook her head. I need to take out the trash, she said. I gawked at her, dumbfounded. But, you just did? She shook her head, and glided towards the trash can cabinet, opening it, and producing another bag from within. Then, just like the previous time, she turned on her heel and disappeared from the kitchen. Needless to say, the silent treatment was unlike Monica. Had something happened during her night out? Had I done anything to upset her? And where were all these bags coming from? As soon as I heard the front door shut, I leapt out of my seat and threw the cabinet open, expecting to. Well, I'm not entirely sure what I was expecting. Either way, it was empty. What's going on? I asked, when she returned 5 minutes later, the same empty look in her eyes. Do you want to talk about it? She looked dubious. Monica? Okay, she said, but first, let me take out the trash. My stomach lurched as she flung the cabinet open again, pulling out yet another garbage bag. What the hell? I began, subconsciously pinching my arm, as if to ensure I wasn't dreaming. What are all these bags? But she wasn't listening, instead turning her back to me and retreating the same way she had come. A chill crawled up my spine. What the hell was going on? I could have sworn the cabinet had been empty only a few moments ago. Where had all these bags come from and why wasn't she taking them out all at once? Shutting the front door behind me as meticulously as I could, I crept down the hallway leading to the stairwell. I needed to investigate. Monica had never willingly taken out the trash before. She said the garbage chute gave her the creeps. Our apartment was on the 6th floor, so there was no way she was going down all those flights of stairs for a single bag of garbage. The door to the garbage chute at the end of the hallway was ajar, and I could hear the faint wail of metal as it was pulled open. I swallowed, suddenly at a loss for what to do. I mean, wouldn't it be weird if she found me just standing there? And what exactly was I planning to say? I listened in, my skin prickling in anticipation and my heart thudding in my chest. Oh, what was I getting so worked up for? It was only Monica, for God's sake. She'd probably had a falling out with one of her friends, or maybe I was snoring again and she couldn't get to sleep. I'll just go in and ask. But what I saw when I opened the door will remain with me for the rest of my life. Monica was sitting on the door of the chute, her legs already swallowed by the darkness within. Slowly but surely, she was edging her body into it, her palms clammy against the metallic finish. She turned her head at the sound of the door opening, and for a brief moment her eyes lit up with recognition. Monica, I cried out, dashing towards the chute, my heart practically leaping out of my chest. What are you? But it was too late. Startled by my voice, or by my presence, she let go and disappeared into the chute, a raspy wail reverberating against the steel. Thud. I wanted to scream, but it was as though I'd suddenly gone mute. Fear sizzled through me like electricity as I flew down the stairs to the manager's office. Give me the key to the trash room, I demanded breathlessly. My girlfriend is inside. He looked at me over the tops of his glasses, as though questioning my state of mind. That's impossible, he retorted. I have the only key. Tears were flowing freely down my cheeks and my clothes were damp with sweat. I must have looked a downright sight, but I didn't care. She fell into the chute, I sobbed, grabbing the edge of his desk for support. From the 6th floor. Everything happened quickly after that. An ambulance was called, as were the police. At first they were hesitant to tell me what they'd found. They kept insisting I sit down and have some water, throwing leaflets about therapy and mental well-being into my lap. Please, just tell me, just tell me. I kept repeating, but nobody was listening. Hours seemed to pass by without a single word of affirmation or any information needed to piece the events of the morning together. The ambulance left within about 20 minutes of arrival, and left the police to take care of it. I couldn't understand it. I mean, even if Monica was badly hurt, she'd still need to be looked at the hospital. So, why had they left? Eventually, an uneasy-looking officer took a seat next to me. Son. He began slowly, studying my reaction. Your girlfriend is gone. I buried my face in my hands. Of course, she was. She'd jumped down the chute, plummeting God knows how many feet. But your story isn't quite adding up, he continued, his eyes narrowing. You said she'd fallen into the chute, but, he took a deep breath, his forehead creasing, but we found her. Well, parts of her. Inside. Inside a garbage bag. My blood ran cold. It was like I could no longer understand what he was saying. His mouth was moving, but the sounds were jumbled and wouldn't make sense. Inside a garbage bag? What the hell was that supposed to mean? He explained that the garbage bag had been there for at least several hours before the police were called. He said that there was no doubt that its contents belonged to Monica. He asked whether I had any idea what happened. Then, in a much softer tone, he added that I'd be expected to come in for questioning. When I finally returned to my apartment that morning, all I wanted to do was fall into bed and go to sleep, praying I'd wake up to discover that all this had been nothing but a bad dream. But as soon as I entered the bedroom, the front door slammed shut. Hello? I called out, my voice meek and croaky. Silence. A newfound sense of dread filled my lungs as I recalled the events of the morning. As I tiptoed slowly towards the kitchen, I couldn't help wondering if, no, it couldn't be. She was leaning over the trash can cabinet, a new garbage bag in her grasp. She spun around and our eyes met. I'm just going to take out the trash, she said. I stared at her, my breath catching in my throat. Here she was, right in front of me, talking about trash as if it were the most casual thing in the world. In a feeble attempt to make her stay, I asked the only question I could think of. I asked it, even though I knew the answer already. What's in the bag, honey? How do you deal with parents you can't stand anymore? I apologize in advance for any grammatical errors since English is not my first language. It's important to know that I live in South America, which provides some context for my situation. Lately, I've been feeling an intensified desire to be alone. My parents are divorced, and ever since they split up, I've been caught in the middle of their money disputes. Despite their stable jobs, my mom filed a child support lawsuit against my dad when they separated, and their fights have continued ever since. When I was only 7 years old, my dad used to blame my mom for not buying me clothes or toys with the money she received. I naively took his words to heart and would ask my mom to buy me things using that money, which led to her explaining her debts and expenses, ultimately making me feel guilty and like a burden. These arguments only grew worse over time. Moving to more recent events, last year, I had a fight with my mom that pushed me to attempt suicide. I don't exactly recall what I said, but she yelled at me, expressing her dislike for me and how she couldn't stand having me around. Hearing those words from my own mother devastated me. Feeling desperate, I reacted impulsively and acted out towards her. She became frightened and called my dad, who proceeded to berate me, calling me a loser and an idiot for even considering ending my life. Regarding my mental health, a few years ago, when I was 15, I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety. I was prescribed medication. However, my parents dismissed the importance of mental health and completely disregard mental treatments. Consequently, I stopped seeking help. This year, I managed to finance my own mental treatments and received additional diagnoses of borderline personality disorder, BPD, and attention deficit/hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. I chose not to inform my parents, but somehow they found out and proceeded to mock and shame me for spending my money on treatment. The following day, my dad came to my house, yelling at me and attempting to physically harm me. I was furious because it seemed like nobody cared about my feelings. I reached my breaking point and told him to go back to his perfect family and leave me alone. His response was to slap me. My mom started to lie, claiming it was a joke, and it ultimately became a situation where they portrayed themselves as the victims, with me being the problem. Since then, they have continued to adopt this victim mentality. A few weeks ago, my mom began yelling at me because I hadn't swept a certain area of the house, blaming me for making the house look untidy. The truth is, I don't think the untidiness could solely be attributed to my pets, 2 hamsters and a rabbit, as my mom suggested. However, it is her house, and there are household chores I am expected to fulfill. Due to my early morning start, leaving the house at 5 a.m. and returning at 11 a.m. for work and studies, I found it challenging to keep up with all the tasks. I explained to my mom that there wasn't much to sweep since they hadn't dirtied the area. In response, she told me she wanted me out of her house and no longer wished to see me. I left, called my dad, and he promptly yelled at me, siding with my mom. Deep down, I knew I had to return to my mom's house since I had worked the next day and my belongings and pets were still there. However, my dad wasted no time in threatening physical violence, to the extent where I considered filing a report. Thankfully, my boyfriend arrived at that moment and overheard the threats. We were both terrified. I reluctantly went back home. Since then, I've been avoiding interactions with my mom, primarily speaking only to my dad, complying with her demands without question. Nevertheless, she continues to yell at me, expressing disappointment as though I'm a failed daughter and a terrible person. Needless to say, all these situations have taken a toll on my mental well-being. I do care about my parents, or at least, I think I do. Their concerns about me have even affected my performance at work. Some weeks ago, I turned to substance use as a way to find solace. It temporarily makes me feel better. Now, I'm trying to save money so I can become financially independent and leave. I decided to share my story here today because my mom told me that she doesn't see me anymore, that I'm silent and rebellious. Truth be told, I hardly leave the house except for college and work. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. I won the lottery and hid it from my poor family. I won the lottery and I haven't said a word to anybody. So after taxes my winnings came to just shy of 4 million. I paid off all my debts, hired an accountant, fixed some things on my truck, and put most of it in savings. I kept my job, didn't move, and kept my mouth shut, and with good reason. My brother is a meth head, my sister is spiteful, selfish and very violent, and my mom still blames everything on my dad who died 10 years ago, so I didn't want them scrambling to pretend to give a poop about me for cash. I've been dating a girl for about 3 years now and recently asked her to marry me. She said yes. I bought a modest ring, just over what people would expect given my known employment. This weekend I'm going to lay everything out for her, as I now truly know she's in it for me and not money. It's going to be liberating to be able to buy what I want and take care of my friends. Totally worth the wait. That's the biggest thing for me. It started out as keeping it away from my family and maintaining the life I'd built on my own. It just kind of snowballed from the dough she really liked me, concern, and turned into this thing. I just carried on as normal and took my time, knowing if it's right, time will tell. So, my plan was a relaxing evening on the odd weekend we both managed to be free from work or other plans. We went to an early dinner at one of our favorite Italian places, an inexpensive little diner nearby with great appetizers, and then finally went to see Star Wars. After the movie we grabbed some beer and wine for the evening and went home to relax. Skip the weekly small talk about work, friends, and the accompanying few drinks, and I told her I wanted to be open about everything with each other leading up to the marriage. She got kind of quiet, a little guarded, and said, "Well, yeah, so do I," pausing with that look people get when they want you to keep talking. I told her we were never truly going to have to worry about money, that she could do whatever she wanted with her job or stay at home or change careers, anything, because I had north of $3 million in the bank. Her response was the slow "what are you talking about? How?" kind of thing. I got up and pulled a financial statement I'd printed out and stashed in the coffee table drawer, handed it to her and told her I'd won it all a couple years before we met. She started uncontrollably crying and looked terrified. I got really worried and started explaining I kept it hidden because I didn't want my shitbag family hunting me down, that I didn't want people around me to change or to lose my friends. Then she started apologizing, saying she should have told me before I proposed. She has about $40,000 in student loan and credit card debt and thought that was going to break the engagement. She thought I was so financially responsible that there was no way I'd take on that debt because she never told me about it. It's why she'd been so open to a prenup in the vague conversations we'd had about it before, why she'd never brought up or talked about money. So, after a long conversation about openness and trust, we hashed out some ideas on what we would agree on for the prenup in regards to premarital debt and assets. I'm going to pay her debt off after we're married, so the tax issue is less of a concern and all of my winnings will remain mine should we divorce. Interest and dividends will be marital assets. I'm very pleased with how things played out and we're in a great place for it. We're working with attorneys and my accountant this week, and I'll be putting my 2-week notice in at work. She wants to keep her job but will request some time off so we can take a vacation and settle into actually enjoying some money. What is denied by many people but is actually 100% real. The CIA trafficked cocaine into the United States in the 1970s and 1980s to fund Central American freedom fighters, stop communism, and protect the American way of life. Once people realized the government was responsible for the drug epidemic that destroyed our inner cities for decades, it's not that hard to start questioning other decisions they have made. Am I the a-hole for keeping a lost pet until the owner paid the advertised reward? This weekend I was walking through the park and I saw a cat that looked like one I had seen on posters that were posted around the neighborhood. They said there was a reward of $500 for finding their lost cat. So I caught the cat, which was pretty easy since he was friendly, and checked a poster to see if it was him. It was. I went home, put him in the back porch, and called the number on the poster to let them know I found their cat. They were happy that I found him and said they could come pick him up right away. I confirmed that there was a $500 reward, texted the guy a picture of the cat, and gave him my address. This is where the problem started. When he got to my house, I asked for the reward money before returning the cat. He said that there actually isn't a reward and that he only advertised one to increase the chance that people would look for his cat. I told him that I wasn't going to give his cat back until he paid the promised reward and that he shouldn't have posted one if he didn't want to pay one. He then got angry and threatened to call the cops if I wouldn't give him the cat. I said that he was welcome to and that I would be happy to get things on the record in case I had to take him to small claims court. He begrudgingly told me that he would be back later with the money. Later that night he came by with the full $500, I gave him his cat, and that was the end of it. When I told my girlfriend about it, she thought I should have just gave him back the cat since it cost me nothing to catch him and that everyone was having hard times right now. Some of my friends also think that the guy was probably desperate to get his pet back and that it was kind of crappy for me to profit from a lost animal. I still think that if you post a reward, you should pay it, and that the guy probably just wanted to save $500 and get the benefit of advertising a reward without paying it. Girl is threatening to send my end day to my entire family. My heart is racing and I can't stop it. I feel like I'm going to die. Today I got a text on Instagram from a girl who said she saw me from Bumble in one of my Snapchat. I being the idiot gave it. Things started to get steamy and she said she was 19 in a snap and I said I am 20 and then she sent a dirty photo. She asked for one back and I sent it back and this one a few times until she texted me all these photos of my PP in our chat saying she'll leak them on the internet and to everyone I follow on Instagram. I was terrified and she demanded money and made a group chat saying she has something important to say to everyone on Instagram. It included my family members and friends. I was shaking and my heart was racing. I'm scared and I first went to my sister and she said it's okay and I shouldn't give her money. I don't work because of university placement. I said no to giving money on Snapchat and she asked was I sure because I am. She leaked all my stuff on the group chat and said she'll send them to everyone I know and ruin my life and career. She made a Twitter post on me saying I sent an underage girl explicit photos and asked for intimate acts, which I obviously did not. I filed a report against her online and I'm scared about what my day will be like tomorrow. My family will know and I don't know what to say. What if she sends everyone my photos? I feel like the earth should just swallow me whole but I don't know what to do with my life now and what will happen tomorrow. What's something your child has done that you're going to talk about forever? I spent 10 years in a domestic violence relationship that involved having a baby kicked out of me at 5 months pregnant, a broken jaw and being electrocuted. What gave me strength to finally leave was when the police arrived and my 10-year-old was asked, why were they there? She responded, because daddy broke the window, not because daddy has just battered mummy into unconsciousness. I realized she thought the abuse was normal and the crime that night was the window being broken. It broke my heart to realize what I taught her to expect as normal. I finally threw him out, and had a very serious talk with my daughter about domestic violence never being acceptable and how wrong I had been to put up with it. Some years later, in one of her first serious relationships, she phoned me and asked if I could collect her to take to the hospital as her partner had hit her. She's 4 feet 11 inches, size 8, he was 5 feet 10 inches and built like a rugby player. Oh no, I thought, the pattern is repeating. Turns out he'd slapped her for the first time, not having his dinner ready, and she responded by defending herself. To the point she'd broke her finger. He then turned up in A&E sporting a split lip, a couple of black eyes and a broken nose. We eavesdropped as he said he'd fallen down some stairs even though my daughter had already explained to A&E why she was there and who he was. His bags were packed and left outside by the time he got back from the hospital, and all credit to my daughter, no amount of begging, crying or pleading changed her mind into taking him back. Her stance, that I wish I had, you hit me once, I'm hitting back in self-defense and then you're out of my life for good. I still smile thinking of what a strong young lady I've raised and the fact she is now happily married to a man who has never raised his hand to a woman. I took drastic measures to prove to my girlfriend that men are physically superior to women. My girlfriend and I moved in together last year. We live in a fairly safe neighborhood, but during the night there are some sketchy intoxicated men hanging around. My girlfriend, however, wasn't really scared to walk alone at night and would say that she's just as strong as those men and can take care of herself. My girlfriend is 5'10" and works out 3 times a week. She's indeed very strong compared to most women, but she was obviously delusional to think that her strength was comparable to that of an average man. She would even go as far as saying that if someone should be worried about walking alone at night, then it should be me as I'm a scrawny 5'9" man. I thought this was one of the situations where it would be better to just shut up than be correct, so I mostly stopped showing my concerns to her. Yesterday she went out with some of her friends and called me at 1 a.m. saying that she'll come home alone via public transportation. I told her that it's dangerous and I should come pick her up, but she insisted on coming by herself. I couldn't sleep till she came home an hour later. She was so angry at me for not trusting her that she can take care of herself. That was when I decided to demonstrate to her the disparity between the strength of men and women. She thought I was joking at first, but when she realized that I was dead serious, she happily took the opportunity to prove how wrong I was. I basically told her to ground me as hard as she could. Then I quickly got out of her grip and grounded her for several minutes till she surrendered. I didn't hold back and went into rage mode, swearing at her and rifling through her pockets, getting very up close to her and intimidating her as much as I could to try to emulate an attacker. She cried a lot throughout this whole time and I could also see the fear in her eyes, even though she knew very well that I would never hurt her. I humiliated her. I slept on the couch that night. She didn't want to talk about it in the morning and said that she's fine, but she's still obviously very upset about it. I feel horrible that I've shattered her confidence like that, and I don't think she will ever feel safe walking alone at night again. I took drastic measures to prove to my girlfriend that men are physically superior to women. My girlfriend broke up with me the next day over the phone. She wanted me to admit that I enjoyed seeing her cry, but I kept defending myself till she gave up. But deep down I knew that she was right. I'm not ashamed to say now that I got a stiffy from the feeling of overpowering her so easily and seeing her cry. I wanted to take it further in the moment, but chose not to. The next few days after the breakup were probably some of the worst days in my life. I thought that I've lost everything, including my self-respect. I decided to go to therapy and take a break from dating for the foreseeable future. I haven't heard from my ex till she gave me a call 2 days ago. We barely talked about the incident though, it was mostly just catching up and making peace with each other. She's doing pretty great actually. She's about to graduate with her master's and already has a job lined up. She started dating a new guy last month, and I can tell by the way she talked that she's very into him. She signed up for a swing class, which is something that she wanted to do for the longest time but didn't do it because of me, which is also where she met her new boyfriend. What she didn't do however is to sign up for a self-defense class, which honestly I kind of expected. Overall I was glad to hear how happy she sounded. I'm also doing pretty good myself, although I'm still on my break from dating and I don't see myself getting into another relationship for at least a year. Last month I also got to experience how my ex felt when I was overly worried for her safety. I went with my family to a trip in Naples, and while we had our apartment in a fairly safe part of the city, it was just a few blocks away from some sketchy alleys during the night. So when I craved for a good pizza during one of the nights there, my mom got very vocal about not wanting me to go to that place because of how sketchy some of the alleys on the way there looked like. I tried to convince her that she has nothing to worry about but to no avail, and then it dawned on me that this is probably how my ex felt when I expressed my concerns to her. Eventually, I decided to go to that place the next day during daytime instead. Was definitely worth it though. I'm genuinely happy with how things went for both of us, although I still miss her sometimes, and hearing her voice again just made me miss her even more. But I know that it'd probably be better for us to just move on with our lives separately. I also plan to continue with my therapy sessions, even though I feel completely fine by now. The reason is very simple, it's just to have someone that I can talk to without feeling judged.
Today I effed up by telling my new boyfriend that I was in love with him. My boyfriend and I have been dating for 9 months, he seemed like such a good man I would have never thought he could destroy me like this. All my past relationships were pretty toxic and I always seemed to get involved with insecure men with anger issues. When I met my current boyfriend, I couldn't believe how kind and patient he was. He was so sensitive and understanding, and we talked about our feelings and our past all the time, and he was always open about how he felt about me. He would text me sweet messages every single morning and night, and said that he had never felt this way about anyone else and that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with me. My feelings grew for him every time we saw each other, and I felt so comfortable telling him anything about myself or how I was feeling. We shared so much, and I still can't believe he was able to just throw me away like I was nothing. I could have never anticipated him causing me this pain. Everything happened the other night this week. He had a work party that was taking place on this fancy boat. We had a lot to drink and he had driven us there, so by the end of the night we decided to Uber home together. We walked out of the party, and we were at the front of the boat just holding each other and staring at the beautiful view of the cityscape. The summer night was warm, but we squeezed each other tight and kissed deeply. Everything just felt so perfect, so right in the moment. I stopped kissing him for a moment, and I looked into his eyes and told him that I loved him. I could just burst out in tears when I remembered this moment, and I wish I'd just forget it for the rest of my life. As soon as the word love escaped my mouth, my boyfriend's entire face dropped, and he literally pushed me off him. All he said was, "Why would you say that?" With this grossed out look on his face. I started getting nervous and stumbled over my words as I tried to explain to him how I felt. I told him I was sorry if I made him uncomfortable. He made a grumbling noise and said that it was manipulative for someone to say I love you before the other person had said it. He asked me why I was trying to make him look like an a-hole. At this point I felt like crying. I was humiliated and I said I'm sorry I said it in the first place. I shouldn't have said it. I did love him, but I didn't know what he wanted me to say in that moment. That's when he started to get really upset and even raised his voice. There were a couple of other partygoers on the boat deck near us, and they turned to look at his outburst. He started yelling at me that I shouldn't have even said it if I didn't really mean it. I just cried and kept my head down as he went on to call me crazy, weird, and a liar. He said I could take the Uber alone and to leave him alone for a while. He then stormed off, and left me there alone and crying with a bunch of strangers staring at me. It was one of the most humiliating moments of my life, and I don't even know if it's worth it to reach out to him. I'll never tell another man I love them again for as long as I live.
Did you ever get a bad vibe about one of your classmates in high school? Where are they now, and were you right about your feelings? We had a boy in class with us throughout our school career, but he was always something of a social misfit. He seemed embarrassed of his father, who was known to publicly berate him and sometimes hurt him with various objects. Looking back, he was a very unhappy boy, but as kids you aren't astute to this kind of thing. He also collected snakes, which ensured I would never befriend him due to my phobia of the things. He would bring venomous snakes to school for show and tell. I remember our teacher watching the presentation from the corridor and looking in through the glass window in the door. He was just too obsessed with these snakes, and it was as if they were his only friends. Then it happened. One night I was listening to my radio and heard his name being read out by the newsreader. We would have been around 19 years old by now, and he had joined the police force. He had come home to find his father in bed with the housekeeper, and promptly unholstered his service piece, and emptied it into his father. He was tried for his crime and no one ever heard from more of him again. No clue what his sentence was, but I suspect it all ended badly for this troubled soul. Have you ever met someone who seemed nice and normal, but there was just something about them that didn't seem right? Yes, a work friend. We worked together at WAMU, before it closed, and got along really well. She seemed a bit rough around the edges and normally not the type that I associate with, but we clicked well. I didn't want to be judgmental. I found out that she was homeless and lived in her car at night, so since it was only my husband and me raising our granddaughter with a 5-bedroom house, I offered her a place to stay. I told her not to worry about rent for the first month, but after that we would expect it. Was I stupid or what? She ended up yelling at my granddaughter for dumb things when she didn't think I heard. Daughter was only 7, and then would be sweet when I was around. Red flag. After the first week, she started creating problems with my husband and me by pitting us against each other. She would say things like, "And you know what else he said?" As if my husband was trashing me behind my back. Because of that, she created a number of arguments. I learned she was drinking in her room and I suspected drugs. My husband wanted her out of our house now. I went to work and talked to a few other friends who told me that she is using meth. They said to get her out of our house. After a week I asked her to leave, before I had to evict her, and had my daughter and her husband come over as a witness. By this time I didn't trust her. My manager at WAMU along with my supervisor also advised me to get her out, and gave me support while doing so. Once she left, she harassed me at work, made harassing phone calls at work and at home. She would go into an empty office and call my extension and hang up, and eventually she was caught. I went home one night and found my dog dead in the garage, and it was suspected she poisoned her, but I couldn't prove it. The manager became so concerned that she was eventually fired and security escorted her out. I will never do that again. Lesson learned. Why is it when you try to be nice, The person becomes a jerk. My family never let me cut my hair as a kid, so it grew to my knees. Now I'm almost perma-bald and my friend is demanding I wear a wig to her wedding. Just as a little background, I grew up in a very strict Christian family where I wasn't allowed to cut my hair ever, because supposedly hair is a woman's crown. It was down to my knees by the time I escaped at 18. Ever since then, I've either had a pixie, a buzz cut, or have been totally bald because I cannot stand the heavy feeling of long hair or all the brushing, washing, detangling after dealing with it for so many years. So that's a big reason I'm so stubborn about this issue. Also, all of my friends involved in the story have always known me as a girl with no hair. Right now I'm bald because I always shave my head completely for the summer. One of my good friends is getting married in August and she chose me to be one of her bridesmaids. Everything had been cool. She's always been the sweetest person and she showed no signs of going bridezilla before this until she called me up about 3 weeks ago and asked me if I could do her a favor and wear a wig to her wedding. She explained that she wanted all of her bridesmaids to match and that she wanted us all to look good in the pictures. I told her I really didn't want to get a wig and we've been on bad terms ever since. All of our friends are on her side saying it's just a wig, and it's not like she's asking you to grow out your hair for the wedding, so she's not the one being unreasonable. And I know I can be very stubborn sometimes, which I guess is the reason I'm posting here. The thing is, I don't know how many of you will be aware of this, but a wig that will actually look good and realistic is expensive. I've already paid for a bridesmaid's dress, new shoes, and plane tickets, as well as a small deposit for the person who's going to do our makeup. This wedding has already cost me a fortune. I could afford a wig if I wanted to, but do I really want to spend the money on something I'll never wear again when I've already spent a ton? Also, this is going to be on a plantation in Louisiana in August, so I'm already going to be hot and uncomfortable, and a wig will make things 1,000 times worse. My biggest reason, and this is why my friends are saying I'm the jerk, is the principle of the thing. I feel like it implies I look bad because I don't have hair, which I personally don't think is true. Is being bald so hideous that I'll ruin her pictures? Is she going to make her balding father wear a toupee? And I think that wanting us to match things is stupid. We're already wearing matching dresses, why isn't that enough? I know it's her day and we're supposed to make her happy, but isn't there a line? I've offered to wear a cute head scarf as a compromise if my bald head is that offensive, but she's not having it. I'm still in the bridal party and invited, but I don't know for how much longer, honestly. Am I wrong for not wanting to wear a wig? Edit just to add 2 things: she's not willing to pay or reimburse me for the wig in part or in full. Along with the headscarf, I'd also be willing to grow my hair out into a pixie cut. The wedding is at the beginning of August, so it'd still be really short though. Update 1. So first of all, thank you so much for your replies and advice. I'm writing an update post because things ended up working out well and because I want people to see my friend isn't actually a horrible person like people were saying she was. I texted her asking if we could work things out over a phone call. We don't live in the same state, so our relationship is over the phone and text. It turns out a lot of you were right and my friend was being pressured to ask me to wear a wig. Her future mother-in-law found out about my shaved head and pitched a fit. Like I said in a comment, my friend can be a huge pushover and this woman is apparently a nightmare. She's also paying for the vast majority of the wedding, so my friend felt even more broken about what she wanted. That's why she told me she couldn't pay for the wig. The mother-in-law refused too. Neither of them knew how expensive a good wig can be. My friend only found out when I told her over the phone. That's also why our dresses, shoes, and makeup weren't covered. It turns out my friend is mortified by what she sees as her mother-in-law making her look cheap and greedy. But she didn't want to tell us that because she's already embarrassed to be relying on her mother-in-law's money. Apparently it's her fiancé's family insisting on a huge extravagant wedding. That's why her reasons didn't ring true to me as well. She didn't want to hurt my feelings by telling me that her mother-in-law was being so judgmental of me, so she basically blurted out the first things that came into her head. She assured me she thinks I look great with short hair and apologized for making me think she thought I looked bad. I know people will question how I can believe her, but I've been friends with her for nearly 10 years and I give her the benefit of the doubt. We've been there for each other through a lot and really care about one another. I'm still side-eyeing the plantation wedding, but I didn't tell her that because she seemed so stressed out by essentially being bullied by her fiancé's family and I didn't want to pile on. I do know for a fact that she only wanted that venue for the big oak trees all over the property, which are admittedly beautiful. I did tell her that asking me as a mixed girl to wear a blonde wig could be seen as racially insensitive, and I explained why. She was horrified and apologized over and over sincerely. She wants to stand out from her bridesmaids in pictures, and she didn't even consider the racial implications of asking me because most of her bridesmaids are blonde. She's kind of oblivious to things like that, but the few times I've had to point out something she said could be hurtful, she's always been understanding instead of defensive. I decided I'm going to grow out my hair as much as possible for the wedding just to help her not get grief from her monster-in-law. It'll still be pretty short, so that's okay. She's fine with that too, except she was worried I'll still have to deal with snide remarks from her fiancé's family. I reassured her that after nearly a decade with short hair, I pretty much heard it all by the time we hung up. I felt way better, not only about the wedding, but about our friendship as well.
Having a miscarriage is not the same as losing a teenager. My son passed away in October at the age of 15. My life has completely fallen apart since then and I've never been in a lower place. I want to pass away, but I can't put my dad through the same thing I'm going through. Whenever someone I know, whether it's family, co-workers, friends, anyone, finds out about what happened, they obviously start telling me how sorry they are for my loss, which is fine, they're being nice, but so many people have continued that conversation with, I get how you feel. I had a miscarriage a few years back and I was depressed for a while after that. Look, I know miscarriages are sad, but my son wasn't an effing fetus. He had interests, a personality, a sense of humor. He was a fully fledged person. A fetus never had the opportunity to become a person in the same way a 15-year-old did. I don't care if this makes me a jerk. A miscarriage is not the same thing as losing a teenager, not even close. I had to sit through my cousin telling me about her miscarriage for about 10 minutes this afternoon during Christmas lunch, and I listened. I thanked her for her condolences. I didn't say anything about how unfair that comparison is, because I love her, but I wanted to scream at her. Just say you're sorry for my loss and move on. I don't want to talk to you about it or your miscarriage, especially not during Christmas lunch.
I thought my apartment was haunted. The truth is so much worse. Apartment 311 was a pleasant place to live at first. It had 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, and since I lived alone that meant I got to convert 1 bedroom into my own office space. It came with a handful of paintings already, so it didn't even have the off-putting liminal feeling that some empty apartments have. The only immediate downside I could tell from the start was that there was a slight smell in the living room from time to time. It wasn't anything too noticeable, but you would occasionally get a faint whiff of some sort of musty odor. I was living in apartment 311 for a couple weeks before I noticed anything was wrong. It started out with simple stuff, like various knickknacks being placed on the wrong shelves, snacks and small objects going missing, things like that. Once or twice I found the fridge left open. These things would only happen when I was asleep, and it made me feel like I was going crazy. There was no way anyone could be breaking into my apartment just to steal some useless crap and move around some collectibles. The door was locked whenever I went to bed, and even if someone hypothetically had the key, I always made sure to bolt the door as well. I considered getting some security cameras set up, but I balked at the price when I looked into that possibility. Though the apartment was admittedly cheap, between rent and utilities I still couldn't afford to set up an entire security system. I tried to put it out of my mind, assuming that maybe I was just sleepwalking, or getting up for a midnight snack and forgetting by the next morning. I'd never been an easy sleeper. I was often prone to night terrors and other disturbances, which had only gotten worse now that I was in an unfamiliar environment. Of all the sleep problems I've experienced, by far the least pleasant is sleep paralysis. It used to happen fairly rarely, maybe once every 2 to 3 months, but after moving into the apartment it became an almost weekly occurrence. Now, usually my sleep paralysis is fairly mild. I find myself unable to move, eyes open, and I find it difficult to breathe. Sometimes I feel like there is a presence in the room with me, but before I moved I'd never experienced any form of hallucinations, visual or otherwise. I'd never seen a ghost, monster, hag, or any other sort of entity while I was paralyzed. It was only ever a sense of dread and total paralysis of the body. That changed about the same time I noticed the missing food and misplaced objects. As usual, it felt like I had woken up, but couldn't move a single muscle. It was hard to breathe, and I had this awful feeling like I wasn't alone. I tried to calm myself down, to remind myself that I had been through this before, and it always wound up okay, but something felt different. It was then that I noticed the door to my bedroom slowly opening, inch by inch. I could hear the creak of the hinges as it swung inward. Someone or something was coming into my room. He peeked his head around first, dull eyes reflecting the faint glow of moonlight from my bedroom window. He was bald, with pale flaky skin. I wanted to scream when I saw his expression, but I was still a prisoner of my own body. The man had a forced, rictus grin on his face, chipped yellow teeth clenched tightly together, grinding against one another. I watched in horror as the rest of the man's body slowly passed into the room, tiptoeing as if he were creeping up behind someone in a cartoon. The man was utterly emaciated, almost skeletal in appearance, and covered in sores and pockmarks. He was stark naked and smeared in dirt and filth. I could do nothing but watch as he slowly inched ever closer towards me, until I could feel his hot breath upon my face. It smelled like the musty odor I sometimes detected in the living room. Not once did I see his expression change. He didn't even blink as he stared at me, and I could feel hatred radiating off of him like heat from a furnace. He just stood there, looking at me for what felt like hours. Eventually he turned around and slowly sneaked back out of the room, gently shutting the door behind him. A few minutes later I started to be able to move again, the paralysis wearing off as my body started to wake up properly. I had to call in sick to my job that day. The experience was such a shock to me that there was no way in hell I'd be able to get any work done. I spent a good hour just checking every room to make sure I was entirely alone. I searched in the closet, underneath the sinks, in my office, anywhere I thought someone could be hiding. When I found nothing, I managed to convince myself it was all a hallucination, that I was safe. Things continued about the same for a while after that. Objects still went missing from time to time. The smell in the living room stayed just as musty as it ever was, and about every week or so I'd have another sleep paralysis incident. Of course, now every time I did experience sleep paralysis, I'd have to see my unwanted visitor again. I named him Jimmy, to try and reduce the terror a little bit. Putting a silly name to a horrifying face helped lessen my fear slightly. As far as sleep paralysis hallucinations went, Jimmy wasn't too bad once I started to get used to him. He never touched me or sat on my chest like some people's nightmares did. He just stood and stared. It was still deeply unpleasant, mind you, but I felt lucky that it was a consistent kind of unpleasantness at least. Then I found the photograph. I noticed it underneath a pile of papers while I was doing some cleaning up, a picture of 2 women embracing in front of a waterfall. I didn't recognize either of the women, and I assumed it must have been from the previous tenant. I texted the landlord, Greg, and asked if he still had the old tenant's phone number so I could give her a call. He obliged, and within a few minutes I was calling her. She picked up after a couple rings, sounding slightly exasperated. Hello, this is Rebecca. Who is this? Hi, my name is Flora. I'm the current tenant of apartment 311. I think that you may have left a photograph behind when you moved. I was wondering if you'd want to pick it up or I could mail it to you or something. There was a long pause on the other end of the phone. Hello? I asked. You need to get out that apartment. You're not safe. I honestly didn't have any response but to laugh. Is this some kind of joke? I asked her between chuckles. I heard her sigh with frustration. It's not a joke. I'm serious. Things have been going missing, right? That got my attention. How do you know that? It happened with me too. My girlfriend and I kept noticing things being moved or disappearing while we were asleep. Little things mostly, snacks, trinkets, nothing major. Now, I never saw this, but my girlfriend swears one time when she got up in the middle of the night to get a glass of water she saw this naked man just staring at her. He was covered in sores and looked more like a corpse than a person. She woke me up and we called the police of course, but they didn't find anything. I think. Rebecca paused for a moment, choosing her words. What is it? I asked, increasingly panicked. I began to worry that Jimmy was more than just a simple hallucination. I think 311 is haunted. We asked around to some of the other residents, and apparently the last guy to live there just disappeared. Our best guess is that he must have died and his spirit just never left. My girlfriend is into some occult stuff, so she tried a cleansing ritual or something like that, but it didn't work. Things kept disappearing, and eventually we just decided to move. I hung up the phone. It was rude, sure, but I was just so shocked that I didn't know what to do. At the very least I began to understand why I got this apartment for so cheap. I found myself just sitting on the couch for a while, occasionally getting a whiff of the musty smell. I stared blankly at a painting on the wall, one of the ones which was already there when I first moved in. It depicted a woman in a white dress sitting underneath a tree reading a book. I couldn't tell what was making me so focused on it. It seemed utterly unrelated to what was happening. Eventually, I snapped out of it and went into my office to do some research. After a little bit of digging, I found out some information regarding the tenant who lived here before Rebecca, the one who disappeared. Apparently one of his coworkers put out a missing persons report 6 months ago. His name was Michael Hansen, and I gasped when I saw a photograph of him. He looked exactly like Jimmy, albeit not so emaciated and filthy. I hastily packed some of my things and made arrangements to stay at a friend's house for a couple nights, telling them that my apartment had a roach problem and the landlord needed to fumigate it. I called into work and gave them some sob story about an uncle dying, enough to get time off for a few days. With no more distractions from the ghost of Michael Hansen, I slept soundly on my friend's couch, unbothered by any sleep paralysis. The next 2 days were spent researching. I checked out dozens of books on folklore and the occult from the local library, scoured paranormal internet forums, and even watched a few episodes of some cheesy ghost hunting TV show. I was determined to figure out a way to put the spirit of Michael Hansen to rest. The stories were all wildly different, with countless potential solutions to my problem. Some sources said salt was a surefire way to banish spirits, others said iron was a good ghost repellent, but most simply said I should give up and move. However, one myth piqued my interest. According to some beliefs, the spirits of the unquiet dead could be tied to objects from their life, binding them to the place where the object resided. If the object which their soul was bound to was destroyed, it freed their spirit and they could move on to the afterlife. I remember the paintings. I had assumed that they were put there by the landlord, but it was just as possible that they were left behind by Michael. I arrived back to the apartment, determined to grab the paintings and burn them, laying Michael Hansen's soul to rest once and for all. I felt like some sort of hero, a badass monster hunter who saved the day with her intuition and a little bit of book smarts. One by one I pulled the paintings off the walls, putting them in a cardboard box. I made a mental note to buy some lighter fluid on the way to the empty lot where I planned to burn them. I approached the final painting, the one which showed a woman in a white dress beneath a tree. I pulled it off the wall and recoiled as the musty smell increased in intensity. Staring in confusion, I saw a small rectangular hole where the painting used to be, about 4 feet off the ground and 2 feet by 2 feet in length and width. I shuddered in fear, remembering that Michael's body was never found. Perhaps he was murdered, his corpse hidden in the walls by some unknown assailant? I nervously flicked on my flashlight, peered within the hole, and screamed. I ran out of apartment 311 as fast as I could before calling the police, sobbing with terror. I had been prepared to find a body, maybe cut up into little pieces and wrapped in duct tape. I was ready for death and decay and rot. There is something fascinating about ghosts, something somehow romantic about the notion that part of someone could live on even after death. There was nothing romantic about seeing the clenched tooth grimace of Michael Hansen, glaring at me with hate as he stood in the small section of hollow wall which he had been living in for the past 6 months. So what kind of music do you listen to? No, it's super embarrassing. Tell me, I promise I won't judge. Okay fine, I only really listen to Taylor Swift and Glee haha. Oof, you're right, that's horrifying. I think I'd die if my tastes were that mainstream. I only listen to less popular music, like Nirvana and Queen. How the heck is Queen not popular? I was always told to never look out of my window at night. I decided to anyway. Ever since I was small, I was told by almost everyone not to look out the window at night. Whenever I would ask why, I would receive a dull response. Something bad will happen, was the usual answer. I wasn't the only person raised with this rule. Every kid in my class was told the same thing, and all of us were equally as confused by it. I figured it was some stupid ploy my town had thought up, to keep kids from staying up late. That was until last year when Brody Heathens looked out the window one night. Brody thought the story was nothing but bullcrap, and he was determined to prove so. He told the entire school that he would look out his window that night, and tell us what happened the next morning. We were all excited, thinking that Brody was as brave as can be, going against our communal rule. I was excited to be at school that morning. I couldn't wait for Brody to arrive, and report on what had happened. He was late that day. He came into class looking tired, pale and sickly. At lunch, we all rushed to ask him what happened. He didn't say anything, only looked down at the pitiful ham sandwich in his hands. No matter how many times we asked, or how loud we asked, he wouldn't answer. A few people were worried, but most brushed this off, thinking that he was playing a joke. I didn't think he was joking. He looked genuinely affected. He was quiet that whole day, which was more than shocking, as Brody had always been a loudmouth. He didn't come that entire week. By now, everyone was concerned. On the second week of Brody not coming to school, we were all called into the assembly hall. There, the school confirmed that Brody had went through with S's side and that there would be a ceremony for him in the gym during lunch. We all knew that whatever he saw out the window that night must have driven him to do this. People's curiosity refused to let them leave the topic alone. Suzanne Walters was next. She looked out her window one night and ended her life less than a week later. Then it was Jack Richmond. He looked out his window too, and had used his dad's firearm to take his life 3 days later. 3 deaths in 1 month. Everyone was terrified, and we all knew that something was causing them to do this. Something was tormenting every person that looked out their window at night. I vowed that I would never do it. But today, I woke up to the sound of the rain. I rolled my head around, eyes darting to the window beside my bed. It took me a minute to wake up and realize what I was doing. When I did, I quickly tossed my head to the other side of my pillow. I was now facing the wall. Panic slowly started to rise in my chest. I lay silent in my bed. The sound of rain grows steadily louder. I waited for something to happen, but nothing did. After a few minutes of sweating and laying still as a statue, I rolled my head back out, peering back out to the sky. I started to calm down. It wasn't so scary. A confident feeling rose in me. I'm not sure why, or how this feeling began, but it was impossible to ignore. I lifted myself up from my mattress, my sheet sticking to my sweat-stained back. I poked my head over the side and looked out the window. There was nothing there. A few dim street lights flicked in the darkness, and a flash of lightning would illuminate the street, revealing nothing but puddles of rain, and blacked-out houses resting peacefully beside the sidewalk. Stupid, I chuckled to myself, turning my head to flop back down into my comforter. The day went on as normal, but something caught my eye just as I went back to sleep that night. Something was sitting in the corner of my room. I felt my heart freeze and stop. It was still pitch black in my room, so I couldn't tell what it was, but it looked like a person. They sat on the floor, knees pulled up to their chest, hands clutching their legs as their head was bowed low, face hidden behind the thighs. I couldn't look away from the figure, convinced if I did, it would jump up and rush me. I couldn't move, terrified that if I did, the figure would notice me. Slowly, the figure began to raise its head, bright orange eyes peering at me through the thick darkness. A cracking sound followed in pursuit. The figure rose to its feet. Once it was fully stood up, it was up to my ceiling. I didn't know what to do at that moment. I slowly inched my head towards my pillow, gently resting it against the fabric. I rolled over, slow as a snail, so I was facing my wall. The whole time, the figure stayed still, just watching me with its bulging orange eyes. I shut my eyes as tight as I possibly could. I couldn't stop the waterfall of tears from dripping down my face, although I did my best to be as quiet as possible, apart from the occasionally loud sniffle. I'm not sure how, but eventually, I fell asleep. I woke up the next day. The sun beamed into my room, and the figure was gone. I jumped out of my bed and ran downstairs. My parents were sitting in the dining room, and behind them stood the figure. I could see it fully now. Its skin was a dry, muted gray, and it had 2 little holes in its face for nostrils. Wispy tufts of hair crept out from its scaly scalp. It had a long skinny body. I could see its ribs poking out of its stomach. It had short, stubby almost dinosaur-like arms, with nails as long and as sharp as knives protruding from its fingers. Its orange eyes glared at me, while it smiled, big and commercially white teeth poking out from its gray, chapped lips. "Mom," I muttered, baffled at how my parents couldn't see the figure looming behind them. "Yes, sweetie?" She answered in a chipper and unbothered tone. "What's up, bud?" asked my dad. The figure cracked its neck down so its head was looking down at my father, eyes rolled up to the edges of its eyelids, gazing at me. "You're looking a bit pale," my dad said, worried. I wondered if I should tell them. It was obvious they couldn't see it. I choked down my fear and spoke with a hoarse voice. "I'm fine, just tired." I sat down at the table. The thing looked at me the entire time I ate. I followed me to school, diving behind cars and trees every time I tried to look at it. I sat down in class. The thing was standing at the back of the class, watching me. The hair stood up on the back of my neck. Its eyes felt like they were stabbing me. My friend Dave sat down next to me during lunch. "Dude, are you okay? You've been quiet today," he said. I looked up at him. The creature was standing behind him waving its knife-like fingers around in a strange pattern. Was this the thing that Brody had seen? The thing that drove him to end himself? I knew it would try to do the same to me. I wouldn't let it. I looked out my window last night. Dave went pale. "There's a creature following me now. Nobody can see it but me. I think it drives you to take your own life. I'm not sure why, but it won't do that to me." I looked up at the creature. It was now snarling at me. It reached its hand up and clapped it down on Dave's head. I watched Dave freeze, and his eyes slowly rolled to the back of his head. I jumped to my feet, a nauseous pit rising in my stomach. Dave fell to the ground, staining the grass with blood. "Dave," I shouted. "What?" His voice came from behind me. I turned. Dave was standing there, alive. But he was also lying on the floor and dead. I felt dizzy. I couldn't keep my head straight. My head throbbed as I tumbled to the floor and blacked out. When I woke up I was in a dark room. There was nothing in the room but a bed. The creature was lying on top of me face inches away from mine. I wanted to scream but nothing would leave my mouth. Slowly the creatures bent down, drool spilling onto my face and into my mouth. He opened his jaw wide, his jagged white teeth ready to rip me to shreds. Alex. I opened my eyes. I was lying in a hospital bed, bandages wrapped around my temple and N4 pumping fluids into my body. My mother was sitting beside me, clutching my wrist. "You're awake, you're finally awake," she cried. What my dad said next made my blood run cold. "Why would you drink that rat poison? What were you trying to do? And yourself?" I looked up at the small window on my hospital room door. The creature stood there, grinning as its glowing orange eyes pierced right through me. "Want a professional favor from me, then act like an entitled brat and embarrass me in front of my boss? I'm calling your mom. I am a seamstress. Before getting this job, I did freelance sewing jobs for extra cash and to maintain my skills. Since I've been hired, I'm not allowed to side gig services offered by the shop and I would be immediately fired if my boss found out. This is my dream job, and I will not, under any circumstances, jeopardize this opportunity." So a good friend called me to ask if I could help her son, a grown man, with an alteration that I do a ton of at work. Said he needed a new zipper on his jacket. I explained that I'm not freelancing from my living room anymore and to have him come by the store for an estimate and we'd get him sorted out. He comes in and is told word for word by my boss like we discussed the other day, this would be $35 plus $5 to $8 for the new zipper. The jacket in question is actually a Carhartt winter work coat, and replacing that zipper is not the same 20-minute task as turning a pullover hoodie into a zip-up. Also, even if I were still doing sewing jobs from home, I don't have an industrial machine capable of making the job easy and I would have charged him at least $50, so $35 is an extremely reasonable price. Well, I didn't know that he had already been in a few days before and been told the same price, which is apparently when he got mad and called his mom to ask if I could do it for him. When he heard the price wasn't changing just because I'm friends with his mom, he started with $35 for a zipper is outrageous. My mom could do it for so much cheaper. I can't believe you'd charge that much for just a zipper. Blah 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 and other general rudeness. Side note, his mom didn't know it was a Carhartt, doesn't even own a sewing machine and would have to do it by hand, and he would have to mail it to her in a different state, so he storms out and everyone just looks at me and says, "Well, that was embarrassing," and we all get back to work but I am seething. How dare he come into my job and show his ass like that after having his mom call me as a favor? Oh, hell no. So I called his mother back and explained exactly what he'd been told and how he acted towards us. She said he told her that they'd quoted him $60 for the new zipper, so now he's been caught lying, as well. She said he will definitely be hearing from me about this. I did not raise him to be such a butthole and that behavior is unacceptably rude. Don't even worry about him. I'm going to handle it. I've known them for years, so I know he's not escaping the come to Jesus conversation. So I hope he enjoys getting royally chewed out by his parents and still not having a functioning zipper. I'm looking forward to when he inevitably comes crawling back to apologize after he finds out his mom won't be hand sewing that zipper for him, and the one or two other places around that do alterations charge a fair bit more than we do. What's the greatest lengths you've gone to hide something from your parents? I was dared to cover the head of my schlong with cayenne pepper, then close the extra skin over top of it. I was 14 at the time and was in a situation that would have looked really bad to my foster parents. Ironically, about 5 minutes after I did the deed, my foster parents pulled up to the house. So everyone was playing scattered. But I had a whiner full of cayenne pepper and it was burning like a lot. But it gets worse. My friend that was over for the night decides to do it as well because he's ride or die. We both were in so much pain and regretted everything. So we decided we were gonna go get cleaned up. Me first because I did it first. Except for one kind of big problem. My foster dad would get angry if he tried to shower after he had gone to bed cause the bathroom was right next to his room and the pipes were extremely loud. He also always went to bed right after showering. By the time I got upstairs to get cleaned up, he was already in a towel moving towards the only bathroom. I had to tell my foster mom I was doing the pee-pee dance cause I was moving around so much and looked so uncomfortable. I couldn't tell my foster parents the truth because that would involve them knowing that we were playing truth or dare. I went outside to pee but actually just left my wang hanging in the cool wind to help with the burning sensation that wouldn't go away. I also tried to scoop some of it off, but if I touched it too hard it was just burning even more. Then I got the genius idea to grab 2 glasses of water, take them down for my friend and I, and we would get cleaned up downstairs in my room, then just dump the cayenne wine or water out the window. I get the water downstairs and my friend is already in my room using one of my deodorant sticks on his junk to try and counter the burning. I couldn't really either cause I was focused on cleaning myself up. I hand my buddy his glass and we clean ourselves up to the best of our abilities, dump out the cayenne wine or water, and then go to bed. The next morning we go upstairs for breakfast and bring our glasses up. I went to put mine in the sink and my foster dad said don't grab another glass, we don't need any more dirty dishes than we already have. I replied, oh no, I'm just washing hours before dinner. Why? You just had water, right? It's not even dirty. I just said, yeah, I guess you're right. We both filled our glasses with water. We had to pay for water from the town, so not wasting water was one of my foster dad's #1 rules. We both drank from the cayenne glizzy glasses.
At my fiance's work party, a girl he's been training pulled me aside to talk to me about the way he is at work. I've been with my fiance for 3 years, we're getting married in September, I've always had bad relationships, and I never thought I'd end up with someone who I could trust implicitly and not question their loyalty. I wanted it badly but didn't think I would have it. For a long time now, I felt that trust with my fiance, and it's such a good feeling to feel so secure in our relationship and not be constantly questioning what we are or where I stand with him, etc. I know he's been training a new girl at work, he's told me a little about her, and I've just been so proud of him that he's moved up enough in his company to be training someone, that I haven't thought much of it. But at this work event tonight, I met the girl he's been training and she was pretty drunk. She came over to where I was sitting and told me she wanted to talk to me about my fiancé, and I gotta admit my heart dropped a little. She started off by saying that there's a lot of weird people in their office, but that my fiancé isn't one of them and she really appreciates that. She then went on to say that if he isn't talking about work then he's talking about me, and that he is head over heels in love with me and makes that evident daily. She told me how much she loves it when he talks about me, that it gives her hope she'll find someone like him someday. She said she's going through a divorce currently, after a very abusive relationship. She said she is so used to feeling objectified and sexualized, but that my fiancé doesn't make her feel that way at all. She told me he doesn't look at her or any other girls in the office in that way and that he is so respectful, encouraging, and supportive, and just a breath of fresh air. She told me over and over how happy she is we're together, and my heart was just bursting the whole time. At one point, namely the beginning of our relationship, I would have felt so threatened by this. I wasn't secure enough in myself to hear things like this from another girl and not feel insanely jealous, but I was blown away tonight because I didn't feel jealous or threatened in the slightest. I just felt overwhelmingly proud of him for being the man that he is and glad that he makes his female coworkers feel safe. Yes, it's the bare minimum for a guy to treat a girl with respect, but unfortunately, guys don't always do that, in my experience. It makes me so thankful that he's mine and I'm his, and that he has such a good heart and soul. It makes me really glad to know that this girl is able to go to work and feel safe around him and know that he isn't going to sexualize her or put her in an uncomfortable position. I'm proud of myself too for the growth I've undergone over the course of our relationship as well. Soon after we started dating, I went to surprise him at work and flipped out when I walked in and saw him talking to a girl in a proximity that I deemed too close. I cringed so hard looking back on it, but it's where I was at the time. We both had issues to work through and we've both gone through therapy, both together and individually, and I feel like we're at such a strong point now. The girl and I bonded over some shared interests and shared dislike of a few other people at our table, so I think I actually may have gotten a friend out of it too. And I know someone will comment that they're just going to ditch me and run away together, and that's fine if you want to think that, but I know my relationship and I'm really happy, so just know in advance it won't get to me. I just hope this doesn't come across as bragging. It's absolutely not my intention. I just have had a few drinks and my heart's been exploding all night, and I just needed to type it all out and get it off my chest, so thank you.
What did your parents teach you as a kid that you didn't realize was actually F-ked up until you were older? As I sit here, reflecting on my childhood and the lessons my parents imparted upon me, I can't help but feel a twinge of resentment and confusion. You see, my parents, bless their misguided souls, taught me something that I didn't realize was utterly effed up until I reached adulthood. It all started innocently enough, with their relentless emphasis on the importance of appearances. They drilled into my impressionable little mind the notion that your worth as a person is directly tied to how you present yourself to the world. Oh, how naive I was to believe that this lesson was just about dressing well and maintaining a tidy appearance. Little did I know that it would manifest into something far more twisted. As a teenager, I noticed my parents constantly obsessing over their social standing, always scheming and maneuvering to be accepted by the so-called elite. It became a sick game of appearances, where their true selves became buried under layers of pretense and societal expectations. They taught me that conforming and putting on a facade was the key to success and happiness. But it wasn't until I grew older and started questioning their teachings that I realized how truly effed up this mindset was. I saw firsthand the toll it took on their happiness and authenticity. They were living in a constant state of anxiety, afraid to be their true selves for fear of judgment and rejection. And so, I rebelled. I shed the shallow expectations of appearances and started embracing my individuality. I ventured into a world where authenticity reigned supreme, where people were celebrated for their quirks and flaws. It was liberating, to say the least, and I finally felt like I could breathe. But, just when I thought I had escaped the toxicity of my parents' teachings, life threw a curveball. It led me down a path that intertwined with a dark underworld I never knew existed. A close friend of mine, let's call him Jake, introduced me to a secret society hidden in the depths of the internet. It was a world of decadence, taboo, and the ultimate rebellion against societal norms. Within this clandestine community, I discovered a secret that would rock me to my core. It was a trove of spicy videos that had been unlawfully obtained from a high-security facility. My mind reeled as I realized the implications, but curiosity got the best of me, and I delved deeper into this forbidden vault. One day, fueled by a mix of intrigue and adrenaline, I stumbled upon a video that made my blood run cold. There, on a familiar bed, lay my girlfriend engaging in explicit acts with an unidentified individual. It felt like a punch to the gut, a betrayal that shook the foundation of my fragile world. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. A sense of blind rage consumed me, but instead of succumbing to vengeful instincts, I channeled that energy into uncovering the truth. Who had violated our privacy? How did this security breach happen? Determined to get answers and protect the ones I loved, I embarked on a harrowing journey filled with danger, deception, and unexpected allies. It was a race against time, as I navigated the treacherous labyrinth of deceit, inching closer to the elusive culprit who had shattered our trust. But before I could uncover the full truth, my world took another sharp turn. A cryptic message arrived, hinting at a sinister conspiracy that extended far beyond my girlfriend's infidelity. The stakes were raised, and I found myself caught in a web of organized crime and corruption that threatened everything I held dear. I soon realized that this was no ordinary breach of privacy. It was a carefully orchestrated plot, a malicious scheme concocted by a powerful organization. I had stumbled upon a secret that could topple empires and bring down governments. I was in way over my head, but I was determined to get to the bottom of this. My journey took me to the far corners of the globe, from the slums of Rio de Janeiro to the bustling streets of Tokyo. As I uncovered more clues, I felt like I was getting closer and closer to the truth. But just when I thought I was on the brink of a breakthrough, my investigation came to an abrupt halt. I had been ambushed by a group of ruthless mercenaries, and I was taken captive. I was thrown into a dark, damp cell, and for the first time, I felt truly scared. I was at the mercy of my captors, and I had no idea what would happen next. Would I be tortured for information? Would I be sold off to the highest bidder? Or would I be silenced forever? My fate was uncertain, but I refused to give up. I had to find a way out of this living nightmare, and I had to find out who was behind this sinister plot. I had to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. I had to find out who was responsible for tearing my world apart. And so, dear reader, my story must hang on a precipice, with the truth dangling just out of reach. Will I unravel the mystery and expose the masterminds behind this terrible violation? Or will the truth consume me, leaving me shattered and broken? Only time will tell. Brace yourself, because this wild ride is far from over.
Bro, why are you so mad at me just because I didn't want to play a comp with you, you fucking fat Cheeto-smelling little cunt? You were begging to play with Frugo just because she's got a sweet little voice. My fucking bad, I don't sound like an ooh-woo little bitch. I will literally shit in your Weetabix, mate, fucking pedophile. You want me to sound like a kid? Oh my god, ew, is this better? I'll play comp with you, Pappy. Shut the fuck up, you fucking pedophile little cunt. Coming into my fucking party, you think you're gonna talk to me like that? Fucking creepy little cunt.
My husband's ex is doing everything to break us up. When my stepson was 12 years old, I married his father. His mother was legit crazy, cluster B narcissistic personality disorder. I've been with my husband since my stepson was 5 years old, so this was not a new relationship, or a quick rush in marriage. However, from the day I met my stepson's mother, she has hated me, and has done everything possible to interfere with our lives, including bad-mouthing me and my husband in front of him in every conversation they had. My husband and her were never married. In fact, they had only dated a month or two before he realized she was crazy and broke things off. Unfortunately, she was already knocked up by then. I truly believe she got pregnant on purpose to try and trap my husband, and when it didn't work, she did everything possible to interfere with his custody time, relationships, etc. But let's get back on track. After fighting for custody for several years, and the awful court system that doesn't recognize emotional abuse as abuse, we shared custody 50-50 during his youth. When we requested our vacation time so he could attend, and be in, our destination wedding, she did everything she could to stop it. In the end, we had to pay an additional $6,000 just to get a judge to force her to sign the passport document, and allow him to go on our week-long vacation, despite the court order already stating we're entitled to 2 weeks vacation a year. A few months after the wedding, we decided to relocate to our hometown to be close to family, as we had 2 other small children of our own, and it was hard living so many states away with no family. After another $30,000 in court costs, we were awarded primary physical custody and my stepson was able to move in with us, but his mother did everything in her power to stop it. 3 months after we moved, she relocated herself to another state, despite all her arguments as to why she and my stepson needed to stay in that area. My husband and I have been married for 4 years now, and as of a year ago my stepson no longer visits his mother. He still talks to her on the phone a few times a month, however most conversations end up being terminated by him as she continues to badmouth us, his siblings, and him. As a mother I couldn't imagine what it would be like to not have a relationship with my children, or my own mother, but I also did not grow up crazy or with a crazy mother. I know it must hurt my stepson that he doesn't have a good relationship with his own mother, but he couldn't be a better, happier kid now that he doesn't have to put up with that emotional abuse on a daily basis. My neighbor has been cheating on his fiancée for the last 8 months and I think I accidentally told her. I 26 live in a complex where I'm lucky enough to be at least civil with all my neighbors. We all help each other out and if someone needs anything we don't hesitate. At least I felt lucky until about a week and a half ago. Our complex is pretty dated and it being in the middle of college campus area doesn't help. I live below a couple who I get along with pretty well. The girl in the relationship I'll call Elle I talk to regularly, as she is usually getting home in the evening when I'm taking my dog on his last walk. 9 times out of 10 leaders will join in with me and walk around the block where we chat and she vents about work and I do the same. We both agree it's the best part of our day. Elle's fiancé who we will call T works the opposite schedule as her. As he works days and he's usually home by the time Elle is getting ready to go to work. Elle let me know this was temporary as they are adjusting to new jobs and she's waiting for opportunity to work day shift at her job. Well in the last 8 months or so as Elle leaves around 2:30 in the afternoon, and not long after I started noticing this girl who comes by heads up the stairs and shortly after I hear the door above me shut. Like I mentioned our complex is pretty dated so the walls are pretty thin and if you even slam a door too hard you'll feel it. T has a habit of shutting the door loudly, so I know she's entering that particular apartment. At first I thought maybe she was his sister, as I knew he had 3, but then the visits became regular, and around this time I got a new schedule, so I was home well around this time. I noticed that said girl was gone always before Elle got home. And she never made eye contact with me if I saw her in the walkway. About 2 months ago, maybe more, T was carrying up some groceries from our garage and happened to drop his wallet. I was pretty busy at the time, so I picked it up and told myself I'd give to either him or Elle while I get home, and I happened to see said girl as she's heading up the stairs, so I stop her and hand her his wallet. She stops me, and with a very red face and shaky voice she goes, I don't know him. Mind you, this whole time she wouldn't look me in the eye. That's when my intuition told me that this definitely wasn't his sister if she was lying. So very calmly I say, what do you mean? You're his sister, right? I see you go in there all the time. I'm not exaggerating when I say this girl literally pushed me out of the way and left the way she came from and didn't say a word. I knew something was up. So I went up the stairs, knocked on the door, where T answered all too eager. Now, I think this is worth mentioning about myself. I don't condone cheating. I grew up in a home where my father constantly cheated on my mother and I myself was cheated on. It destroyed me. So when I saw the smile on T's face disappear as he realized I wasn't who he was expecting, something in me triggered but still kept my composure. I looked at T and said, sorry, you were probably expecting your friend. I tried handing her your wallet, you dropped it earlier, but she must have forgotten something because she went back towards the front. Tell Elle I say hi, T said. Thank you, as I watched his mind race. Well, since then I'm assuming they talked to each other because the visits became less regular, but I still caught her coming, but she started taking the long way to get to his apartment. Mind you, I have a Ring camera, so from time to time I'd see her crossing the courtyard. This whole time I thought maybe I should tell Elle, but strangely enough our walks became less regular, and when we would see each other T was around. Again, this gut feeling would never leave me. Well, fast forward to a week ago. Like I mentioned before, Elle and I talked regularly, so I know her work schedule. It's a Sunday night, her day off, when I start hearing banging and the loudest moaning I have ever heard coming from above me. I naturally assumed it was Elle and T getting on, as they are usually pretty loud. I don't think much of it but put in my headphones and start cleaning, thinking maybe said mystery girl is gone with the wind. Well, the next day Elle catches me on my last walk and asks to join. We are about halfway with our walk when we start talking about hot time, and I jokingly and stupidly say, yeah, tell me about it, you two were louder than normal yesterday, to which Elle stops dead in her tracks and goes, what do you mean? I worked yesterday for some extra cash, so I explained to her what I heard. Elle immediately excused herself and bolted ahead of me and left me to finish the walk on my own. Immediately I knew what I had done. It's been almost 2 weeks since then and I haven't seen her. Her car hasn't been in the garage and T won't even look at me when we see each other. Deep down I knew this was coming, just wish it wouldn't have been me.
What are the best conversation starters you know? Did you know you smell different when you're awake? Would it be weird to feed a cow its own milk? Would you rather change genders every time you sneeze, or not be able to tell the difference between muffins and babies? What is your favorite shape of pasta noodle? Want to start a conversation? You ever peel your grapes when you eat them? If you could speak to your past self, what year would you choose and why, and what would you tell them? Hey, I just met you, and this is crazy, but here's my number, so call me maybe? Remember Laurel or Yanny? Which one did you hear? What is your favorite dinosaur?
What is the dumbest thing you've said that you're willing to admit to? A guy got in the elevator pushing a double stroller. In one half of the stroller was the tiniest little newborn baby I've ever seen in my life. The other half was covered with a baby blanket. I wondered if he had newborn twins, or if he had one newborn and one toddler. Unfortunately, what came out of my mouth was, are they both the same kind? In Paris, I said bon noir to a black man who had just made me a crepe. It was night time and I was just trying to say good night. Bon noir means good black. I was trying to go for bon nuit. Me when I was 17 getting pulled over. Officer, so, you weren't wearing your seatbelt, right? Wink. Me, I was wearing my seatbelt, but I was speeding. I'm going to try this one more time. I didn't see you wearing your seatbelt, which is not a moving violation, as opposed to speeding, which is. Understood? No, I was wearing my seatbelt, officer. Okay, you were speeding. Here's your ticket. I explained it to my parents later and they said, you may be an idiot, but at least you're honest. Crossing the border back into America from Mexico, sweating bullets because all my paperwork and ID got stolen, and a border guard says, everybody in here American? I reply, si senor. I told my girlfriend she looked like a hot version of Gollum. At the store I work at, we require a government-issued photo ID for returns. This is in a college town, so a lot of customers are international students and use passports. A customer came in with a return and used his passport from Korea. I asked him if it was north or south and it took me at least 20 seconds to realize why he was staring at me like I was an absolute idiot. She forgot to put on her pants. Before you ask. No. I am not sure if I was happy or upset about the little preview I received, haha. So my son had left a toy or two at his playdate the other night, as he often does. Sometimes I like to believe he does it on purpose just to get me out of bed. The main child he does his play dates with is the child of my wife's friend. My wife and her friend are very close, for the record. This will matter later, so remember it. So anyway, right before I left the house I had let my wife know that I was headed out and where I was going. We exchanged goodbyes after she said she'd let her friend know I was headed over. When I arrive at her house and knock on the door I hear footsteps going away from the door. I presume one of the older children looked through the peephole and went to get one of the parents. Not too long after, footsteps are heard and approaching the door. Then the door started to unlock and for some reason I got kind of nervous. I had to remind myself I am a grown man waiting to pick up a toy. Anyway, my wife's friend, we'll call her Katie, Opens the door. To my surprise, she's got no pants on. Me being the loyal man that I am, I maintained eye contact, as best as I could. I can't even lie, and she is just speaking to me as if nothing is wrong. I cough and look down to signal that she's not wearing any pants or even a towel, and she asks something wrong? I was speechless at that point. Right before I could answer, I noticed my wife, Alyssa, was calling because my ringtone was going off. I get my phone from my pocket and Katie snatches the phone with her manlike strength. Right before she did, she was saying, "Oh, is that Alyssa? Let me talk to her." Not to be that guy, but part 2 if this does somewhat well. It only gets better from here, thank me later. She forgot to put on her pants. So, after my wife's pantless friend snatched my phone, she immediately taps the answer button and gets to talking. My wife is wondering where I was and why another woman picked up my phone. I didn't even care for all that. I was just hoping the FaceTime call didn't show 2 specific things. 1. My very visible scared/nervous face. And 2. Katie's exposed legs. I'm not a very religious guy, but it seemed God was trying to tell me something because of what happened next. The phone vibrated and she simply was not expecting that, I suppose, and she just fumbles it. First it fell at an angle where it showed her legs, and then when it finally landed on the ground, all you saw was my dumb face in absolute shock. Let's just say I stopped by the bar before going home. Once I got home, I was prepping before I knocked, and about 2 minutes into my prepping, my wife just abruptly opened the door. She grabbed me by the ear, dragged me inside, and just started blurting every curse word available in the English dictionary. I was staggering with all of my words by the time she finally stopped. She went for a slap, but I learned all my mom's combinations when I was younger, so you best believe I evaded it. If you know, you know. Thankfully, after evading, I managed to spit out the words. I didn't do anything. She went from angry wife to gentle wife, the wife I married. I explained everything, and she was on the couch and admitted how she may have made a fool of herself. I was clowning her afterwards because she didn't even take much accountability, but at the end of the day, that's my wife. Alyssa told me days later that she hashed it out with her friend Katie. I don't know exactly what happened, but I'm willing to bet that it wasn't all love. Telling my brother's fiancée that we don't owe her a family, am I the a-hole? My stepbrother Nico has recently gotten engaged to a woman named Jenny after dating for 2 years. We all tried to welcome her, especially when we found out that she grew up in the foster care system and didn't have a family. We tried to get to know her, but she seemed to want an instant, intimate connection rather than building one. Me and my younger stepsister, Chelsea, decided to push through regardless of her neediness, but our parents have also expressed concerns. Ever since she met us, she's been trying to insert herself into pictures, family disputes, and social events. She has absolutely no boundaries. We've all talked to Nico about this so many times, even sitting him down as a family, and he keeps saying he'll talk to her, but nothing changes. And it's only become worse since the engagement. She tried to make me her maid of honor, demanded my mother throw her a bridal shower, started calling my parents mom and dad even though they asked her not to, and reached out to distant family members that we don't even talk to tell them about the engagement. Last week we were all staying at our parents' place. Jenny, Nico, and my boyfriend were the only ones who weren't up yet, as the rest of us were in the kitchen. Chelsea, my mom, and I were talking about taking a weekend trip. Jenny came in, having overheard us saying it sounded like fun, and proceeded to invite herself along. I was pretty annoyed by this and said she couldn't just invite herself. Jenny asked why she wouldn't be invited, and I told her that just because she's marrying Nico doesn't give her a blanket invite to every single thing the rest of his family does. Jenny got upset and said she would really like to be included in our family, since it was the only one she knows and she doesn't have a proper family. I told her that while I knew that and we all sympathize with her, that doesn't mean we owe her a new family. The whole room became dead silent and Jenny got up, making her way back upstairs. She didn't come out for the rest of the day, but Nico came down to chew me out over what I said. Our parents defended me, saying he had an opportunity to talk to Jenny and he didn't. He and Jenny left the same day, and he's now only keeping low-level contact with everyone. Every time I've spoken to him since then, he's told me that I went way too low with what I said to Jenny and that I've set her back mentally, which has left her feeling really down mentally. I do feel bad, but I also feel like Jenny has constantly overstepped. We're all open to a relationship with her. But she's never really made a genuine effort to build relationships with us. She just decided that she was entitled to them, which I think isn't fair. I don't know if I should reach out to Nico or Jenny with a more sincere apology, which I'll only do if I'm really the one who screwed up here. I don't want to be the reason Nico stops talking to us. I just feel like he dropped the ball by letting it get to this point. And that I shouldn't really be held accountable for lashing out at her when it's been building up for quite some time. I left my wife, because she terminated our pregnancy based on a psychic's reading. I, 34 male, have been married to my wife for 8 years. We have a 6-year-old together. My wife was also pregnant. My wife's very spiritual, and I'm not very knowledgeable on the things she enjoys because I grew up strictly religious, but if it's fun to her, I never minded as long as I wasn't involved. When my wife was pregnant with our first child, she went to see a psychic to get a reading on our baby. The psychic predicted correctly it'd be a boy, with blonde hair, which isn't hard to tell because my wife has blonde hair. She also got a reading on herself a year before she met me and the psychic said she would find the love of her life soon. Basically, my wife went this time for our second child and the psychic freaked out and said this baby would grow up to do horrible things and hurt many people, living a life of crime and cause blood to drip of the innocent. Some real horror movie crap. My wife believed her and went and made an appointment for an abortion without notifying me. When she told me she had booked the appointment, I tried to talk her out of it, which she agreed, then went and had it secretly done with her sister. Basically, I packed up myself and left to go stay with my mother. I told her we were through, and I'd be back for my son, but I didn't want to speak to her besides that. I lost a child we tried for months to conceive, all because of a psychic. My wife said I was leaving her at a time she needed me the most, and how horrible of a person I was because it was her body and her choice. She then accused me of abandoning my family because of the control I was lacking over her body. Am I in the wrong for leaving her over this? Today I effed up by accidentally getting frisky with my cousin at a family wedding. So this happened about 18 months ago, or somewhere in the vicinity of 18 to 20 months. I still get flack from this from both family and friends. So, the setting, my uncle's wedding. It's around autumn and my uncle by my mother's side, from an exceptionally large family, this is relevant, is getting married for the second time. Now my family is very large. My mother has 3 brothers and 5 sisters, all with children of their own, and some even with children of their own now. The wedding isn't what I would describe as large, pretty much encompassing just family and close friends. All in all, there can't have been more than 50 or 60 people there, and around 60%, at a rough estimate, or so are related by blood to me. They make up the majority is what I'm trying to say, and many are spread over whom I have only briefly met, or in some cases, never met. Well, you can see where this is going. For reference, I would be around mid-17 in this story, with the age of consent in my country, UK, being 16. The girl, who we shall call Isla, was 22 or 23. Well, at the reception, I am having a good time with my sister, parents and cousins. Dancing, heavily indulging in drinking etc. Just generally enjoying myself as it is rare for large family gatherings for us for obvious reasons. A girl I don't recognize begins to dance with me on the, very crowded, dance floor. She's older than me clearly, but I thought maybe 19 or 20. Anyway, we start dancing, touching etc. She twerks on me a little, I grind a bit and I presume nobody noticed due to accumulated intoxication and crowdedness around where we were. One things leads to another, we start kissing and she asks me if I want to go upstairs, which I correctly take to mean her room in the hotel. It was a hotel wedding. I, of course, being a hormonal teenage boy, still am, jump at the opportunity and say yes. I should say this wasn't my first time or anything and by this point I carried condoms around in my wallet when I went out and knew I would be drinking. So we proceed to discreetly, or so I think, take our leave, both intoxicated, obviously, but not to the point of not being in control of our actions, or stumbling around / blackout etc. I get to her room, a bit of excited talk, and clothes come off. All is going well. Now, I should say that all this time I'm assuming this girl is a relative, or perhaps friend? Of the bride. Oh boy, I was in for a shock, because, as it turns out, she thought the same of me. As we were cleaning up, so to speak, we begin a little small talk when before had mostly just been purely intimate. She eventually asks how I know the bride. Let us call her Emma. I stop, thunderstruck, the realization slowly creeping up on me and oh, the horror. I laugh it off, hoping, in vain, she is joking and state I am the son of, insert mother's name. The shock is palpable on who I then realized is my cousin's face as she was putting her bra back on. She sort of freaks out and says she's the estranged daughter of one of my uncles who's had a troubled life, whom she had very recently reconnected with. I did not know this. We essentially collectively let out a F. From there we got dressed quickly and decided to never reveal this major cock-up to a soul and hope to God we had not been noticed, alas. We decided it would be best if she were to leave first, and that I would follow around 5 to 10 minutes later. Well I do. She leaves first, and I just kind of stand around in the hallway on my phone freaking out for a short while until I decide enough time has passed to erode suspicion. Well, first thing I see when I get down is the look of pure disappointment on my mother's face, the stupid effing grin on my father's and half my cousin's faces and my sister looking in disgust, as though she was watching a particularly repulsive sea slug. One of my cousins whom I am close to pats me on the back, shaking his head and laughing his absolute head off. I know I am defeated then and quietly take a seat expecting the utter bollocking I will later receive from my family. My elderly 90-year-old grandmother was there for F's sake, and word was not quiet. I didn't see Isla or her father again that reception and later found out she told him and he took her home, not to the hotel she had booked, by way of taxi. So yeah, I accidentally took part in, protected, thank God, incest. It is brought up at every, and I mean every, family gathering. A couple of my cousins have taken to playing Sweet Home Alabama and asking when the next date is whenever I enter the room. After, soberly, explaining to my parents it was an accident and I fully believe she was not a relative, like they should have questioned it, they were okay-ish with it, but still disappointed and annoyed a little. My father asked me how I'd failed to notice Isla, apparently, sat literally the row behind us, and I had no answer. Gotta work on my observation skills I guess. Not only do my family still tease me, but my friends found out from my sister within days and I've been relentlessly teased by them at most social gatherings since. You can imagine how many cousin/incest/Alabama jokes daily. I am ashamed to this day, even more so because she is an objectively attractive woman. As one might imagine, the limited interactions we've had since have been extremely strained and awkward, not helped by my peepee-head cousins. There is another big family wedding coming up this summer, and since the announcement the incident as it's come to be known as has been all that's been discussed within my hearing. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed that roller coaster. If you have any questions feel free, and once again, do forgive the surely egregious formatting as I am just popping my Reddit virginity with this story, which I've been encouraged to, anonymously, post online by friends so as to make you all laugh as much as them. I think my landlord may be dead or hospitalized and I don't know what to do. I will have been in this rental property for 10 years this year. In all that time, I've never actually met my landlord. He lives in another state. He used to have properties both in my state and in his state, but after the recession in '08 he mostly pulled everything back to his state. My original lease was for the first year here, after that we never signed another lease, but we've never had any issues at all about that. I've always paid the rent by making a deposit directly to his account at his bank. When anything goes wrong, he's quick to hire repairmen. We've had a good relationship for the last decade, even if we don't know what the other looks like in person. Cue coronavirus. My so and myself both work in the hospitality industry, and restaurant/bars have been shut down for a month now with no clear end in sight. Unemployment hasn't kicked in yet and we haven't gotten any stimulus checks. Rent is due, but we wanted to talk to our landlord about postponing payments until we started working again. The landlord's phone goes straight to voicemail. The voicemail box is full every time we call. He hasn't responded to texts or emails. We've been trying to get hold of him for over 2 weeks now and I'm quite worried, to be completely honest with you all. Although I've never seen him, he sounds like an older dude and I'm worried about him. I'm also worried about my household. What happens if he's not okay? I can provide other details if they might be helpful. What is the craziest transformation from someone at your high school? It was when I was a teenager. I was a short, kinda fat, nerdy kid with acne, braces, and long, greasy hair like Kurt Cobain. For some effing reason I cannot, as an adult, fathom, I decided I wanted a perm to look like Gavin Rossdale. Except I was still a kinda fat kid with a kinda fat face, so I just looked like a fat kid with shitty, dirty, curly hair. It was effing terrible. Now, before you hit reply and bang out the same bullshit that I hear all the time when I tell this story, everyone goes through an ugly duckling phase, you're no different, hear me out. I was not your average ugly duckling turned swan. I was a 1/10. I was effing hideous. Like, girls wouldn't audibly say ew if I so much as smiled at them, sometimes if I just made eye contact. It was debilitating for my fragile teenage psyche, and extremely humiliating and emasculating. I couldn't even get my friend girls to hook me up with any of their friends. My teenage personality didn't help anything. I was one of those attention-seeking loud kids who made horrible jokes and hoped people would laugh with me instead of at me for once. Seriously, I was a fucking greasy, pimply, fat, loudmouthed little troglodyte. That was my life for 3 years, from age 12 through age 15, a social outcast, a dweeb, a dork, a loser, throwing all of them at me cause there ain't nothing new. When I started my first semester of my sophomore year in high school, I was taking Smart Kid Trig. There was a jock in my class, a kid named Jay, who wasn't really smart enough to be in the Smart Kid classes, but was probably too smart for the regular classes, so here he was, struggling along with things I found easier than a tutorial level in video games. Through some twist of fate or good fortune, or most likely because our last names start with the same first 2 letters, Jay sat behind me in that Trig class. Jay wasn't above cheating, and I wasn't above whoring out my brains for a pretend friend, so we got along like cupcakes and frosting. About a month into the semester, Jay asked me, hey, optical delusions, you ever had a girlfriend? Up until this point, Jay and I had never talked about anything other than how awesome he was at everything, which was really more Jay talking and me nodding along, or Trig. I didn't really know how to respond. I mean, I obviously hadn't had a girlfriend, but that's not the kind of information you let out easily when you're on the bottom tier of the high school food chain. And no, girls don't really like me. I squeaked out, trying to keep my normally loud voice hushed to a whisper without cracking. Puberty is the effing worst, dude. When do you get those braces off? Jay was staring at my face, judging every crack, every pockmark, every pimple, everything. I could feel it, but it didn't feel the same as when the pretty girls would do it. He wasn't reeling in horror for starters, and he seemed to be inspecting me instead of rejecting me. In about a month, but then I have to get retainers and depending on how my palate expander worked I may knee stop. Dude, don't talk about your braces and shit, no one cares. I never did know when to shut up. Oh right, ha 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 ha, sorry Jay. My already red from the acne and topical creams face turning a shade of beet. I was overcompensating for oversharing. I was really awkward. Can you get a ride home an hour after school ends? His inquiry seemed earnest, and didn't feel like he was going to tie me to the flagpole or give me an atomic wedgie. It felt like he wanted to help. I probably can. Yeah, why? Come to the weight room with me after school. Football team does weight training and we're allowed to bring in one underclassman outsider to try out for a couple weeks. If you make it, you can try out for the squad next year. I don't know how to work out. Jay, the forced grin had disappeared from my face, replaced by a half frown of dejection. Knowing full well that I could barely lift myself up on the chin-up bar more than twice, I wasn't going to fare well in the weight room with kids twice my size. Don't worry dude, I got you. And he slapped me on the back hard enough to half knock the wind out of me. I smiled at him, not forced this time, it felt real. All of it felt real. Over the next year, I got the braces off, cut my shitty hair, and hit the gym so fucking hard that I went from 150 pounds of squishy preteen flub to 165 pounds of rock fucking solid muscle and under 10% body fat or some poop. The jocks started giving me high fives in the halls. I was dubbed the leprechaun. My boyfriend's mom called me ugly and undesirable. I've been in a relationship with my boyfriend for 2 wonderful years, and everything was going great until I met his parents. We're both Muslims, and I knew that his parents might have some strict expectations, including me wearing a hijab. I was okay with that because I love him deeply. After a year together, we finally met his parents at a fancy restaurant. His father started a pleasant conversation, asking about our relationship and why I chose his son. Then, the topic of the hijab came up. His mother explained the religious reasons behind it, and I agreed to wear it, wanting a future with my boyfriend. But then, out of nowhere, she started talking about how they care about their bodies and healthy living. I was confused and didn't know if she was talking about me. I thought maybe she meant it as advice, like my own mother would give. After the dinner, I texted my boyfriend to check on what his parents had discussed with him, only to find out he hadn't spoken to them yet. The next day, he called me, crying uncontrollably, and told me his parents were okay with everything but refused to let us marry. His mother thought I had an undesirable body and face, even going so far as to call me ugly and claim that our children would inherit bad genes. I was stunned and speechless, watching him cry through the screen. I couldn't help but wonder how she could say such hurtful things when she's a mother of 3 daughters. If someone had said that about her own daughters, she'd likely be furious. Yet, she didn't hesitate to criticize me. I'm in so much pain right now, it's hard to describe the feeling that's haunting me. I've been crying for hours, unable to focus on work. I never thought that despite agreeing to wear the hijab, my appearance would still be a problem. What's the most ridiculous middle school breakup you've seen? We had just finished 7th grade. One of my best friends, David, actually had a girlfriend named Natasha. We were all in the same friend group at the time, so we were pretty close. Every Thursday night we would hang out in my basement, being unsupervised 13-year-olds. We would often play Truth or Dare. This one time we had been playing for a while, and then it was my turn. I turned to Natasha and dared her to fart in David's face. She actually seemed pretty excited to do so. He seemed nervous and closed his eyes as he laid down on the ground. Natasha approaches defenseless David, and she squats over his face, ready to release the fart. I kid you not, this girl lets go. An absolute heater of a fart. It was the full package. Nice deep rumbling noise, not too much moisture, and the stench was putrid. We're talking about a demon-level stinker. After the release, I watch David's eyes go wide and he knocks her off of him and runs towards the bathroom. He immediately starts puking. At this point, I'm laughing hysterically and Natasha, slightly embarrassed. My dad walks out of the kitchen with his friends, asks what the hell happened as David puking in the toilet. I explained to my dad how David just took a fart to the face courtesy of Natasha. Now she's incredibly embarrassed. From the bathroom, we hear, "Oh, God, I can still smell poo. Corn." Before he's overwhelmed by another wave of vomit. Eventually, David's nose and stomach recovered, but his relationship with Natasha did not. The next day, David broke up with her, as every time he saw her, he was reminded of the fart.
My entitled step-siblings want to change the ownership of the house I bought for my parents, so, their dad kicked them out and disowned them. I owned multiple businesses. I also saved a lot for my retirement, since I don't plan to marry and have children. I'm the youngest of my siblings and the one that made the most money. Anyway, my stepfather, Dan, has 10 children with his previous wife. His previous wife passed away from cancer years ago. Dan and my mother, Susan, were introduced when I was 20. I don't like his family. His children are all greedy and selfish. In my country, it's our culture to give money to our parents after we start working. Poor Dan was a school principal, but he loaned a lot of money to all his children, making sure they wouldn't be trapped with student debt. In the end, his monthly pension money will be deducted from the bank to pay debts with little left for their expenses. Luckily, my parents have a farm, and that helped them to earn money. My step-siblings always ignored him when he asked for money, and my siblings were always the ones who sent money. My step-siblings will ask for vegetables and chickens from the farm for free. They didn't even come inside Dan's house, which is considered rude. They just took the things they needed and left. They rarely came back to visit them, and when they did, they rarely bought groceries. I worked hard to earn money for my family. I figured if I had money, I could solve all their problems and make their worries and sadness from poverty go away. 3 years ago, I bought a house for them and renovated it to their liking. The house is even bigger than my house and Dan's previous house. They can keep their dogs, fish, chickens and ducks. Dan is a good person. He helped me and my siblings when we were very poor. I paid for the house maintenance, hired housekeepers, and bought groceries every month. I gave them pocket money every month too. I made sure they would never lack anything or need to work hard again, and all they need to do is relax in their old age. My step-siblings started to come frequently, stayed there on weekends, and ate the groceries that I bought. All the groceries are high quality. I only buy the best for my parents. Hell, they don't even cook. They expect my mother to cook for them. If not for the 2 housekeepers, my mother will be tired of keeping the house clean because all of them are lazy asses. Their children throw snacks on the floor. Me and my siblings appeared amicable with my step-siblings, but we expressed our disapproval behind their backs. We know they do the same. They're 2 faces after all. They even ask for some money from my stepfather sometimes, the pocket money that I gave to him every month. My stepfather will always give some of his money every time, much to my frustration. They are literally chefs, accountants, managers, and teachers. A week ago, I came back alone to my hometown and stayed in my parents' house. I came to see if my parents lacked anything in the house and to see the dogs and 2 cats. 3 of my step-siblings were there, with their family. We all talked for a bit in the living room, and then the topic of house ownership came up. My stepbrother thought the house was in Dan's name. I told them the house was still in my name. They got upset and passive-aggressively said I don't trust or care about Dan or my mother. I asked why it matters since Dan and my mother live a comfortable life and I would never kick them out. Dan, being a passive-aggressive individual himself, shut them out and praised me, saying that I'm not his daughter but still do more. They were offended and went home that night. They have been making passive-aggressive posts about being controlling on Facebook ever since. My siblings made passive-aggressive posts as well. Most of them were mocking quotes about greedy and shameless people. Update: I was planning to visit my parents in my hometown this weekend with my siblings, to talk to Dan about my step-siblings' behavior. Turns out Dan already talked to them in their family group chat. My step-siblings were angry. 6 step-siblings threatened to leave the group chat and stop contacting him. Dan said so be it. They didn't do it. I will make it short. 1. Step-siblings spread rumors about me being someone's sugar baby. My nosy aunt heard about the rumor and told my mother and Dan, telling them how ridiculous the rumor was. 2. Dan snapped in the group chat and disowned them. He kicked 6 of my step-siblings who spread the rumor out of the group chat. 3. The 4 youngest step-siblings remain in the group. Unlike the elder siblings, they lost their mom when they were young, so they see my mother as their mom. Apparently, their elder siblings borrow money from them every month. They also decided to go NC with their elder siblings. Me and my family blocked the 6 greedy demons.
I stole my sister's nair to clear my pubes. It was the worst decision of my life. I am a 16-year-old male who has never had a preference for body hair. It makes me feel quite gross. I started out shaving since my sisters helped me out with teaching me how to shave, and it was cool, but I didn't like getting razor burn, or that prickly feeling of hair growing extremely fast after shaving. I'd tried waxing before, but it was way too painful for me. Anyway, I found out about the holy grail of hair removal products that my sisters use, a miracle substance called nair. I decided that I would sneakily take my older sister's bottle of nair and test it out for myself. I needed to know why my sisters praised it so much, like it was some food after a famine. If I had known the dark fat that awaited me, I would have avoided it like the Black Plague in 1346. I read up on how to use it. I grabbed a cloth and started smearing that stuff on my legs like a delicious body lotion. Then the stench hit me. It was like if 1,000 rotten eggs decided to have a gangbang and squirt rotten egg seed into a bottle. It was putrid, but apparently it was miracle work, so I continued to use it. I suddenly had the genius idea that provoked this post and decided to slap some of that egg orgy hair dissolver on my pubic area. At first it was fine. After around 4 to 5 minutes I got in the shower and rinsed off the cream. My legs were nice and hairless, but since I'd put the nair on my pubic area for only around 2 minutes, nothing happened down there. I decided to wash off what I currently had on, and apply a fresh round after I got out of the shower. I cannot describe the agony that came with me applying a fresh layer of that nair. The immediate feeling I got was like if Michael Myers got a cheese grater and started shaving away at my skin with it. I gagged and started shivering as I kept applying. I refused to back down. I cannot begin to describe how much I started sweating, which just made everything worse, like it was getting Botox injections into my pubic area. After around another 4 minutes of the Michael Myers-esque kinky cream torture, I got back into the shower and started rinsing it off. When the warm water hit my skin, I felt like a Chernobyl victim. The hair literally slid off. It was great until I saw a part of my skin slide off as well. I probably went paler than those K-pop band members. I'm a mixed black dude. So after I got out of the shower, I dried myself off and looked down at my pubic area. It was bleeding a bit and as red as Satan's butthole. Not to mention it stung like if 1,000 baby wasps were stinging me under my skin trying to birth themselves. I've been walking like I just had a wild night with Johnny Sins for several hours. It still stings. My biggest fear is that the sting will remain with me until my last day. I've looked up everything nair related on the internet. It's not looking good for me. I do not recommend lacing your fancy areas with nair unless you're a sadist, a masochist, or just a weirdo. Heed my warning, ladies and gentlemen. The nair is a horrifying thing. Thanks for watching. Follow for more. I was under the impression my friend was a trans woman the majority of our friendship. Today I finally got the story straight. A little backstory. I moved to a different state 2 years ago for work and didn't know anyone. Over time I met a good group of people who I hang out with on a weekly basis. This was a pretty well-established group and I fortunately was accepted into their ranks. Some of these people have known each other since they were in high school, so they all know each other very well. Despite this, I have never felt excluded or left out and really do love these guys. There are a few people in this group that are a part of the LGBTQ+ community in some way, one of these people being Jane. I want to make it clear that I support the LGBT community. I couldn't care less what people identify as, and even though I am not a part of it, I respect everyone's identity. Jane is someone who is very secure in their identity, and has no problem openly talking about her sexuality. One day while we were all out at a bar, Jane and some of our other friends were talking about their dating history and preferences. Jane brought up how she has been with both men and women and doesn't care about the gender of her partners. That's when a different friend, who is also LGBT, intervened and said something like, "Exactly what I expect a trans woman to say." Jane didn't deny the trans comment, just gave a little wink and continued with the conversation. Because I was still fairly new to the group at this time, I took this comment at face value and just thought, I guess Jane's trans, and moved on. I didn't want to pry considering I wasn't that close with Jane yet. It kinda remained just a thought in the back of my mind and nothing really serious. As the months went by, Jane never mentioned their trans identity again, and no one in the group ever said anything about it, so I assumed it was just something Jane doesn't like to bring up. By this point, I had been friends with this group for a little over a year now and was significantly closer with everyone, including Jane. Jane's in the process of moving out of her current apartment into a much nicer one. Way to go, Jane. And yesterday, I was helping her move some stuff because I own a truck, and I was more than happy to help her. While bringing things into her new apartment, I noticed what seemed like an old family photo from Jane's childhood. There was an older man and woman who I assumed were her parents, a young girl, and a young boy. I turned to Jane and said, "I didn't know you had a sister with all the confidence and curiosity in the world." That's when Jane made a face and said, "I don't," and walked over to where she saw the photo I was looking at. She pointed at the little kids in the photo and said, "That's me with my brother." I must have looked like a lost child or something because when she looked back up at me she asked what was wrong, and I said, "So you're the girl here?" "Yeah. And that boy is your brother." Yeah. By this point, I was really confused because Jane couldn't have been older than 5 in this photo but still looked like a little girl. So I finally asked, sorry if this is too personal, but what age did you transition? That's when Jane now wore a confused look on her face and said, what are you talking about? At this point I was genuinely curious, still not understanding what was really happening, so I said, what do you mean, what am I talking about? I know it's none of my business, but you just look super young here. How old were you when you transitioned? Then Jane just smiled and said, Rilo, do you think I'm trans? I answered with a very unconfident, yes. Then Jane asked why I thought that. Then I told her the story about the comment our friend made at the bar. It had been months since that specific hangout, and how she didn't deny it, and how no one ever brought it up again, so I didn't want to. At this point, Jane was on the ground dying of laughter and I felt so embarrassed. Luckily she didn't take offense and thought it was hilarious, even immediately calling one of our other friends to let her know I thought Jane was trans for the majority of our friendship. So moral of the story, gender is a spectrum and don't take gender jokes at face value. And if you're ever confused about someone's gender, just ask, it'll save you a lot of embarrassment.
I threw out my cousin's vape and now he's suing me for an absurd amount. My family is pretty poor, we live in one of the worst parts of town in London, and my family barely keeps up with rent. I go to a public school, and it's probably every other day that someone gets robbed or injured at my school. I work and skipping a grade in school and work extremely hard for my future so that I can provide for my family. I also work a part-time at a restaurant across town to pitch into my family as much as possible. My uncle on the other hand is an extremely wealthy businessman. He was my father's younger brother and got really lucky with business, but he refuses to help out my father because he says that he had to work hard for his money and that my father didn't work hard enough, so he deserves the conditions he has. Just a likey father, my cousin is incredibly spoiled, and one of the most bratty kids I've ever met. He's always trying to flex on me, and because it was New Year's I had to go and babysit him like usual while my parents went to the parents' family event. Now you would think that as a 16-year-old it would be easy to take care of an 11-year-old, however this was not any ordinary 11-year-old. As we were walking he told me he wanted to go to a party. I wasn't sure if he meant a birthday party but I ignorantly agreed. That's when we got to a club. He shook the bouncer's hand and they let him in. Probably because of his dad's connections. I walked in behind him and immediately tried to get him out of there, but that's when he pulled out a vape from his pocket. Stunned would be an understatement. I told him to put that away, and that's when he offered me a drink. And I don't mean the type of drink a kid would have. Like a Fanta or a cola, he was offering hard liquor to me from his yellow Magic Bus school bag. That was it for me. Although I am a girl it wasn't that hard to overpower him. I just picked him up, and fought against all his kicking and screaming, which did cause a huge scene, but I wasn't concerned about that anyway. When I put him down on the street after we got a little bit away from that club I told him to explain himself, and that's when he pulled out his vape again. I had enough and picked up his little toy and threw it away. He started having an absolute meltdown, so I just decided to call my parents to come and pick us up. A couple days later my parents informed me that my little cousin was seriously mad and was threatening to sue me for assault and for throwing out his property, his vape. All of my stuff started suddenly disappearing, so I confronted my boyfriend and he told me he'd been secretly destroying all of my hobbies because he was jealous of me spending time with them instead of him. I have a lot of hobbies. I'm sort of what you might call a hobby collector. But my top ones right now are running, training for a marathon, baking, reading, and doing something called junk journaling. Not sure if anyone is familiar. Specifically reading I've been doing since I was a young teenager. This started about 6 months ago, when I saw that several of my old books were dog-eared, which I don't do to my books. I asked my boyfriend if he had read them, which I would be totally fine with, but he insisted he hadn't touched them. Odd but whatever. Then after that, I literally could never find my running shoes. I bought a rather expensive pair and keep them separate from my other shoes because I'm a nurse and my hospital shoes are nasty. But the running shoes I could never find. They would always turn up days later though, somewhere I definitely hadn't put them. Again, odd but whatever. And then, my journal got completely destroyed. Somehow, it was left outside in our garage, where it is known to leak when it rains. It didn't necessarily get water damaged, but the moisture made all my pages peel up and practically 28 pages ruined. The pages take me over an hour each and I'm quite proud of them. 28 plus hours of my artwork, ruined. This is so stupid, but I genuinely started to believe the house was haunted. Lao. I did shed a few tears over my journal and my boyfriend rolled his eyes at that but helped me glue them all back down and salvage as much as possible. I had a fleeting thought that he put out there, but it was honestly so weird I was like, why would he? Then, it was back to my books. I have a huge bookshelf with about 200 plus books because I read daily. I started to notice one by one, they were disappearing. Like straight up, gone. I searched every corner of the house and could not find them. I even texted all 3 of my sisters, my brother, and my boyfriend's sister, asking if they had borrowed any and didn't tell me. They all said they hadn't. My boyfriend's sister borrows my books often but she always asks and insisted she didn't have any. When this happened I was like, what the hell? And then it was my baking. I could never find my mixers or my baking sheets or anything whenever I wanted to bake. The final straw though was when I found my KitchenAid mixer broken, literally just would not turn on. And if you don't know, those things are expensive. I straight up asked him, "Did you do this? Like, why is all my crap broken or lost recently?" He finally admitted to purposely hiding or breaking my things, because my hobbies annoy him. I'm not going to lie, I exploded. I told him he was a weirdo for touching my stuff and that it was honestly so strange to do this as an adult. He proceeded to defend himself, saying that I was spending more time on my made-up hobbies than with him and this was the only way to make me focus on our relationship again. Which, for context, isn't true at all. We still have a great relationship, I thought. We go on dates twice a week, we have intimacy regularly, we get along with each other's families and friends. Like, I'm so confused. We've been together for 2 whole years. I love him so much, and other than this odd behavior, he's so good to me. After that argument, I was genuinely so distraught that I left the house and went to my sister's house, who lived together. They also agreed it was the oddest thing in the world. The icing on the effing cake when I got home this morning was that he threw out all of my crap. Cut the soles out of running shoes, cut the laces, threw out my Apple Watch, destroyed the baking things, cut the silicone molds, the box that all my missing books were in the dumpster with all of my other journal supplies. The journal he helped me fix was torn to shreds. I genuinely started to sob. I know it sounds dumb and overdramatic, but I genuinely worked so hard on my journal that it made me cry. Literally hundreds of dollars and some of my favorite books in the trash. Money spent on baking supplies, which I used to bake for my baby cousin's elementary school, ruined. I just don't understand what is wrong with him. He's never been like this before. Ever. I'm genuinely so confused. What has gotten into him? What do I do? What has gotten into him? Is it something else he could be projecting? I'm genuinely so confused.
I made my brother think he has alopecia. When I was 15 years old, I got my first job working at a Wendy's. I was making a lot of money as a cashier and was excited to start buying my own things. I used my money to spoil myself and purchase nicer things like clothes, shoes, makeup and salon brand shampoo. My brother, who at the time was 13, used to sneak into my bathroom and constantly steal my nice, salon brand shampoo. He would use them and most of the time he would leave them open in the bathtub. This would result in the rest of the shampoo going down the drain and leaving me with empty containers. This drove me completely insane and I hated him for taking my things. I tried to speak with my parents about this, but all they told me was that I should just learn to share. One day I went out and purchased a very good and very strong hair removal cream. I mixed this into my shampoo bottle and left it in my bathroom. I gave my brother a verbal warning not to use my newly purchased bottle, but he stole it again anyway. I woke up one morning to the sound of my brother shrieking in the bathroom. I run over, open the door, and see my brother holding clumps of his hair. Over the next few days his hair continued to fall out in huge chunks and small bald patches started to appear. Seeing what I had done, I immediately felt guilty and emptied the remaining shampoo. My mother took him to the doctor to get checked out and they diagnosed him with alopecia. He then had to start using this special and terrible smelling shampoo to combat this. His hair did grow back, but I just recently found out that he is still using the shampoo in order to prevent another alopecia flare-up. It has been 15 years now and I have never told my brother that I caused him to lose his hair. Am I the a-hole for not allowing my son to go to a school dance? My husband and I have 6 children. Our 16-year-old Gianna is a junior in high school, and our son Riker is in 7th grade. The kids are starting to have their school dances. The 7th grade dance is later this month and the junior banquet is in early May. We have gone shopping for dress clothes for all the dances. We bought Gianna's dress a few weeks ago. Gianna has usually been a good kid throughout her life. This school year has been slightly harder than others though. Around 2 months ago, we got a call from Gianna's choir teacher saying that Gianna and a few others were making discriminatory jokes about some of the new pieces she introduced, including an Urdu song and a song from Honduras. We talked to Gianna about her actions and we made her write an apology to her teacher as well as write a 5-paragraph essay on why it is important to respect music from other cultures. Riker has a friend from his baseball team who is Honduran. When Riker heard about Gianna's jokes he was quite mad and asked if he could have his friend come over and teach her about the culture there. We allowed this and he came over with his parents and they made food and Riker and his friend talked about sports and music there. Gianna was very clearly not enjoying it, but we made her engage anyway. Our daughter and a group of her friends, including her boyfriend, got in trouble last week for making the same jokes again. We took her phone to investigate to see where this hatred could be coming from. Riker had his friends over for a sleepover the night we found out about this. During dinner the boys were talking about how their coach would never let them live though it if they bullied a kid or made those jokes. My husband and I tried helping guide them through their feelings, like asking them about the diverse athletes they liked. Gianna was hanging out with friends at the mall that night, some of whom were doing dress shopping for the upcoming dance. Our son and the boys decided to use this as an opportunity to trash the dress, using mud, drinks and cutting a few holes in the dress. We found out when Gianna came home, entered her room and saw the dress. The boys were laughing and Riker said they did it because Gianna didn't deserve to go to the banquet. We told Riker we were trying our best to educate her. We told him that this was the wrong way to take out his anger and that as a result, he couldn't go to his 7th grade dance. Riker told us to shut up and spent the rest of his night in his room with the boys.
My dad, who groomed me for years and fondled me as a child, told me, God doesn't say in the Bible if incest is bad or not. My mom seemingly agrees with him. About a week ago, I was driving in the car with my parents and uncle. They are your typical American white evangelical Christians. They were telling me how I need to read the Bible, to which I responded that I had been. I told them how I had read about half of Genesis that morning. I asked them about the Garden of Eden, and where Cain's wife comes from, as the only characters up until that point are Adam, Eve, and their 2 sons. Suddenly he had a wife. Where did she come from? I asked. I was genuinely confused where all the people came from, not just the wife but like, a whole group of people? Confusing. My mom replied that it was a good question, and that there are lots of theories about it. Her explanation was that Adam and Eve had many children not mentioned in the Bible, and so he likely married one of his sisters. When I brought up that that would cause birth defects, she said that the human race was so pure at that point that it wouldn't cause any. I asked why God would do something that was wrong like incest. To which my dad replied, God says nowhere in the Bible if incest is wrong or not. There is no way to know. I was shocked at this. My heart felt like it was hit by lightning. I was taken in by them as a foster child when I was 7 years old and got adopted at 8. After the adoption especially, my dad groomed me for at least 2 years. Honestly, the details are fuzzy and I have blocked out so much. But he would always tell me things like I wish we could just run away together. Life would be so much better if it was just us, or, God, you're so much better than your mom. Why can't I just be with you instead? Another thing was he would always smack my behind every single time I would walk up the stairs in front of him, which still grosses me out immensely until today, and I will run ahead of him if I am ever in front of him on the stairs. It could have been an innocent enough thing, I suppose, but even then I knew his intentions. He would also lay in front of me on the couch in shorts with nothing on underneath and open his legs to make sure I could see his third leg. It all culminated around 9 or 10 years old. I was on his lap showing him how to play my favorite video game. I was wearing just a t-shirt and underclothes, as I often did at the time. I loved to wear his shirts. He is extremely fat and wears a size 4XL. On my body, it was like the perfect comfortable dress or sleeping gown. He was tickling my back, something I loved as a kid from mostly my mom because of her long nails, but my dad sometimes too. I would often lay in just my underclothes on the bed with his big shirt up above my head and get back tickles. I loved the softness of the touch. This day, I was getting frustrated because he wasn't paying attention to how to play my game. I really wanted to show it to him, but his eyes were in a distant place, and he was biting his lower lip. Which is another thing that triggers me nowadays, as you can imagine. Before I could process what was happening, his hands suddenly moved around to the front of my body. He started doing very inappropriate things, and thank God I had the common sense to run for my life and hide in the bathroom. I was in shock. I was hyperventilating and didn't know what to do. I stayed in there for a long time. My mom came knocking and asked what I was doing. I came out. And I was still in an insane, confused, hurt, shocked state of mind, but I didn't do anything. I didn't say anything. And I guess eventually I pushed the feeling somewhat away. And things went back to normal. After that, it was a light switch. I went from being the world's biggest daddy's girl to not speaking a word to him outside of necessity. He drove me everywhere through high school, volleyball practice, softball practice, games, clubs, everything in between. We would spend hours together in the car every day. And we rarely spoke a word. I would read on my phone until my parents found out I was reading books with intimate stuff in it and Harry Potter, sinful, and took that away from me. Then I just did nothing. Stared out the window in silence. I was immensely depressed in every way, from a load of other things as well. I had the opportunity to tell the authorities what happened to me in elementary school, and I didn't take it. It makes me so sad to think about now. I told one of my friends in school at the time that my dad touched my behind every time I walked up the stairs and it made me extremely uncomfortable, and that he did other stuff too that I couldn't talk about. She then told her dad, who phoned CPS. This caused a big mess that I can't remember, according to my mom, them coming to the house, interviewing them, etc., and they also interviewed me one-on-one. The conversation is burned in my mind, crystal clear. The woman asked me directly if he had ever done anything more than the behind smacking, and I wasn't able to bring myself to tell the truth. I was too scared of what was going to happen. Would I end up in the foster system again? All of my stuff was at the house. I would have to go back to the house to get it, and my dad would be there too, right? I was terrified of what he would tell me or do to me, of facing them if I were to tell the truth. I looked down, couldn't meet the woman's eyes, and said no. She pushed me, again. Are you sure? I was hoping she would sense my hesitation and know I was lying. I was hoping she could know that I couldn't look her in the eye because it wasn't the truth. She told me to look her in the eye and tell her he didn't do anything. The fear of the repercussions took over, and I said that he hadn't, then immediately looked away again, my final hope she would notice something was off. But that was the end. When my father told me last week that God never said if incest was bad or not, now you know why my heart exploded. I finally told my mom about what my dad did to me this last summer. I had the realization that if I was ever going to have kids one day, she would need to know that I would not want my father to be around them ever. So, I told her, crying in a library parking lot. She said, but he didn't do anything else, right? She didn't even seem to care that her husband had told their 8-year-old adopted daughter how much he resented her, wanted to leave her, and thought she was generally just a pain in the butt to live with. She didn't care that he had touched me intimately, or the grooming in general. It was so invalidating. It makes me question myself so much, as if I am overreacting to everything. And she defended him again after the argument in the car. When we got home, I went into my room and sobbed. She came in, and I couldn't say anything besides mumbling, "How could he say that to me after what he did?" And she acted as if she had no idea what I was talking about. The story gets worse from here, as when I told my husband about this situation and my suffering, he told me, "I will forever think incest is hot, sorry." Thanks for reading.
What don't people know happens when you get arrested? I was born in Singapore, spent most of my childhood abroad, and only moved back at 17. Maybe if I grew up there I would have known more seriously how they treat crime and misbehavior. I didn't pay much attention in school and got involved in crime in my late teens and earlier 20s, eventually escalating to robbery. I didn't use a real weapon but pretended I had one, and it worked well for a while in a place where most people are unaccustomed to street crime, until inevitably I eventually got caught. This was during the early pandemic, so they maybe factored that in when giving me a comparably short prison term at only 2 years, but I think the judge made up for it by ordering 12 strokes of the cane, a bit higher than I expected. I knew it would hurt, but I had no idea how bad it actually would be. Prison was no fun, of course, but the worst was that they don't tell you what day your caning will be. So every day I wondered if today would be the day. I started to get very anxious after hearing a couple other prisoners say how serious it is. They left me in that suspense for the first 14 months of my sentence or so until I began to try to hope, after hundreds of false alarms of guards walking by the cell for some other purpose, that maybe they'd forget or something and it would never happen. But nope, finally I was told that today's the day. I had to submit for a medical exam and a doctor certified that I was fit to receive my punishment. My heart was racing all morning, and finally I was led away to be caned. It's done in private, outside the sight of any other prisoners. It's not supposed to be a public humiliation event like in Sharia, the punishment rather comes from the pain. I had to remove my clothes and was strapped down to the device to hold me in place for the caning. There was a doctor there and some officers worked to set up some protection over my back so that only my buttocks was exposed. I had to thank the caning officers for carrying out my sentence to teach me a lesson. I tried to psych myself up thinking, okay, it's 12 strokes, I can do this. But finally the first stroke came. I remember the noise of it was so loud and then the pain was so shocking and intense, I cried out in shock and agony. I tried then to get away but I couldn't move. By the third stroke I could barely think straight. I remember feeling like my brain was on fire and the pain was all over my body, not just on the buttocks. I think I was crying but things become blurry after that in my memory. I remember the doctor checking to see if I was still fit for caning at one point and giving the go-ahead to continue. After the 12th stroke they released me but I couldn't move. 2 officers had to help me hobble off. They doused the wounds with antiseptic spray and then took me back to a cell to recover. My brain felt like it was melting from the pain, so my sense of time is probably a bit distorted from that day, but I remember I collapsed down in the cell and either passed out or went to sleep. But little did I realize that the real punishment of caning is more the aftermath than the caning itself. When I woke up the pain was still incredibly intense, but not so much that it was distorting my mind, which almost made it worse in a way. My buttocks had swollen immensely and any pressure on it felt like fire that immediately crippled me, almost worse than a kick to the groin. My first time I felt like I had to use the toilet, I was filled with dread because of the pain. I managed to do it squatting instead of sitting, but still, just the motion of going number 2 agitated all the wounds and the pain was so sudden and intense that I threw up. I tried to avoid eating for a week because I didn't want to have to use the toilet. After a couple days the officers told me I couldn't lay naked in my cell anymore and had to wear clothes. This was scary because they would agitate the wounds. I spent most of the day trying to lay face down and totally still because even small movements would hurt so bad as the clothes rustled against it. This continued for about a month before things started to heal, and even then, these actions remained very painful, just not cripplingly painful. I didn't sit or lay on my back for many months. By the time I got out of prison I had mostly recovered, but even to this day, there are severe scars and the area can be a bit sensitive. It was way worse than I expected the experience to be. I know it's my fault, but I do wish my parents had warned me more about the seriousness of justice here when we moved back, though I know I wouldn't have listened as a stupid teen. Thankfully they were supportive when I got out and I'm getting back on my feet, literally and metaphorically. Earlier today Ann trashed me for what I said. She said that I should have kept that to myself and I was a scumbag for basically telling Pam she can be replaced. Pam still won't speak to me and everything is really tense around the house. Now Pam is fully convinced that I'm not in love with her and I'm just waiting for her to die so I can replace her with a new toy. My stepdaughter doesn't want me to have my baby and my husband agrees. My husband and I have been together for 14 years. He's 9 years older than me and has 2 kids from his first marriage, 23 and 20. Despite wanting it, I've never been able to carry a baby to term. One miscarriage several years ago, near the beginning of our marriage, and nothing since. No rhyme or reason for it, and my husband and I have come to terms with the fact that we won't add to the family. I was sad but things have been tough financially the last few years, so I consoled myself that it's for the best. Until, surprise, the week before my 35th birthday, I realize my period is late. I get a positive test and I'm honestly over the moon, if you'll excuse the cliché. My husband is excited but wants us to wait to tell the family, which I agree with. I know the statistics and I don't want to have to be fielding constant questions if I'm a scary. Both of my stepkids are what you might call failure to launch. Neither have went to college and seem happy living at home or with my mother-in-law, who's much more permissive than I am. My drama with my mother-in-law could fill a whole or slash just normal database, but I won't focus on that other than to say that when I first became engaged to my now husband, I made it clear that I loved the kids and wanted to be a good mom. In retaliation to the first, and only, time my stepson called me mom, mother-in-law ignited a campaign of terror against me, using the kids as a weapon. Among other things, she paid them $10 every time they said something mean to me, and bragged about it to the rest of the family. So the relationship I have with them has been definitely strained at times, and we missed a lot of years of bonding, but it's improved as they've gotten older and floated outside of her sphere of direct influence. I know they'll never see me as their mom at this point, but I'm happy with the relationship we've managed to scrape together despite it all. Or at least I was happy with it. So here I am, pregnant, happy, and planning a new piece to our life that I hadn't dared to hope for in 5 or 6 years. I let myself dream a little and go to a baby store where I cry a little bit and end up buying a soft gray blanket and a tiny pair of shoes. Later that same day, I had to unexpectedly pick my stepdaughter up from work. Cool, fine, no big deal. I stop to get gas, and when I come back out, she's giving me the weirdest look. So, are you pregnant or something? She dug into the bag when I was out of the car. I could have lied easily and said it was for a friend, but why would I want to lie about it? I asked her if she could keep a secret. She promised she could, and I confirmed. Needless to say, it wasn't the happiest of responses. She just said, "Oh. Wow. That's, weird," and was quiet the rest of the ride home. To say I was a bit deflated was an understatement, but she doesn't necessarily have to be happy about it. Me and my husband still can be, all on our own. Even if nobody else celebrates, we can. A few days later and everything else is going along just fine. I'm counting down the days until the ultrasound. Everything seems good, until my stepson decides to show me a chat between him and my stepdaughter where she was talking about how gross it is that I'm pregnant. It's embarrassing, everybody's going to assume it's actually her kid when we're out together, and just general, not very nice things. When she's back home later, I come out to talk to her while she's watching TV with my husband. I'm trying to be chill, but my brain is going a million miles a minute. I asked her how she felt about the baby and she responded with an eye roll. I ask again, and tell her that I really want to know because it impacts her life, too. She's starting to get irritated with me. She says she's tired and had a long day and could I just drop it? Maybe this is where I misstepped, but no, I can't drop it now. I keep asking her to talk, she keeps refusing, until she finally decides to drop a bomb. You should just get in baby removal because this whole thing is effing weird. Honestly, I'm kind of shocked at this point. I knew that she wasn't delighted, but, damn, that's a whole nother level. It was like getting smacked in the face with a sock full of nickels. I start crying, thanked her for being honest like an idiot, and then leave the room. A little while later, my husband comes into the room where I'm sobbing my guts out. I assume he's going to try to comfort me or at least give me more context to soften the blow, which he does a lot when one of the kids says something awful to me. He sits down, puts his arm around me, and opens with, "Maybe we should consider it." Come again? The heck did you just say? He must see murder in my eyes because he rushes on with how happy he is, but we're not really in the best place financially, but he just started a new job, but it's hard enough with the 2 kids already, but the kids aren't on board, but. I told him over my dead body was a baby that I've wanted for 14 years is getting thrown in the garbage over that. It's a miracle baby, not a contestant to be voted off the island. I said some other things that I'm not proud of, stuffed some clothes in a bag, and came to my parents' house. I've been here for 3 days now and nobody has reached out to me. Not a peep. I just don't even know where to go from here. I feel like I'm surrounded by insane people that are all just looking out for their own interests. At least my parents are excited, I guess. I can't say that I am anymore. Update: my stepdaughter doesn't want me to have my baby and my husband agrees. As my story was last left, I'm 35 and find myself pregnant with a very wanted surprise baby after many years of infertility. I have a rough relationship with my mother-in-law and 2 adult stepchildren. My stepdaughter finds out I'm pregnant, flips her crap, and tells me I need to get rid of it. My husband, apparently, agrees after hearing her opinion. I left to stay at my parents' house and hadn't heard from my husband in 3 days. To be honest, I didn't want to see my husband at all. I had no desire after his confession. My radical act of self-care was ensconcing myself in my childhood bedroom, eating lots of potato chips and watching too much Animal Planet. My parents, at least, were absolutely delighted over the pregnancy. I'm an only child and my mom had always wanted more but had infertility problems, too. They went with me to my first ultrasound. They cried with me. They bought me a cake. My dad carved a little pumpkin with an amorphous blob on it that looks suspiciously like that weird, amazing amorphous blob on the sonogram screen. It was sweet. The day after the scheduled ultrasound and about 2 weeks of radio silence, I received a text from my husband saying that we need to talk, and I advised him that he could come talk to me in person. We chose to meet at a neutral public location as my parents didn't really want his face darkening their doorstep, and I agreed because I didn't want him tracking figurative stuff all over my safe place. So, we talked, or rather, I talked. I informed him of how hurt I was, mostly by his agreement with SD. He said he understood. I informed him that I would not be getting rid of it for the comfort of an overgrown toddler. He nodded his head sagely. I informed him how the ultrasound went. He looked interested. I informed him that he and his children would be moving out of my house within 30 days. He was, somewhat less in agreement at this point. Dear reader, I honestly had no crap to give at this point. He had let me stew for days and days by myself. I'm not sure if his tactic was to let me suck myself into an anxiety vortex, as I'm wont to do, and come crying back, as I have before. Just, no more. I can only assume those days I spent buried beneath blankets served as a chrysalis because I was not the same person when I went out as when I went in. I wanted them out of my house. The house that I bought before our marriage, the house that was in only my name. Those bricks were designed to hold happiness, not petty comments and miserable people disguising their own black hearts with my tendency to see the best in them. It was mine, and, as selfish as I'm sure someone will tell me it was mine alone to fill as I chose. And I no longer chose them. I wish I could say that my story ends with me happily getting fat and filling up a nursery with baby things, but it's not that kind of story. Around the time my husband and his kids moved their last box out, an ultrasound confirmed that my baby didn't survive. To say I was devastated would be an understatement, but at least I had my own space to grieve. Not only for my baby but for the family and marriage that had been my life for almost 15 years. I'm going to be okay. I am okay. I am also sad and discouraged and more than a little hollow, but I'm no longer held down by 300+ pounds of dead weight in my home. Thanks to everyone that reached out to me. Thanks for the advice. Thanks for making me laugh by accusing me of being a misandrist harpy and assuming I was going to run to the closest Planned Parenthood drive-thru. Thanks for being kind. Thanks for being angry. Thanks for understanding. Another update, because I've gotten a few messages recently asking for an update, I thought I'd sent one out into the universe to hopefully close the book on my story. At least, as far as Reddit is concerned. It's been about 2.5 years since I last posted and, as it goes, a lot has happened between point A and point B after I unceremoniously kicked my husband and his 2 children to the curb. They moved back in with my then mother-in-law. She was a controlling, cold person who enjoyed nothing more than puppeteering her children and grandchildren with an open hand full of money, all the while hiding a closed fist full of anger and resentment behind her back. Despite knowing this very well, all 3 moved back in with mother-in-law. She died 8 weeks later. I found it darkly ironic, since if she'd shuffled off of this mortal coil at any other point in our 15-year relationship, we might still be married today. Or maybe not. But I find it very telling that whenever I tell a curious acquaintance that she died, about the nicest thing anybody can muster is, well, bless her heart in a very southern sort of way. As far as I know, my ex-husband and his kids are still living in that same house, as it's now his. According to his Facebook, while I will shamelessly admit to checking from time to time, he's had a few relationships but nothing seems to stick. Gee, I wonder why. After all, they're such a lovely bunch. Since the children were adults and we had little in the way of commingled assets, our divorce was declared legal almost a year to the day after I filed. I'd honestly expected my ex to put up more of a fight, but it seems that his mother's death took it out of him. I guess I can't say that she never did anything good for me. After all of this, I had no desire to seek another relationship. I was happy licking my own wounds alone, trying to piece together where, exactly, it all went so sideways. The universe seemed to have other plans when I randomly ran into my ex-boyfriend at the grocery store about a month before my divorce was finalized. When I say ex, keep in mind that our relationship was one of those insanely emotional teenage love affairs where all of the memories are carefully wrapped in a gauzy filter. We were one another's first. Everything's and broke up due to life in college. There was no big blow up or cheating or anger, just growing up. It was a heartbreaking split, but you tend to be very different at 21 than 16, and our lives were taking us in opposite directions. At any rate, we saw one another for the first time in 15 years over a pile of slightly underripe avocados. He was still tall and perhaps even more handsome in the unfair way that some men age, but he was still very much himself. We decided to meet up for dinner while he was in town visiting his parents because he works abroad. That meetup turned into a sleepover, I'm not ashamed to say. We went through a box of Trojans at a respectable clip for 2 people on the downhill slide to 40. It was comfortable and lovely, and I thought it was a nice final chapter to the previous story we'd written. We parted ways again as friends. And then 8 weeks later I saw 2 little pink lines on a dollar store pregnancy test. Only this one decided to stick around. So now I chase my growing way too fast kid around, and we FaceTime with her father at least once a day. No, we're not together, but we co-parent well. He's a wonderful man and a great dad. It may be unconventional by some standards, but it works for us, and he plans to move back once his contract is up next year. Needless to say, my ex-husband grandly accused me of cheating on him or throwing him aside for an old flame, but by the time he found out about the baby, the ink was long dry on our divorce, so his blustering amounted to no more than some angry, drunken texts and likely some hungover mornings for him. I wish him nothing more than all the happiness he brought me. So I think that's where I'll end this for now, since my daughter is due to wake up from her nap and we're going to the park this afternoon. It'll be a good day. As an aside, my cousin sent me a screenshot of my stepdaughter's Instagram a few days ago. Apparently, she's been wholeheartedly celebrating the Supreme Court's decision concerning Roe vs. Wade. Imagine that. Bless her heart. When did a false accusation backfire on the accuser? My friend James was accused of getting physical with a boy. James had probably the worst lie told about him by the 13-year-old son of his then girlfriend. They'd been together for approximately 9 months, and up until that point, he'd had a great relationship with the son. However, the son obviously missed the good old days when he had his mother all to himself, and it would appear that nostalgia got the better of him. It started with little allegations against James, like he'd gotten angry at the boy and raised his voice. These were dismissed immediately by the mother, as she had been in the same room or within earshot when the incidents were alleged to have occurred. As these allegations were baseless and always failed to land, the son upped the ante somewhat and told his mother that he felt physically threatened by James. James is the type of guy who always walks around with a smile and is liked by all. I have known him for over 25 years and have never seen him get into a fight or raise his voice or ever get angry with anyone, and especially not a child. He is one of life's gentle souls. I honestly believe the world would be a better place if there were more people like him in it. He was, however, concerned and upset about the allegations, and he tied himself in knots trying to figure out why the boy was saying these things about him. Each time he spoke to his then-girlfriend about it, she would play it all down and tell him that he shouldn't worry as children lie and exaggerate all the time. Apparently, for some reason, she never spoke to the son about what the implications of lying could have, and I am certain that had she done, what happened next would have been avoided. The son went away one weekend to stay with his grandparents, his father's parents. James had a day out planned with his girlfriend on Saturday. Still, the local constabulary had other ideas, and they swooped in and arrested him as they had received a complaint from the grandparents that James had been physically abusing the boy. He was handcuffed, taken away, and spent the day and night in the cells before being released under investigation. He could not go to his girlfriend's, so he stayed with me, and I went to collect some clothes and his work swipe card. Although this was futile, as he was immediately suspended from his college lecturing job for safeguarding reasons. The girlfriend was home when I called around, and despite being upset and absolutely certain of his innocence, she, to me, didn't fully understand the ramifications of the false allegations. Her attitude was, we know he's innocent so that the police will know too. They understand that children lie and exaggerate all the time. When I returned home, I found James was applying some form of rudimentary first aid to himself. He had left the house to get some milk and was accosted by the boy's father. I have no idea how he knew where I lived or that James was staying with me, but he found him nonetheless and administered some rough justice on him. James tried to reason with him, but the father was having none of it and broke his nose and fractured his eye socket for good measure. The girlfriend's parents, who incidentally loved James and were thrilled that she had finally found someone decent, had their suspicions about the boy's allegations and decided to question him themselves gently. The boy eventually cracked when he was informed that his father would almost certainly be kicked out of the army for assaulting James in response to the allegation he'd made. He admitted that he'd made the whole thing up as he was jealous that he had to share his mother with someone else as he liked having her all to himself. He also admitted that he liked having complete control over his mother, and he saw James' arrival as a threat to the status quo, so he hatched a plan to get rid of him and told his other grandparents that James had assaulted him. They understandably hit the roof and pointed out to him that he was almost 14 years old and was old enough to know that lies can have far-reaching consequences. They immediately marched him to the police station, where he tearfully withdrew his allegation and informed them that he'd invented the whole thing. He admitted that James had never laid a finger on him nor raised his voice, or had shown any form of aggression towards him. The investigating officer severely reprimanded the boy and told him he would remember his name for future reference should they cross paths when he became an adult. Unfortunately, despite exposing the lie, the college terminated James' contract, again citing safeguarding. He took them to a tribunal and won the case. He was in line for a hefty payout but pleaded with them to let him continue to teach, and he dropped the whole thing. Sadly, they wouldn't see sense, and despite the compensation, his career went up in smoke. The students lost a fine lecturer, and the institution was poorer for no longer having such an asset as James. The father was indeed kicked out of the army and was also charged with assault, which is ironic considering this was the charge leveled at James, and was given a suspended sentence, which of course, means he will carry that wherever he goes and has now struggled to find employment. The mother's parents were rightfully disgusted that their grandchild could do such a thing as cut him out of the will. This was bad news for the boy as they were very wealthy business people, and he was looking forward to living off their fortune so that he didn't have to worry about minor inconveniences such as working for a living. They saw James how we all see him, a thoroughly decent person who loved that woman and her son with all his heart. They were devastated that the selfish actions of her son had stolen her happiness and robbed her of the man that they had always hoped that she would find. The grandparents on the other side, the ones who called the police, sought James out and apologized to him, which was decent of them. The relationship they now have with their former daughter-in-law is non-existent as she resents them for not speaking to her in the first instance, which of course, could have prevented the chain reaction that was about to follow. They hardly see their grandson anymore as they are also disgusted by his lies and selfishness. James, and this is probably an indication of the type of person he is, he considered getting back with the mother but realized that sometimes some things are just too broken to mend. She is a single mother again, and I have seen her in the street on occasion. She is devastated at what happened and wishes things were how they were. Unfortunately, she is unlikely to find anyone else anytime soon as her name is radioactive to prospective partners due to her son's lie. She told me that she's been on a few dates since, but as soon as the guy hears what happened in her last relationship, they ended immediately. She told me she loves her son regardless and just hates the lie that he told, which is fair. James has found work as a personal tutor and is also a contributor to a few business journals. He's doing okay but is still gutted about what happened. He feels that despite his innocence, he is not entirely without fault, that perhaps he shouldn't have been so affectionate to the mother when the boy was around, as it probably fueled his jealousy. Not a happy ending for anyone involved, and this all came about because of one teenager's lie. Very sad indeed.
What is the worst thing you've ever woken up to in the middle of the night? Sleeping over at my boyfriend's place, I'm awake for some reason about 3 a.m. I hear noises in the living room that I assume are the cats, but it doesn't sound quite right. I hear boyfriend's roommate get up to investigate. A moment later he appears in the doorway saying, "There's somebody in the house." It was a homeless guy, probably mentally ill. He just walked in the, yes, stupidly unlocked, front door. Just standing in the living room. Boyfriend jumps up and confronts him. Guy claims he was just cold and that he knocked first. He definitely did not knock. But anyway, he seemed harmless, so we gave him a blanket and he left. That door was locked from that point forward, and I still wonder what was really going on there. He was trying to be quiet, and I've never seen a homeless person in that neighborhood, and why our house. I'm just glad nothing happened.
My wife was sued and we lost a lot of money. I'm feeling resentment towards her and I don't know how to move past it. My wife was recently sued, she lost and we had to pay. The money is a significant amount for us, we didn't have much in savings or our emergency fund to begin with, and both of those accounts are now empty. My current problem is trying to move past the resentment and anger I'm feeling towards my wife. Until now I've always felt like we were a partnership in our marriage. But, since I'm the breadwinner I can't help but to feel like I'm spending my money on something that isn't my fault. I've had no problem paying the mortgage, and taking care of various financial burdens that come with being a married homeowner. However, I have been the only one to put money aside in our savings and other accounts to prepare for an emergency, like a totaled car, someone loses their job, medical bills, or an act of God. Not a stupid lawsuit where I know my wife is guilty. She has a part-time job and doesn't make much money, but pays for smaller things when she can, like groceries and some random bills, but she does take care of a lot of cooking, cleaning and caring for our pets. What did my wife do? She used LinkedIn to find her former ex-best friend. She ended up creating a realistic-looking fake LinkedIn profile with a vague occupation of recruiter. My wife ended up sending this ex-best friend, Laura, a few messages pretending to be a recruiter in her line of work. Laura finally responded thinking that this recruiter was real. My wife wanted her phone number but Laura gave her a personal email address instead. My wife created a second fake LinkedIn profile and started to send messages to people with similar titles as Laura at her company. These messages said derogatory things about Laura, a mixture of truthful things but embarrassing and just fabricated bullshit to make Laura look bad. Her manager got one of these messages that claimed that Laura was a heavy drug user. Laura's manager talked to her about these messages and he felt like the messages were bizarre and seemed like someone was trying to troll or harass Laura. Well, Laura's team had her back and helped her save these messages. Not only that, but Laura requested that she be drug tested anyway, to provide further evidence that she was clean. My wife didn't know this at this point, but Laura was pregnant. Several of her coworkers, including her manager, testified on Laura's behalf. Using the personal email address she got from the fake recruiter profile, she was able to find a few social media platforms Laura was on and was able to figure out her husband's name. She did some more internet sleuthing and found Laura's husband on Facebook. Laura's husband didn't have much on his Facebook profile, but you could see his business email address on it. My wife sent him an email claiming that Laura was cheating on him. The husband confronted Laura about this email and Laura encouraged him to keep responding to this person, and save the messages, as well as to start asking specific questions about this supposed affair. My wife thought she was being clever and ended up telling the husband that Laura was cheating on him during the work week. She even gave him specific dates. What she didn't realize was Laura had something turned on in Google Maps where it keeps years worth of historical GPS data. Some of the dates my wife gave him also happened to be days where they both worked from home together. She also ended up giving him dates during a time they were on vacation together. Laura had her husband keep responding as much as possible to my wife and to back up all correspondence. My wife was able to find out when and where the baby shower was going to be. One of Laura's friends had created a public registry for her and had the invitation online. My wife decided to show up unannounced. The baby shower took place in a semi-public place. They had rented out an area connected to the public business. She did not make herself known immediately. Instead, she looked for patrons that were entering and exiting the rented-out room. She was able to get the attention of a few guests that had never met her and tried to gossip about Laura. My wife was telling people that Laura didn't actually know who the father was, among other things. This was at an event where her husband was at as well. The word got back around to Laura and she spotted my wife and apparently immediately put together all the pieces of what happened. I'm leaving a fair amount of information out. My wife was able to find phone numbers, social media accounts and email for other people in Laura's circle and sent them messages about Laura on multiple occasions. All the messages were trying to paint Laura in an extremely derogatory light. All the events I've mentioned so far took place over a year or so. My wife didn't think to mask her IP address, so it was pretty easy to find out that all of these made-up messages came from the same IP address, ours. Many of Laura's friends and family testified on her behalf. Laura had everyone saved as much digital evidence as possible, and it was a lot. Laura and her husband hired a lawyer and decided to sue my wife. They had ample evidence against her. All the saved messages, close friends and even her manager spoke on her behalf. She showed that she went to see a therapist once all the harassment started because she was depressed and anxious. She showed that she and her husband went to counseling after the accusations of her cheating. She even went above and beyond and had more drug tests done to show she was clean and my wife's accusations were 100% false, and even had a paternity test done to show that my wife was again wrong and chose to lie. I honestly felt awful for Laura. There were lots of tears on her end. You could tell how much emotional stress she had gone through. She said that being pregnant during the majority of this was absolutely horrific and was worried the stress and anxiety would somehow hurt her baby. She was pained that her one and only baby shower was ruined by my wife and that was something that could never be truly repaid or made up for. And that my wife's harassment continued even after Laura gave birth and was trying to manage a newborn child. My wife has never done anything this crazy before. I knew she could be a little petty and jealous of others, especially people she used to be friends with in the past, but it was only talk, no action. We've had a very happy marriage otherwise, we rarely fight, have a lot in common, we have a lot of fun together. But, she really fucked up this time. I don't know how to move forward. I know someone is going to suggest therapy, but I really want to start building up an emergency fund again. We're pretty screwed financially for a while.
What question has someone asked you that secretly broke your heart? I was like 22 and it was probably 10 p.m. or so at a Walmart. I was on my way to a party and stopped for a beer. The store was fairly empty, and as I was in the beer aisle, I see this kid completely by himself. He was about 5, and at first I thought it was kind of funny because he was trying to pick up a case of beer. I waited like 30 to 60 seconds, looking around for this kid's mom/dad to come get him. A couple people walked right by him like it was normal, so then I started getting worried. I picked up my 2 cases of beer and walked over and kindly asked him if he lost his mom or needed help. The kid completely ignored the question and instead was thoroughly impressed that I was strong enough to carry 2 cases of beer. Eventually an employee noticed and came over as well. I told her everything I knew and she took over and told him that she was going to bring him to find his mom. As he was walking away he kept looking back at me and I smiled and said goodbye. The kid stopped and said, "Can I just come home with you? I don't like my mom." I was caught off guard, so I just laughed and told him the lady was going to help him. Now I'll never know the full story, or what happened to him, but the more I think about it, that kid more than likely had a pretty shitty childhood. I mean, the store wasn't busy and it was late at night on a weekday. It really makes you wonder why he was there in the first place, how he got separated from his mom, and why would he ask to go with a complete stranger instead of worrying about where his mom was. It still makes me sad. Hope everything worked out for the little dude.
What's the cruelest rumor you've heard as a child that still shocks you until now? Text: there was this boy in my class at school in 7th grade. He was short for his age. He kept to himself and never really mixed with anyone. He always ate his lunch alone on a bench seat which was on the edge of the playground, just staring into space. It was like he was in his own little world and nothing mattered to him. I never saw him smile in all the time I knew him. He would get called all kinds of names at school because of being weird. Nobody chose him for team sports during PE, and when he was the last one left, everyone called him a loser and laughed at him. He hung his head, went to the far corner of the gym, and sat down hiding his face in his hands. They tormented him in the changing rooms and started calling him a homo, faggot, and perv. It wasn't long before it had gotten around the whole school that this boy was a homo, and so everyone started calling him those terrible names. One time, he had fruit thrown at him from behind so that he never knew who it was. It hit him in the back of his head, knocking him down to the ground. With tears in his eyes, he tried to stand up, but they came at him again and knocked his books out of his hands, making him go down again. His classmates laughed at him. He got up, grabbed his books, ran outside, and kept running until he couldn't run any longer. He ended up walking for 10 miles just following a road and not knowing where he was going. But he didn't care if he died that day. The next week he wasn't at school. Someone started a rumor that he committed suicide. Everyone laughed. Nobody called to see if he was all right. Nobody cared. He never told anyone about what happened when he returned to school. When everyone saw that he was still alive, they were disappointed. And told him to go unalive himself. Do it properly this time. What they didn't know was that his stepdad had hurt him so badly and that he was in hospital for 3 days. Too sick to attend school. He was still not well from what his stepfather did to him. It was then that everyone saw his body. Covered in black and blue welts across his back, legs, and arms. He had tears falling from his eyes and was clearly ashamed of his body. They didn't touch his clothes or call him names or hit him. This time they left him alone. That boy is me. I cut my pregnant sister off financially, and telling her having another baby would be irresponsible of her. I'm 22 and she's 25. My sister, Mia's son, is 7 months old and the father is not in her baby's life at all. He basically dipped the week after the baby was born. I've been supporting both of them financially while my sister Mia gets back on her feet and looks for a job to pay the bills all on her own. Fast forward to 2 days ago, she calls me excitedly, telling me she has big news. Deep down in my heart I already knew what she was about to say, and my intuition was confirmed when she said she was pregnant again. She went on and on about how she met a new guy she hadn't told me about and how nice he treats her and the baby. That she really feels like he's the one and how she can't wait for the family she was supposed to have. I basically laid it out straight to her. She hasn't been dating this guy for very long, and yet she's already pregnant and wanting to marry him simply because he treats her and the baby nicely. He isn't helping with bills, or providing in any way. This was not likely to last, and she'll be a single mom of 2. Not to mention how dangerous it is to get pregnant this soon after giving birth. She told me I was being fake and that I wasn't acting like family. That I should support her like our mother is. Turns out, our mother is kissing her butt and only enforcing the rose-colored glasses Mia has on the situation. Telling her stories of how our stepdad only knew her for 2 months before he married her and blah blah. I told her that I can't support her or any other children should she decide to go through with this. I essentially said, I'm not pressuring you into anything. This is your choice, but I refuse to be financing this choice. You're on your own, Mia. I can't enable you to dig yourself further in holes you can't climb out of because of irresponsible unplanned pregnancies, and I refuse to, of course. She didn't take that well. Started crying. And saying how I just don't want her to be happy, how much of a beach I am, and hung up. Our mother isn't very happy with me now. I do feel bad. I don't think I worded it the best, nor should I have called her irresponsible. I'm just at my breaking point.
What's your most heartbreaking betrayal story? So let's start from the beginning. My ex and I, we were like 2 peas in a pod. We started dating back in 11th grade, and from then on, it was like we were glued to each other's side. I legit thought he was my soulmate, the guy I was gonna grow old with. We shared so much, right? Laughs, dreams, plans for the future. Sure, we fought sometimes, but who doesn't? We always made it a point to talk it out though, to sort things out like adults. Then, 5 months ago, Out of nowhere, he decides to break up with me. Didn't even have the decency to tell me why. I asked him over and over again, but nothing. He blocked me on social media next, and I just had to accept it, even though it felt like a punch to the gut. In the aftermath, I leaned on my sister. She's 28, and we've been best friends since we were kids. Through all the highs and lows, we've been there for each other. Over the years, our bond only got stronger, right? We stood by each other through some really tough times and also celebrated the good times together. These past 5 months have been like hell. It was getting slightly better, but the lack of closure from my ex really messed me up. I barely went out anymore, kind of like I was stuck in a bad loop. Then one day, my mom walks into my room and drops this bombshell on me. My ex was downstairs, and he wanted to talk. I somehow pulled myself together and went down to meet him. He was there, sitting on our couch, and he told me he had something important to tell me. I remember thinking, finally, some answers. But then he said we had to wait for my sister to get home. I thought it was odd but figured maybe he just wanted some support for the tough talk. 20 minutes later, my sister got home from work. She saw him and asked him what he was doing there. He replied, "I need to tell her." At this point, my mind was racing with possibilities. Did he cheat on me? Get someone pregnant? Was he gay? I grabbed my sister's hand, feeling like I was about to get hit with a bombshell. My sister pulled her hand away, and it felt weird, but I brushed it off. Then my ex looked at me, straight in the eye, and said, "Your sister and I are dating. We're in love." I was stunned, like my brain just short-circuited. I remember whispering, "What?" because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My sister started talking then, trying to explain, but I couldn't hear anything over the ringing in my ears. I just started crying, ran up to my room, and locked myself in. My parents, who had been in the kitchen, heard the whole thing. I must have cried for hours until my head started to throb. I went downstairs to get some water, and only my mom was there. She hugged me and said, "I know it hurts. I can't imagine how you feel. Take all the time you need, but try to find it in your heart to forgive them, especially your sister. Love is complicated." I was taken aback. My mom was actually siding with them. I ran back upstairs, packed my bag, and headed over to my friend's place. She's one of the few people who actually understands how I feel. I've never felt so betrayed in my life, not just by my sister and ex, but also by my parents. It's just beyond messed up. Why does Selena Gomez look so ugly now? You mean why she gained so much weight? Well, there's a very good reason for the change in her looks, and it doesn't involve eating more donuts than a cop during a slow shift, unlike myself. She spent most of the last decade fighting lupus, an autoimmune disease that makes the body's immune system become hyperactive and attack normal tissue. In 2017, at the age of 24, she almost died from it, and she had to have a kidney transplant, which her friend Francia Risa was more than happy to give. Since she first revealed she had the disease, way back in 2015, she has been an advocate for sufferers of the disease. She has been very open about the struggles she has on a daily basis and has had no problem with fighting back against those who body shame her or those who suffer from lupus, because the reason they dramatically gain and lose weight is the medication they have to take, and since there's no cure for it, they have to take it for the rest of their lives. Selena said in a recent TikTok live, "When I'm taking it, I tend to hold a lot of water weight, and that happens very normally. When I'm off of it, I tend to lose weight." I just wanted to say and encourage anyone out there who feels any sort of shame for exactly what they're going through, and no one knows the real story. I just want people to know that you're beautiful, and you're wonderful. Yeah, we have days where maybe we feel like poop, but I would rather be healthy and take care of myself. My medications are important, and I believe that they're what helps me. I'm not a model, never will be. And I think they're awesome, mind you. I'm just definitely not that. I just wanted to tell you I love you guys, and thanks for supporting me and understanding. And if not, go away, cause honestly I don't believe in shaming people for their bodies, or anything. I honestly think she looks better than ever because, after everything she's been through in the past decade, she's more confident than ever, and confidence and self-acceptance are beautiful to see. She once sang, "I just want to look good for you," but by the looks of it, she learned to look good for her, and that's all that matters.
My 31F fiancé's 30M ex 29F died, and my relationship is in shambles. It was supposed to be the happiest moment of our lives. My fiancé and I were planning our wedding, picking out flowers, tasting cakes, and imagining our future together. But then his ex-girlfriend died, and everything changed. At first, I tried to be supportive. I knew they had a history together, and I wanted to be there for him in any way I could. But as time went on, I realized that his grief was consuming him. He would spend hours staring at old photos and crying, and whenever I tried to talk to him about our wedding plans, he would shut down. I felt like I was being pushed aside for someone who wasn't even alive anymore. It was a terrible feeling, and I started to resent him for it. I tried talking to him about how I was feeling, but he would always shut me down, saying that I didn't understand what he was going through. I tried to be patient, but eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to feel like I mattered too, and I wasn't getting that from him. We started fighting all the time, and it felt like our relationship was falling apart. One night, I went out with some friends to blow off some steam. I ended up meeting someone, and we hit it off immediately. We talked for hours, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was being appreciated for who I am. Things started to get physical, and before I knew it, we were in his bed. It was exhilarating, and I felt alive for the first time in months. But as soon as it was over, I felt guilty. I knew I had cheated on my fiancée, and it was wrong. I didn't tell him. I couldn't bear to hurt him any more than he already was. But the guilt ate away at me, and eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to come clean. I expected him to be angry, to yell at me and maybe even break up with me. But what he said next shocked me. He told me that he had cheated on me too. With his ex-girlfriend. I was stunned. How could he do that? I felt like everything we had built together was a lie. But at the same time, I couldn't be angry with him. I knew what it was like to feel lost and alone, and I could empathize with the pain he must have been going through. We talked for hours, and by the end of the conversation, we both had tears in our eyes. We both realized that we had been looking for something that we couldn't find in each other. We needed to grieve and heal separately, and maybe one day, we could come back together and build something stronger. It was a bittersweet moment, but it was also liberating. We both knew that we were free to explore who we were and what we needed in life. But as we said our goodbyes, something unexpected happened. We both realized that we still had feelings for each other, despite everything that had happened. We hugged each other tightly, and for the first time in a long time, we felt a spark of hope. We both knew that our relationship was far from over, and that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. We said our goodbyes, and I watched him walk away, ready to face whatever the future held for us.
Men of Reddit, what's the most hurtful thing a girl has ever said to you? When I was about 20, one of my best friends came around and was upset that a guy had rejected her and said she wasn't attractive. She was crying and slightly drunk. As I hugged her, she said, "Now I understand what it must feel like to be you." Several of the girls in my high school at the end of the school year told me they took a vote and I was voted ugliest kid in school. Your son has a new father that loves him. You should just stay out of his life. I once had a girl I was interested in openly flirting with tell me, "Too bad you aren't as good looking as your brothers." I have self-confidence issues, but being told I was the ugly brother was absolutely brutal to hear. For the record, I have 4 brothers. You are like perfect boyfriend material. I just wish you were better looking. Word for word, after talking to her for a couple of weeks. Your laugh sounds horrible. Don't ever laugh again. I used to laugh all the time, but when I got told this it stopped because whenever I laugh I remember those words.
Has someone told you something that bothers you today? I made the mistake to visit my abusive parents once as they had not seen their grandkids in quite a while, and for good reasons. When I arrived, I quickly realized my instincts about going were right, and what was supposed to be a heartfelt visit turned into a nightmare. I should have known better, I keep telling myself. They tried forcing my kids and I to stay and not go back to my home as we moved across the country. My partner had no idea I was being held hostage with our kids. In secret, I let my partner know. First, we booked a flight for him to come get us, but my parents found out and refused to allow it. I then booked flights for my kids and I on the soonest flight. I had to plan our escape when my parents were at work. I asked to borrow my mother's car, which made her suspicious, but I told her I was needing it to take my kids to a play center, and thankfully she allowed. I waited until they left, quickly packed our suitcases, and loaded her vehicle. I was panicking the entire time. My dad then suddenly comes in. Thankfully he did not see the luggage as he walked by her vehicle. He comes in to see me upstairs pretending to act busy. He then says something I will never forget. "You know you were nothing but a spoiled bitch of a daughter." He then went on a rant about "you better not think about leaving." I reply with, "I was just visiting Dad. You and Mom knew this." He then screams, nearly hitting the wall, and says, "So you only wanted a free trip, eh?" I shook my head and reminded him that he offered to use his points because they begged us to visit. They knew I could not afford to pay for the entire trip. I never considered myself spoiled, nor a bitch. I was often neglected and abused growing up, hence why I eventually moved far away from them. Thankfully he left back to work so I could load my kids up and rush to the airport. I left them the spare keys, paid for extended parking when I got to the airport, then texted them where the car was when I was on board. I also left money in their car and an apology for having to leave like this, but they left me no choice. I should have trusted my gut and not went. My annoying vegan daughter came into the steakhouse I work at and started protesting, so I served her steak for dinner that night. My daughter has turned vegan about 6 months ago, and she has made it her mission to shove it down everyone's throats. The thing is, my wife and I have genuinely tried our best to accommodate it, and have gone as far as having a vegan family dinner night twice a week, buying vegan groceries for her, and for her birthday we went to a vegan restaurant. We have also tried learning about veganism, and my wife has tried going vegan, but it wasn't for her. Personally, I can support the cause, but this lifestyle just isn't for me. I love steak too much. But the problem seems to be that my daughter is incapable of understanding that we do not want to be vegan. If my wife and I are eating meat or dairy, our daughter will take her plate of food and eat upstairs. She also refuses to speak to us for the duration of the day if she sees us cooking something non-vegan. We have even had to buy her a spare fridge to keep vegan products in because she claims she will not keep her healthy cruelty-free food alongside the disgusting unalive meat. She will not stay in the same room as us if we are eating meat, meaning we only eat as a family twice a week, on vegan dinner night. She is also very vocal about how great veganism is and what cruel animal killers my wife and I are. We have tried to talk to her a few times gently about her behavior, but each time she says she just cared about animals. The main argument my daughter and I are having right now is the fact that I work in a steakhouse, and she let me know this was a problem very early on in her vegan journey. I told her I was sorry, but I had been working in that steakhouse for a decade and have built up a very secure job with pretty good financial stability. I also absolutely love steak, and every now and again my job will allow me to bring home a steak at the end of the day for dinner. My daughter has seen me enjoy this steak many times, and it drives her crazy each time. Well, about 2 weeks ago I brought home a steak and was having it with dinner, and my daughter, upon seeing it, said the next time I do this she will boycott the restaurant. I laughed thinking it was a joke, but she went upstairs not saying anything else. I honestly forgot the conversation even happened, and 2 days ago I brought home steak again. My daughter didn't say anything, but it's now clear she was planning something. The very next day, which was yesterday, she stormed into the restaurant with a huge sign demanding to shut down this steakhouse for animal cruelty. When the manager tried to tell her to leave, she started recording the entire thing and called out specifically for me, telling me she is ashamed of me for supporting the unaliving of animals. She stayed in the restaurant for about 20 minutes, screaming and yelling about animal cruelty and how veganism is the way forward, distracting the customers, which led to a few of them leaving. I was reprimanded heavily in the office after this and was told if another incident like that happens I will be fired. I was so embarrassed, even ashamed of my own daughter, but mostly angry. I came home and got into a huge argument with her about it, calling her disrespectful and entitled and that she could have gotten me fired. She retorted back saying that maybe I should get fired from that slaughterhouse. I told her that the slaughterhouse is what puts food on the table for her. We ended up getting nowhere with the conversation, but when dinner came around it happened to be family vegan night. My daughter came down excited for the food, not paying any attention to our interaction earlier and acting like nothing was wrong. She was very, very surprised to see an 8-ounce steak on all of our plates, including hers. My boyfriend won't talk to me and is suggesting we break up after I saw his burn marks. My boyfriend's house burned down when he was young. He and his father were severely burned. They lived but his mother passed away. He and I met in freshman year and became best friends in sophomore year. I've never seen his marks in full good view until now, only small glimpses if his shirt rode up and he'd quickly fix his shirt to cover it. He always hides his marks, constantly wearing jeans and pants and long sleeve shirts even if it's super hot outside. His scars start from the bottom half of his ribs to just above his knees, so this is the only way he can cover them. He even brings his pajamas into the bathroom to change into. He's done this ever since I've known him. Even after intimacy, which we do in the dark, he'll immediately get changed back into his clothes back on before we cuddle or do anything else. I know he is ashamed of his scars, and when we were friends I was fiercely protective and always changed the subject if his scars got brought up, which he always thanked me for. I have never and would never ask or pressure him to show me. I don't judge his marks or think they're ugly. I thought he knew I wouldn't judge him because some of his dad's burn marks are impossible to cover up, one of them covering half his face, and never once have I judged or even thought his dad's marks were disturbing. He's a very handsome man, they both are, which is why I'm so confused by his reaction and accusations of this. I work weird hours, so sometimes I can come home at 9 a.m., sometimes 5 p.m., sometimes the butt crack of dawn. I went to immediately take a shower. I was in airplane mode and was completely exhausted. I opened the bathroom door and he was getting changed. I saw his marks fully. I'll admit, I stared not because I thought they were gross but because I was having an oh crap moment knowing I messed up. He and I have been dating for almost a year. I had to move into his place a while ago after my parents went no contact and cut me off after I came out and told them I was dating a boyfriend, so I'm not used to sharing an apartment with someone. He blew up at me, yelling at me to get out. I shut the door and he went quiet. I was pacing in the kitchen for almost 30 minutes when he quickly walked past me trying to leave when I stopped him. He was mad, yelling at me that he thought I would know how to knock by now and questioning if I did it on purpose. I was trying to explain while trying not to cry because I saw how red his eyes were. I knew he was crying. I couldn't say anything and just made incomprehensible sobs as I tried to explain that I was, but he wouldn't listen and left without saying where he was going. He texted me an hour ago with a single message of, "I'm not coming home, tomorrow we can talk about our relationship." I immediately messaged him back asking what that meant and spent several minutes watching that little text incoming bubble bob in and out before he texted whether we should stay together. After hanging out with my brother for an evening, my boyfriend asked me to dial back my relationship with him. I have been dating my boyfriend for 2 years now. I met him when I was living on the other side of the country, but about 6 weeks ago, I moved back to my hometown for a new job. My boyfriend is planning on following me, and once he gets here, we're going to get an apartment together. So for right now, I'm just staying with my parents. My brother also lives in my hometown. My brother and I are very close, always have been, ever since we were little. People have mistaken us for fraternal twins our entire life, even though we're 18 months apart, because we just sync up like twins do, I guess. I consider him to be my best friend and I love spending time with him, which we've been doing a lot of since I moved home. Anyway, my boyfriend is visiting me and my family right now. And last night things got kinda weird between me and my boyfriend. My brother came over for family dinner, and then afterwards, my boyfriend, my brother, and I sat down and watched a couple episodes of Daredevil. I don't know why, none of us really seem to like it, but for whatever reason, we keep watching it. My brother is one of the funniest people I've ever met. The stuff he comes up with is just so ridiculous and absurd, I don't know how he does it. Anyway, he starts making fun of Daredevil, which has both me and my boyfriend laughing. We're throwing in our own jokes, too, and we're all just having some fun. Then my brother really started to go into Kingpin, and I don't know what it was about these particular jokes, but crap, they were making me laugh so hard I couldn't breathe. My abs were hurting so bad, there were tears in my eyes, we had to pause the show so I could have a minute to compose myself. I haven't laughed that hard in years. Once I finally calmed down, my brother looked pretty chuffed with himself. He said something like, "I'm really glad that I can still make You laugh that hard. And then I said something like, I think you're the only person who can make me laugh that hard. After that episode was over, I decided to take a shower, leaving my brother and my boyfriend to hang out. I like to take really long showers, and we only have one bathroom in our house. I was at the tail end of my shower, when my brother knocked and said he really had to pee. I said I was almost done, could he give me 10 minutes, and he said no, because he had to leave in the next 2 minutes so he could catch his train home. Okay, fine, he can pee. So he comes in, goes pee, and when he's done, he says something like, that was some quality goofing off tonight, sis. I agree. We tell each other that we love each other, he wishes me a good night and then leaves. I realize that different gender siblings using the bathroom at the same time can be awkward and strange for some. It's not a terribly huge deal for me and my brother. I mean, we both try to avoid it, and if my brother hadn't needed to leave right then, he would have waited until I was done. It's not something that happens very often. So then I'm getting ready for bed, and I can just feel that something is bothering my boyfriend. He just seems really tense. So I ask him if everything is alright. He hesitates and says something about how he has never seen me laugh so hard before, and it kind of weirded him out. Startled, I asked him why, and he said it was because, okay, I don't know if I'm accurately explaining my boyfriend's argument because I really didn't understand it, but like, it was weird that my brother made me laugh that hard because he's my brother. It just didn't seem appropriate. Like, only friends and significant others should make me laugh that hard? I didn't really know what to say to this, so I was just like, oh. Okay. Then he started talking about how weird it was that he went pee when I was in the shower, and I started talking about how he had to catch his train. And how yeah, it's kinda weird, but when you gotta go, and my boyfriend cut me off and started talking again about how it just seemed weird and inappropriate, because I was unclothed. Or something? I don't know. So then my boyfriend asks if I would be willing to dial back my relationship with my brother. When I ask him to clarify, he explains that he wants me to hang out with him less. Like, a lot less. Like, the less, the better. When I ask why, he keeps going back to this whole inappropriate relationship thing and, I don't know, I was getting super emotional and hurt and confused at this point, so I just said something like, I'm having trouble processing all this. Can we talk tomorrow? He said okay, but wanted to add that he understands that my brother is important to me, and he understands that spending time with him makes me happy, and so if I don't grant my boyfriend his request, he won't make a fuss. But he just wanted to let me know his feelings on all this. After hanging out with my brother for an evening, my boyfriend asked me to dial back my relationship with him. The next morning, after breakfast, we were back in my bedroom, and I tried bringing this all up again. And he immediately looked uncomfortable and said, I'm sorry I mentioned all that stuff, can we just pretend I never said anything? And I was like, no, let's talk about this, and I started launching into this whole prepared speech about my brother making me laugh super hard and using the bathroom when I was showering, and he just seemed really distracted and kept shooting looks at my bedroom door. I stopped and asked if something was wrong and he said, look, can we maybe talk somewhere, not in your parents' house? I'm just super paranoid they're going to knock on your door any minute. Which kind of startled me again, but I said okay and we ended up walking to a nearby park and sitting on a bench for a while. So we ended up having a super long talk, but here were the basic points. His family was very different from my family. I mean, he was an only child for most of his childhood, and when he got step-siblings, they were all teenagers already and they moved into a house with 1,000,000 bathrooms. So sharing a bathroom, family explicitity, all that? A very strange and foreign concept to him. When my brother got up, knocked on the bathroom door, and then walked in after I gave him the okay, it just, really freaked him out. He didn't know what to make of that. And then I gave my side of the story, saying that, as he could clearly see from staying at my house, we did not have 3 bathrooms when I was growing up. And while I'd say, for 90% of my showers, I got the bathroom completely to myself, every once in a while, someone really has to go pee. I mean, that's it. It's just, not a big deal to me and family. And besides, once my boyfriend and I move in together, this will all be a non-issue anyway, right? My brother. And I won't be sharing a bathroom again anytime soon after that. 2. What he was trying to say about me dialing back my relationship with my brother was more like, he knows I spend a lot of time with my brother. Like, 2 or 3 days a week, not including all the time I spend at my parents doing family stuff, which is typically another 1 or 2 days a week. How much time was I planning on spending with my brother, and family, when he moved here? Was I going to be out 5 nights a week? Or was my brother going to be around our place all the time? Because that thought, really bummed him out and made him feel like he wasn't a priority. That made me upset. I never meant to make him feel like he wasn't a priority. But honestly, I hadn't really thought about how much time I was going to spend with family when he moved here. So we talked about that for a while, and expectations and boundaries were figured out. And no, I will not be out 5 nights a week with family and my brother will definitely not be hanging around our place all the time. 3. I apologized about my comment about how my brother was the only person who can make me laugh that hard. He got embarrassed again and said that there was nothing inappropriate about that, and he apologized for phrasing it that way. He was jealous. But he wasn't really jealous of how hard my brother made me laugh, although that was part of the reason. He was jealous that my brother and I can see each other whenever we want, but my boyfriend and I can't do that, since we're long distance. And he was jealous that I had such a tight relationship with my brother, and how my brother knew me so much better than he did. The only person in my boyfriend's life that knew him better than anyone else was me. But, he wasn't that person to me in my life. If that makes sense. I didn't really know what to say to that, so I said something like, I'm sorry, but, like, I don't really know what to say. My brother has known me for 30 years, and you've only known me for 3. So yeah, he does know me better than almost anyone else, but that doesn't mean my relationship with him is better than my relationship with you. It's just different. He conceded that this was just a hang-up he needed to work out on his own. Which is, fine, but I still kind of feel like I botched the landing at this point in our conversation. 4, and finally. I wasn't expecting this, but he told me that while he was really appreciative and grateful that my parents were letting him stay in their house, he, kind of really didn't want to stay with them when he was visiting me. Again, being around family all the time was a weird concept to him in general, but he also just wanted some privacy with me. He said staying at my parents' house made him feel like a teenager sneaking around with his high school girlfriend again. He really wanted to stay in a hotel. He actually brought that up with me a few weeks before he came out to visit, but I scoffed at the idea. I was totally thinking in terms of money. The idea of privacy didn't even cross my mind. Why would you want to stay in a hotel? You can just stay at my parents' house with me. He then said something about making too much noise and distracting them, and I was like, pish posh. Don't be silly, my bedroom is all the way on the other side of the house, they can't hear anything. My parents are so excited to see you. My dad really wants to show you the fig tree he planted and blah blah blah, and he was just like, yeah, okay, you're right. We should save money. He didn't want to object or make waves because he thought that would hurt my feelings. But I kind of felt like a colossal idiot for not realizing what he was actually trying to tell me, so I apologized for being so thick. Although, I did say something to him like, look, I sometimes forget that not everyone likes being around my family as much as I do. Please tell me if you're ever feeling overwhelmed by them, or want to be away from them, or anything like that. I get it. It won't hurt my feelings. So we actually pulled out our phones and looked up some hotels in our city right there in the park. We found a somewhat expensive one near downtown, but I was like, whatever, I'm making bank at my job and I basically have no bills to pay since I'm living with my parents, let's stay there. Which made my boyfriend stupid happy. We went back to my parents' house, and while he was packing his bag, I told my parents that we were going to go crash at a hotel for the rest of my boyfriend's visit. They both started to object, but when I said, well, we just really like some privacy, they understood. Well, my mom understood. My dad just kept saying, I don't understand why you're spending money on a hotel when you have a perfectly good bed right here. So, I think that's where I get some of my thick-headedness. We had an amazing few days together at the hotel. Oh, and there was this super cute moment. We somehow got back on the topic of my brother knowing me for 3 decades. And at one point, I jokingly said something like, if you don't know me as well as my brother does after we've been together for 30 years, then that's your fault, not mine. And then he got all quiet for a second and got a cute little smile on his face and was like, you think we're gonna be together in 30 years? And I blushed a little and said, I'd really like to be. And he said, I'd really like that, too. Which made me all warm and happy inside.
2 tampons are ending my marriage. I, 29, have been with my husband, 30, for 7 years and married for 4. I've never had reason to suspect he was unfaithful to me or even remotely dissatisfied with our marriage. He likes to joke that we're still living a honeymoon phase nearly 5 years and 2 kids in. I wouldn't have questioned that, or him, were it not for a surprise I found in his car last month. When buckling our daughter into her car seat, I noticed something slotted between the cushions. I pulled it out and saw that it was a tampon. This wouldn't have been so unusual had I not had an IUD that has stopped my period for the past year, and I didn't even recognize the wrapper style. I brought it to my husband's attention, and he didn't seem to understand what it was, let alone why I was holding it until I told him where I'd found it and why I was almost certain it wasn't mine. He shrugged and said it probably belonged to his coworker, Fiona. It's not uncommon for my husband to carpool to lunch with his coworkers, and we're both fairly close to Fiona and her husband, so I figured it was entirely possible the tampon had slipped out of her purse whenever he had driven with them or offered her a ride. No big deal. I put it out of my mind until we had dinner with Fiona and her husband a couple of weeks later. I had sincerely wanted to believe my husband. I just couldn't get over the way it had been tucked in the seat and how my husband had seemed not to have any regard for it whatsoever. Maybe playing dumb. I don't know. I did something that I now feel kind of crazy for doing. I faked an emergency and asked Fiona if she had any tampons while we were out together. She handed me one almost identical to the tampon I'd found in our backseat, and I breathed a sigh of relief. So the tampon, there was probably the same tampon here, and in all likelihood, there was an innocent explanation as to why it had been left in the backseat in the first place. I thought I'd seen the last of the out-of-place feminine hygiene products until I found another tampon this morning. This time in my sock drawer. I feel physically ill at the thought of my husband having an affair and even more nauseated at the thought that the woman might have left these tampons out for me to find. If it was my husband's coworker, why would she give herself away by offering me one the other night? In any other situation, I would want to talk to my husband about this, but I feel too sick, and embarrassed, to approach him with what I've found. What should I do? 2 tampons are ending my marriage. Shortly after posting on here, I told my sister what happened. The tampon in the backseat and the sock drawer, my husband's cluelessness, the tampon from Fiona, and all the things I suspected but didn't want to believe. We compared tampons, save for the backseat one I had already discarded, and they were a match, just in different absorbencies. I hadn't left either in a place where my husband or daughters would have found them and moved them around. My daughters didn't know what they were or where they had come from. My sister was convinced it was Fiona, either effing my husband, effing with me, or both. Direct confrontation with either party still seemed like a bad idea, so she suggested inviting Fiona and her husband over for our Labor Day barbecue. Unfortunately, they already had plans. My sister and I agreed that it was too soon for cameras without any other evidence, so it was just a waiting game from there. I watched my husband for any changed behavior, there was none. Our house for any misplaced/foreign items, there were none, and even the girls for any new friends they might have met. My sister's husband was adamant on this last point, and partly why he was inclined to believe that the tampons were harmless. If anything had been happening in or around our home, he said, it would be nearly impossible to keep it from me and the girls, since my husband was the one taking them to and from daycare and most other activities during the week. I felt a good bit of consolation in that. It wasn't until my younger daughter, 2 years old, came down with something last week that I felt any differently. I wanted to be the one home taking care of her, but my husband insisted that I stay at work while he stayed home with her. I was okay with that. My sister and her husband figured it was a good sign that he would take the time off at a moment's notice, and at that point, we were all already beginning to put the tampon fiasco behind us. By the third or fourth day, I was just happy to see a near-healthy child and a husband who was helping see her through it. Toward the end of that week, though, I came home to something strange. The toddler that I'd left that morning in an old PJ set was now dressed in a onesie I'd never seen before, with a tiny clip in her hair. I can't say I have the sharpest memory, but I have a pretty good sense of what my kids wear on a day-to-day basis, and particularly what kinds of clothes they wear. I'd sworn off the full-length sleep suits with snaps across the front long before we'd ever had our second. The long snaps are just a pain in the butt and a no-go for efficient diaper changes, in my opinion. It's just not something I would dress her in, and my husband knows as much. He doesn't plan for, or buy, the girls' clothes, and he certainly doesn't accessorize them, so I was bewildered. And kind of floored at the thought of someone around our sick child without my knowledge. I didn't think twice, and I went straight to my husband to ask if anyone had been over to see him or the girls. He seemed confused, like before, and asked me why I would think that. It had just been him and the kids all day. I asked him again, if someone had so much as stopped by to say hello, and he denied it. He told me to calm down. I might have lashed out and come forward with the accusations right then and there, but our older daughter was in the room, and she sensed something was up. In a calmer voice, I asked him a third time if anyone had been around our children, and my husband swore that the girls hadn't been around anyone but him. He also denied buying new clothes or doing anyone's hair. With our daughter in the room and my emotions all over the place, I decided to leave it. I couldn't make sense of it then, and it hardly seems clearer now, after I've driven myself half crazy with explanations that aren't adding up. My nightmare future sister-in-law uninvited me and my rescues to her wedding because I won't let her use my house as their wedding venue. So I canceled the venue, food, and decorations. I have a brother who is hoping to get married to his fiancée. They have been in a relationship for a long time, so she isn't new to the family. We're all European, but I own a gorgeous house in Colorado. It is in the middle of the mountains, surrounded by forests, and has huge windows looking out on my acres surrounding. It truly is stunning and a dream come true. A couple of months ago my brother came to me and asked me if they could use my house for a destination wedding. While I was hesitant to host a wedding in the house of my dreams, I can understand how my dream home is her dream venue. I told him they absolutely could, but had some rules. There should be no more than 25 guests. It truly is in the middle of nowhere, so guests would have to sleep at the house and I simply do not have room for more. Then I added that nothing should be permanently altered in or around the house, no smoking indoors, and any damage done by them or their guests would have to be paid for. Since I'm quite protective of the house, I offered to decorate and find a caterer, and that'd be my gift to them. So, I'm providing them with a venue, food, and decorations. I am currently almost 10K into my gift because it's my brother's wedding and it's what I wanted to do. Now, poop has hit the fan. His fiancée decided she needed at least 45 guests. I asked her if she wanted to stack them and she got salty. On top of that, she wants me to pay to fly her family, and because I fronted the money to my other brother, he is paying me back. I told her no, and again I got sassed. On top of that, she wants me to build a pergola, paint my living room, cover up the beautiful wood, and also pay for the drinks. I said no, I've done enough. She has now taken it upon herself to tell people I'm coming back on my promises and that I left her hanging, that she can't afford the super expensive wedding I made her plan, and even went as far as to uninvite my grandparents, just to spite me. Her word were you wanted me to cut back on guests, so I'm picking your family. I'm getting at least 2 messages a day asking me why I'm ruining her day, and it is because I am jealous of her. Today, she called me to tell me that if I keep going out of my way to make her miserable, I and my rescues, 2 of my children are adopted, would not be invited either. While I find it absurd that she thinks she can uninvite me from my own house, the fact that she referred to my kids as rescues has me fuming. I am considering canceling the whole thing, but be royally over my brother in the process, who has done nothing wrong. I heard they were visiting my parents and I drove down as well, mostly because I wanted people present to witness the conversation. I told her and my brother that since my home did not suit her needs and it was stressing her out to the point that she was calling my children names, I no longer felt like I was giving them the appropriate gift by supplying a venue, caterer, and decorations. I said that I felt like in my efforts to protect my home, I was limiting their options too much, standing in the way of their dream wedding, and as a result would no longer be hosting. My brother seemed relieved, admitted to not quite wanting a destination wedding and that things got a little out of hand during the planning phase, thanked me for my willingness to help, and offered to pay me back for the deposits I'm losing, which I appreciated but declined. His wife, however, accused me of being petty and jealous because I'm single and no one wants me and going out of my way to cause her stress and ruin her day. She then pointed at my 2 youngest children and said, "You're doing more for strangers than you are your own family." The kids are luckily young enough so they didn't catch on to this, but my older 2 did and were shocked, and so were my parents. I told her she had all 3 seconds to get out of my line of sight before I would be bringing hellfire down on her. While instructing my children to leave the room, my father stepped in, said it would indeed be better for her to leave, and told my brother that he was sorry, but that this was unacceptable. My brother agreed, took her home, and has since called me to apologize and to say that the wedding planning has been put on hold until she comes to her senses. Girls who peaked in high school, what happened after graduation? High schoolers used to harass me and tell me they wanted to get me pregnant behind my middle school. I was often called pretty because I was skinny, had clear skin, long hair and fit every beauty standard. I was even able to get a wavy-haired Japanese boyfriend who worshipped me, and called himself lucky because I chose to tickle his prostate. I was living the dream, being the center of attention and getting treated perfectly, but I never realized that I peaked in high school. After graduation, I left Japan and went to study in America since it has always been my dream. I never imagined that this would be the beginning of my downfall. Once I moved into the dorms, my rose-tinted glasses fell off, and I started to see just how terrible McDonald's people live. I never had any privacy to myself, and I can't count how many times I had to go to the bathroom to fart because I didn't want my roommate to hear. I had to wear nose pinchers and risk being called insane because of how bad the air around campus smelled. And my neighbors were always going to town with some randos, so I blasted Baby Shark to help with the romantic mood. My boyfriend got to hear about all my complaints because everyone around me thought this was normal. He'd tell me to move back because he missed me, and though it was tempting, I had already paid the tuition, so there was no turning back now. But what really made me decide never to go back to Japan was losing my clear skin. Suddenly, I had blackheads, ugly pimples, and red, dry patches. There were so many pimples that I joked about starting a pimple popping account to pay for tuition. People even laughed when they saw me. Even the supposedly nice sorority girls suggested I use stars pimple patches, but they didn't help at all. I thought if Americans mocked me for my looks, I'd definitely be bullied even worse in Japan. It was tough accepting how much I'd changed. Now, I started avoiding FaceTime calls with my boyfriend because I didn't want him to see my awful, disgusting skin. He'd get upset and say he missed seeing my beautiful face, so I couldn't deny it over the phone too. I would just silently cry to myself about it whenever he said that. I wondered what I did to deserve this, but then I noticed a pattern. All the sorority girls had thick layers of makeup hiding dots, which were obviously pimples, and my roommate spent hours on her skincare routine. Despite that, her skin still looked crusty and full of red acne. She couldn't recommend any good skincare brand because her acne resisted all treatments. With no help from her, I went online to figure out what caused my acne and how to fix it. Turns out, the new food, US makeup, or air quality could have caused my breakouts. I freaked out because that meant I was doomed to live with acne forever. After another day of stares and comments about my acne, I called my boyfriend to vent. I was so frustrated I didn't notice he switched the call to FaceTime. It wasn't until he asked, "Who are you and why do you sound like my girlfriend?" that I realized. I was more confused by what he asked than I was freaked out when he saw my pimply face. Then he followed up his question by saying that I should take off my mask because he thought I was a skinwalker. I told him my skin was messed up because of something in the States, but I was still the same person he loved. He replied that his parents would never approve of a distasteful creature and hung up. I cried for hours, trying to call him back, but he had blocked me. My boyfriend's harsh words made me realize how cruel people could be if I stayed ugly, so I skipped classes the next day to find a solution for my ugly skin. I found some products that seemed promising because other people with skin worse than mine cleared their skin with it. So, I went out and bought them the next day. I happily applied the new products, thinking they'd solve everything. But, nothing changed after 3 weeks. My roommate saw me freaking out and reminded me that she had warned me about the ineffective products. After that failed attempt, I went back to searching all over social media for a solution, though it wasn't until I was on YouTube that I found something promising. It was a video called "Is Water Ruining Your Skin?", where 2 dermatologists talked about the effects the water hardness in your house has on your skin. No matter what products you used or how long your routine was, if your water had toxic minerals like calcium carbonate, your skin wouldn't clear up and would be prone to breakouts. This explained why I broke out in America but not in Japan, since the water in Japan was very pure but the water in America was harsh and caused pimples. The dermatologists shared studies showing that high calcium carbonate in water can lead to eczema, sensitive skin, dryness and irritation. They recommended getting a water filter to remove the calcium carbonate as the best solution for dealing with hard water. The dermatologists recommended a Q-Refi water filter, saying it was clinically proven to improve the skin in 2 weeks. They also suggested using a clean towel and pillowcase to protect against bacteria. While buying the Q-Refi water filter, I filled out the water report on their website and found out my college's water had chemicals like arsenic and dibromochloromethane. None of those words are in the Bible. Finding out my water had arsenic and dibromochloromethane, which can cause skin cancer and brain damage, pushed me to get the Q-Refi filter, towel and pillowcase. After a week of using the Q-Refi filter, my skin began to improve. The pimples that had plagued me for so long started to disappear, and the dryness that made me feel self-conscious was significantly reduced. Each day, I noticed more clear patches on my face, and I would stare at myself in the mirror to admire the clear parts of my skin because I missed it so much. I looked so good, my coochie clenched. I was feeling more confident in my skin, and I even caught myself wondering if my ex would want me back, but then remembered he dumped me for being ugly, so I was better off without his bum. 2 weeks later, my skin was almost entirely clear, with barely any pimples and a healthy glow again after it finally stopped peeling like an onion. The blackheads had vanished, and for the first time since being exposed to hard water, I felt genuinely beautiful. Even my roommate experienced a similar transformation from using the Q-Refi filter. She came out of the bathroom one day, screaming with joy that her acne was finally gone. Her skin was smooth for the first time, and she looked like she just got the best day of her life. She said no product she had ever used had cleared her skin, and I had a feeling she wasn't lying about that. Unlike me, she hadn't bothered with face towels or pillowcases, proving that the soft water from the Q-Refi filter alone was the key to fixing our skin. After seeing our skin, the sorority girls asked us how we had cleared our skin because they were tired of dealing with pimples all the time. We told them about the hard water in our college, and they were disgusted that they had been washing their faces with poop-colored water all this time. So we let them, along with other girls in our hall, use our sink with the Q-Refi filter. To say we've become popular over this is an understatement. My roommate's life changed instantly after she got hot. She went from being invisible to being the center of attention, and people were genuinely interested in whatever she had to say. Even guys who avoided her like the plague were now asking for her number. She was even invited to a party for the first time, even though it was at a furry convention. She even asked me to come along to show off how hot I was. Our confidence soared to the point we didn't even care about seeing those furries. From then on, we dressed up more often, experimented with new hairstyles, and enjoyed the compliments that came our way. We even became closer, and we bonded over our new social status and went everywhere together. I love that I found a best friend through all this chaos, because I wasn't sure how I was going to survive in America. And it's a good thing I found the Q-Refi filter when I did, because I was about to increase the Japan sewer slide rates.
I saved someone's life, but I'm afraid the way I did it makes me a terrible person. When I was a 24-year-old, new college graduate, I began working in the system. I was a dumb and naive product of suburbia who went in thinking I could make a difference. Of course, I found out the system is corrupt, abusive, and riddled with predators. I did my best for a little less than 2 years, reported what I saw, of course nothing was done, and then got out. When I first started working there, I met a 15-year-old kid. I promised him I'd help him, before I learned that making promises was unwise. He left around the end of my first year and asked to keep in contact. I told him he could call me at the facility, not really expecting anything of it. He did call back regularly though. When I left, I gave him my Facebook, because I didn't want him to have my personal number. One night, he contacted me feeling like unaliving himself and on the run with warrants. I helped him turn himself in. The entire experience wrecked me, because by that point I loved that kid, and knew he'd never had any chance from the start. Violent, dysfunctional, abusive family, extreme poverty, etc. Every time he tried to turn things around, someone in his life, usually close family, sabotaged him. At that point, I'd not only left that job but moved states, started a new career, and was just trying to return to my sheltered, suburban life and put everything behind me. About 2 years later though, he contacted me. He was 18, newly released from juvie, and messing up again. I told him he could stay with me for a few days, and get his head straight, but he was on the run from parole again, so he couldn't stay long term. It didn't work out. He took off after confessing he was in love with me when I turned him down, told him it was inappropriate, and that we couldn't be together. After he left, he got sucked straight back into drugs, gangs, etc., and I cut contact for my own mental health and safety. Here is where I think I crossed the line. 6 months later, my conscience was eating at me. I found out he'd been sent to jail, so I reached out. By some fluke, he was being released with a failed placement from adult jail and negatively discharged. That meant no parole. So, for the first time since he was 12 years old, he was free and clear from the system. I offered him a spot again. He accepted. I made a deal with him. The only way he had a shot at what he wanted, me, was to get off drugs, cut contact with all his old acquaintances, leave the gangs and violent lifestyle, find a productive/positive career, and live life on the straight and narrow. I thought the chances of success were slim to none, but it was a last-ditch effort on my part. He proved me wrong. 5 years later, he's been clean and stayed clean with no slip-ups, he's gotten therapy, and has a really good career in plumbing. So, I kept my word, married him, and now we have a daughter. From the outside we look like just another average couple if you don't know the backstory. There's just always a nagging voice in the back of my head that says I'm a groomer and an awful person given how we met. Most of the time, I feel like my actions saved someone's life, albeit in an unconventional morally gray kind of way, but every once in a while I'm hit by crippling fear that I'm a terrible person. My mother just confirmed that she intentionally broke up me and my ex. My ex-boyfriend and I were together for just over 3 years. We broke up because our parents, my mother, his father, got engaged. They pulled a lot of crap, but I'm going to try and condense it. They spent months referring to us as siblings and introducing us to people as our children, and constantly joking about us as though we were full-blood relatives when there's not even a distant relation. When they got engaged, there came even more comments about how we were going to be a regular nuclear family, with a married couple and their children, and mom telling me I should think of my ex and his sister as my siblings. A bit before the breakup, I had a pregnancy scare. I told my mom, who said it was good I wasn't pregnant because how will you explain to the grandbabies that you have the same parents? They got engaged and had an engagement party where my ex wasn't in attendance, but I was. At the party, my mother gave a speech and said, "Thanks to our children, ex and op, for helping create this wonderful little family unit of ours. Aside from your incest." I then had to deal with that for the rest of the party and ex, and I wound up breaking up within a week because now our entire extended family and family friends were joking about it. The wedding was on Valentine's Day. We hadn't spoken since the breakup, but ex contacted me and asked how I wanted to handle it, and we agreed either we both go or neither of us go. We both flip-flopped back and forth on if we were going or not, but ultimately agreed to go because it would look worse if we didn't go at all, and we were both asked to be in the wedding party. It went about the same as any other wedding would go, right up until the DJ said that our parents wanted to dedicate a song to their children. And then he played Sweet Home Alabama. Cue laughter. Me and ex left after that, but my mom followed. She said it was just a joke, we didn't need to get all huffy about it, and begged us to come back inside. We refused and stood outside while we waited for the next bus. Then we got to talking, and long story short, we agreed to pick up where we left off, as we'd been apart a few months but all the feelings were still there. We'd not had any other relationships in this time, and he even still had stuff at my place. We agreed that it was stupid of us to let other people dictate our relationship, and also agreed to severely limit contact with our parents this time around. Not full no contact, but very, very low contact. We've also booked some sessions with a couples counselor starting Sunday. Today my mom asked me to meet her for coffee, and I went, thinking that this would be a perfect time to tell her we're back together, talk about boundaries, and initiate the very, very low contact my boyfriend and I had agreed on. However, I ran through the rain to get there and didn't think to touch up the concealer I'd put on the hickey my boyfriend left on my neck last night. Mom immediately sees it and asks where it's from. I was about 2 seconds away from George glassing her, but then she says it's from your brother, isn't it? I then snap, he's not my brother. She now knows everything she needs to know and basically says that she's been married less than a week and I'm already trying to ruin it. I got a bit upset and responded that she essentially ruined my relationship of 3 years in favor of her relationship of less than 18 months, and we've only just started rebuilding what they ruined. She then says clearly we didn't do a good enough job if you're already mending it. I directly asked if she was trying to break us up. She admitted that she and my new stepdad had entered into their relationship with the sole intention of ending ours because we said once, in passing, that we had been looking at houses a bit under an hour away so we could have a garden for future kids, and they didn't want to have to drive a 2-hour round trip to see us. When they realized they actually liked each other / wanted to get married, they then became even more committed to ending our relationship because they'd rather we were heartbroken than let their friends and family think that they were odd. So this whole thing started as a way to make sure we didn't move an hour away from them, and now it's them trying to make sure their friends and family don't think they're weird. My mom left an hour ago. My boyfriend is at work right now, phone off, totally oblivious. I am still at the coffee place writing this in a state of shock. What do I do with this information? I know I need to tell my boyfriend when he gets off work, but how do we approach either parent going forward, or begin to deal with this whole thing?
Time I effed up by relaxing too much during a sensual massage. Bit of backstory, I started talking to a guy on Reddit last week. We hit it off, started texting and found out that he lives about 20 minutes from me. We decided to meet for a date on Friday. I have IBS and stomach was feeling a bit dodgy, but decided to soldier on. I was also very tired. The F up. So I'm at this guy's house and I've made us a very nice mac and cheese. There was some cuddling, kissing and some love making. We're then snuggling on the sofa, and I feel a big fart brewing. I'm hoping I can just absorb it back into my body if I hold onto it long enough. We start talking about massages and the guy offers to give me one. I choose a relaxing oil. I'm naked on my front and he is naked, straddling me, kind of sitting on my bum. He starts rubbing my back. And turns out he's good at massages. I'm feeling really relaxed and start to drift off. I then wake myself up with the most earth-shattering fart I have ever expelled. The fart I was holding captive had burst free with a vengeance, displeased by the extended time spent in my rectum. It was hella loud and it was hella long. And it was right on his balls. It was so forceful, they vibrated. His response was to tell me, through tears of laughter, at least you didn't crap yourself.
Am I the a-hole for taking a stranger's side instead of my wife's, because she was wrong? My wife and I went shopping. I went to a different aisle to get some jerky. I heard my wife scream help. So I ran over, and she was freaking out because an elderly woman hugged our son. You can tell the woman was harmless. The woman's son came along and profusely stating that she had dementia and she meant no harm, that she tends to view every child as her child. I said it was okay, and I myself apologized for my wife's overreaction. During this time I was not paying attention and my wife called 911, and called over security. It became a huge mess for all parties because my wife was not letting the issue go. You could also tell the son was extremely embarrassed, as was I. I was trying to relax my wife, but she was going on a complete meltdown rage, saying that his mother should be in a home if she cannot keep her hands to herself. What if she got our kid sick, tried to kidnap him, got combative and hurt him? All of which I agree are possible outcomes, but I told her none of that happened, so let's just leave it. Security states since the wife called the police we had to wait for them to show up, so they can file a report as per their store policy. About 25 minutes later police showed up and asked what happened and my wife explained everything. You can tell the police were like, what the F is wrong with this woman? I felt nothing but disappointment. Police took the statement and started laughing as they left. Gave the son of the elderly mom a fist bump and said sorry. My wife was upset I did not have her side, she was upset how I took the side of the son instead of her. I explained his mom was clearly sick, it was a harmless gesture, and explained she was one that acted unreasonably. I did acknowledge her concerns, but nothing bad happened, we could have just let it slide and went on with our day. She told me I failed as a husband. So we ran the story by our family and friends. It is a 50-50 split. By the way, our son is 19 years old. Attorneys, what was your most satisfying case? In 1973, my parents had enough money to build a little ranch house in the country. The small bank in town approved the mortgage and the bank signed a contract to give Bob the money to build the house. Bob, as it turns out, was overbooking himself all over town, leaving his clueless minions to do the actual work. The build took longer and longer, with more and more work having to be ripped out and redone. We're not talking about using the wrong color paint or nailing up some wonky trim, here. The architect forgot to fully erase a line on the blueprints and the framers built a wall through the bathtub. My mother was told don't put anything heavy in the kitchen cabinets because they were attached to the drywall, not the studs, using a few roofing nails through the back of each cabinet. The garage door opening was framed into the living room instead of towards the driveway. And so on. When the bank's representative showed up for the final inspection, my parents met him in the front yard and refused to sign off on Bob's work. Then the representative became angry, as the bank had paid Bob a lot of money. He strode to the front door and pulled on the doorknob, whereupon the entire door, casing included, fell on him. It had simply been wedged, not nailed, into place. The bank called Bob, who finally showed up to supervise the work himself. The only problem was that Bob wasn't any better at building a house than his minions were. My parents still refused to sign off on the house. My mother was a stay-at-home mom in a nasty rental with 2 tiny children while my dad was working 2 jobs while this was going on. Throughout the entire process, the bank and Bob treated them very poorly, bullying my mom and lying to my dad. What should have been an exciting time for my parents was ruined. My mom cried a lot. My dad got depressed. Finally, the bank threatened my parents with foreclosure and Bob threatened to sue my parents for breach of contract because the bank refused to pay him any more money. So my exhausted parents went to an attorney and gave him the rundown. Plumbing, electrical, tiling issues, the whole sorry mess. My parents were scared. All they had was their small down payment savings, so if this became a lengthy court battle the bank and Bob would win. The attorney, Tom, was kind, but my dad said he could tell that he and Mom were doomed from Tom's facial expressions as he sorted through the paperwork. Then, abruptly, Tom smiled. Let's get everyone together for a meeting, he told my parents. Tomorrow. So my parents, Tom, the bank's representative, the bank's attorney, Bob, and Bob's attorney met at the bank. Tom didn't give anyone else time to begin. He said, well, my clients have decided that they no longer want this house. Please remove it. Everyone else start to laugh. Remove it? Have you lost your mind? Tom, in a sweeping, theatrical gesture, placed a deed on the table. My clients own the land the house is sitting on outright. They no longer want the house. Get the house off my client's land. Bob's attorney stared at the deed, and then turned and stared at Bob. You built a house on land you don't own? Bob nodded. The bank's attorney started yelling at the bank's representative. You didn't finance the land the house is on? The representative stammered, no? Tom said firmly, as I said, gentlemen, you're trespassing on my client's land. I expect the house to be removed and the land returned to its original state, at once. My dad said he'll remember the blank looks everyone on the other side of the table passed to one another for his whole life. Sure, the bank could foreclose, on a house that wouldn't exist by the end of the week, with no way to recoup the money. They didn't even own the land it was on. Bob was out the 50% he'd paid out of pocket, plus he was on the hook for tearing down the house and removing it. On top of that, the bank would undoubtedly want him to repay the initial 50% they'd given him. Could they have gone after my parents? Sure. A foreclosure would have meant bad credit for my parents moving forward. They might lose their down payment. But to sign off on the house in its condition at that time would have meant thousands and thousands of dollars in cash to replace/repair everything from the roof to the basement before the house could be safely lived in. The bank knew my parents didn't have that kind of money, they're the ones who approved the mortgage. Suddenly, my parents were good people, it was all such a misunderstanding, and the bank and Bob couldn't do enough for them. The house was brought in line with the original blueprints and specifications immediately, at no extra cost to my parents, but at considerable cost to Bob. My parents signed the mortgage. Bob got the rest of his money, and just about broke even on the build. The bank's representative was fired. And Tom, attorney extraordinaire, got a stinging tale of triumph to recall to fellow attorneys for the rest of his life.
I called my mom delusional for thinking I had a good childhood, and my dad thinks I was too harsh on her. I, 23 female, have a twin Angela. Angela had leukemia as a child, but she has been cancer-free since we were 10, thankfully. But since she was sick a lot as a child, I was basically invisible to our parents. Angela and I were still best friends at the time, but my parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles etc. basically forgot I existed within that time. They sent me to a boarding school from age 8 to 14. I understood that they had to send me away when Angela was undergoing treatment and they didn't have the capacity to take care of me. But it was excuse after excuse about why I couldn't come home for 4 years after Angela was cancer-free. Eventually they brought me back when I was 14, but I was very antisocial at that point and just stayed in my room all the time. I spoke to Angela here and there, but we weren't super close anymore because we had been separated for a while. Last night, I was at my parents' house with my boyfriend. My parents were showing my boyfriend the photo album of me and Angela as kids. I have some as a baby but not much after the age of like 2-ish. My boyfriend asked if there's another photo album because he wanted to see what I looked like from growing up. My mom said there aren't any more pictures of me, but he can just look at the pictures of Angela since we're identical and that's the same thing. I got quite angry at this and said we're two separate people, and she should just say they weren't interested in taking photos of me when I was growing up because they had other things to worry about, but looking at Angela isn't a replacement of the pictures I don't have. My mom said I should have sent more pictures of myself when I was at boarding school so then she'd have stuff to show. I said wow, one would think the responsibility of having pictures of a child growing up would be on the parents. When my boyfriend left, we had a bigger conversation about this. My mom said she felt like that earlier conversation showed that I resented her and my dad for that period of time where they were taking care of Angela. I admitted that I do kind of resent them for that, especially the part where they took 4 years to bring me back home after Angela wasn't sick anymore. My mom said their reasoning was that they felt like I was well settled there and having a good childhood, and they didn't want to disrupt my life by bringing me back. I was shocked to hear that and said, having a good childhood at a boarding school far from home? Are you delusional? My mom has been crying since and my dad is angry that I made her upset over something that happened so long ago. He said that I won't understand how hard that was for them until I become a parent myself, and that I should apologize to my mom for talking to her like that. I admit my tone was harsh, but I don't think I said anything wrong. So am I in the wrong here?
What is the saddest scene you have ever seen in an ER? Many years ago, before illegal drugs became the problem they are today, I had a 15-year-old girl call 911 because she had intentionally attempted to overdose, with intent to die, both for herself and her 2-year-old brother. Wow. She fortunately called 911 because she realized while she didn't want to live, it was not fair to take her baby brother's life too. She actually didn't do any harm to either of them. Thank goodness. What was most important was why she felt this was the best option. Obviously, the ambulance responded along with multiple police. The girl had attempted murder, so this was going to be thoroughly investigated. They all left me pretty much to my job while taking care of the girl. Another nurse took the baby brother to a separate area of the ER for care. The police could not track down either parent. While caring for the teen, I started to get some info about why. Long story short, both parents were drug addicts and neglectful and abusive to the 2 children. There was no food in the house, a house that was eventually deemed uninhabitable due to disrepair and filth. The children were not allowed outside or to be seen by anyone. The girl had reached her limit and just plain wanted out. Killing herself seemed her only option. She tried to kill her brother because she was afraid of what would happen to him if she wasn't there to protect him. I relayed her story to the police, who took it to the next level. Their investigation revealed frequent contact with Dad. The children were safe in the ER, so the police went seeking Dad. Mom showed up shortly after, and, in my entire 36 years as an RN, I have never seen anyone so strung out still alive. She was a stick figure with bruises everywhere we could see, constantly picking at herself, screaming things randomly, and who knows when she had a bath. The most standout thing was her eyes. I've only seen this one time and it was hers. Her eyes literally looked like her lids had turned inside out with the bright red inner eyelids showing. We had to have security to keep her out of the ER back because she kept trying to sneak in. She called her hubby from the lobby payphone and I heard her say, "The little beach turned us in." I notified the police of Mom's condition and her call to Dad. They hadn't located Dad yet, but they came and removed Mom from our ER to their holding cell. They stuck around for a bit hoping Dad would show. Normally, my shift ended at 11 p.m. Needless to say, I had lots of paperwork between the kids, the police, and DCFS, Child Services, to complete. I didn't get out until almost 3 a.m. Normally I walk out with coworkers, but I am alone now. I made the smart move and asked 2 EMTs, who had dropped off a patient, to walk me out. One was one of the most muscular men I've ever seen. We were walking down the ramp, with cars parked on either side, to the bottom where the employee parking lot was. Suddenly we saw movement a few cars further down. Dad and several of his friends were waiting for me. They were armed with baseball bats, tire irons, and chains. Fortunately, no one had a gun. The biggest fireman threw me over his shoulder and we took off up the ramp to the ER. We got in through the ambulance entrance and hit the panic button. The panic button locked down the entire ER and went directly to the 911 dispatch center. In moments we had a dozen cop cars on the ramp. Dad and his buddies were still there trying to get into the ER. Every one of them was arrested. They all were charged with something very serious relating to threatening the life of an ER nurse and 2 EMTs. We all testified in court and they went away for many years. As for the teen girl and her baby brother, they were in the hospital for about 3 days, mainly for their safety. DCFS did their investigation and it was determined to not charge the 15-year-old with anything. Both children were removed from the home, which really didn't exist anymore anyway. A family member wanted to take the children, but it was determined that the children would not be safe there. I'm not sure where they ended up. I've thought of them both over the years. I am not religious, but I still say a prayer for them. It's the only thing I can do for them. I also say one for the firefighter I believe saved my life that night. I faked being a millionaire to get invited to an exclusive party and. So I'm a girl who's an 8/10 at best, but I'm real good at makeup and I only wear Victoria's Secret, so people think I'm hotter than I actually am. And I've been goth ever since I was 12, I'm 27 now, so I know how to make myself look super intimacy with all the black clothes and dark makeup. Plus I have big boobs, 32DD, and a nice SS so that helps too. And I have long black hair that's always straightened and dyed black. So yeah, I'm pretty hot for a goth chick. And I've always had a thing for older guys, like in their 30s or 40s. They're just so much more mature and experienced than guys my own age. So anyway, one day I was on Tinder and this guy messaged me and he was super hot, like a total dilf. He was 39 and his name was Mike. He had short brown hair, blue eyes, and a really fit body. And he was wearing a suit in his profile pic, so you know he had money. So we started talking and he told me he was a lawyer and he made like $500,000 a year. And he said he liked my goth look and he thought it was sexy. And he said he wanted to take me out on a date. So we went to this really fancy restaurant downtown and Mike picked me up in his BMW M4 convertible. And when we got to the restaurant, the valet parked his car right in front of the entrance, so everyone could see it. And when we walked into the restaurant, all the waiters and hostesses were like, "Mr. Johnson. Good to see you again." So obviously Mike was a regular there and everyone knew him. And the maitre d' led us to a private booth in the back of the restaurant and Mike ordered us a bottle of Dom Perignon. And we had the most amazing meal, like lobster and caviar and poop, and throughout the whole dinner, Mike kept telling me how beautiful I was and how lucky he was to be with me. And he kept touching my leg under the table and whispering dirty things in my ear. And I could tell he was getting turned on, so I started playing footsie with him. And when we finished eating, Mike paid the bill with his black Amex card and left a $500 tip for our waiter. And then he took me back to his penthouse apartment downtown. And let me tell you, this place was effing amazing. It had floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the city skyline, a huge marble kitchen with all stainless steel appliances, a jacuzzi tub in the master bathroom, and a walk-in closet that was N-word than my bedroom. And Mike had this huge California king bed with satin sheets and like 20 pillows on it. So we went into his bedroom and started making out on the bed. And Mike was an amazing kisser, like he knew exactly what to do with his tongue. And he started taking off my clothes and kissing my neck and rubbing my tits. And then he went down on me and ate my wimp like it was his last meal. He licked and effed my clit while fingering me at the same time, and I came so hard that I squirted all over his face. And then Mike took off his clothes and I saw that he had a huge pee-pee like at least 8 inches long and really thick too. So I started effing his pee-pee and he was moaning and groaning like an adult film star. And then he flipped me over onto my hands and knees and started effing me doggy style. He was pounding into me so hard that I could feel his balls slapping against my SS content, and he was pulling my hair and spanking my SS and I was screaming and moaning like a effing porn star. And then he pulled out and came all over my face and tits. And we laid there for a minute, catching our breath and cuddling. And then Mike said, "That was amazing, baby. You're so effing hot." And I said, "Thanks, babe. You're pretty effing hot yourself." And we kissed again and fell asleep in each other's arms. The next morning, Mike made me breakfast in bed and we effed again in the shower. And then he drove me back to my apartment and gave me $500 for a cab ride home. And we made plans to see each other again soon. So yeah, that's the story of how I became a sugar baby. It all started when I was 19 and struggling to pay my bills. I was working 2 jobs and barely making ends meet. I had always been attracted to older men, so I decided to give it a try. I signed up for an online sugar daddy dating site and created a profile. I posted some intimacy pictures of myself and wrote a bio about what I was looking for in a sugar daddy. I was honest about my age and the fact that I was looking for financial support. I received a lot of messages from guys who were interested in meeting me, but none of them seemed like the right fit. They were either too old or too creepy or too cheap. But then one day, I got a message from a guy named Mark who seemed different from the rest. He was 40 years old, successful businessman, divorced with no kids. He described himself as attractive with an average build. Mark told me that he was looking for a mutually beneficial arrangement where we both would get what we wanted without any drama or strings attached. He said that he would be unaliving to give me a monthly allowance in exchange for my time and companionship. He said that he was not looking for a traditional relationship or intimacy, but he would be open to it if we had a connection. Mark seemed genuine and sincere, so I decided to meet him for coffee to see if we clicked. We met at a Starbucks and I was immediately attracted to him. He was tall and handsome with dark hair and blue eyes. He was wearing a suit and tie, which made him look even more dashing. Mark was charming and charismatic. He made me laugh and feel comfortable right away. He told me about his job and his hobbies. He asked me about my life and my goals. We talked for hours and it felt like we had known each other for years. Mark paid for my coffee and gave me his business card. He told me to call him if I wanted to continue our conversation. I thought about it for a few days and then I called Mark and agreed to be his sugar baby. He gave me an allowance of $2,000 per month, which was more than I was making at both of my jobs combined. Mark took care of all the expenses when we went out together. He treated me like a princess. We went on fancy dinners, we went to concerts and shows, we went on weekend getaways. Mark bought me designer clothes and jewelry. He took me shopping sprees at the mall. I felt like a spoiled girlfriend. I had everything that I had ever wanted. But there was one catch. Mark did expect some kind of intimacy in our arrangement. He never explicitly said that he wanted intimacy, but he hinted at it on several occasions. He would touch my hand or my leg when we were talking. He would give me lingering hugs when we said goodbye. One night, we were having dinner at a fancy restaurant and Mark asked me if I would consider taking our arrangement to the next level. He said that it was completely up to me and that he would respect my boundaries. I was tempted, I was attracted to Mark and I enjoyed spending time with him. But I was also hesitant, I didn't want to ruin our arrangement or risk getting hurt. I told Mark that I needed some time to think about it and he was understanding. We continued to see each other without any pressure or expectations, we were happy just being together. But deep down, I knew that I wanted more from our arrangement. I wanted a real relationship with Mark, I wanted to be his girlfriend, not just his sugar baby. One night, we were cuddling on the couch watching a movie when I finally got the courage to tell Mark how I felt. I told him that I had fallen in love with him and that I wanted to be exclusive. Mark was surprised but happy, he told me that he had developed feelings for me too. He said that he didn't want to rush into anything but he was unaliving to give us a chance. We decided to take things slow and see where it would go, we agreed to be monogamous and delete our profiles on the sugar daddy dating site. It's been a year since Mark and I became a couple and we couldn't be happier. We moved in together 6 months ago and we're talking about getting married in the future. Mark is still supporting me financially but now it's out of love not obligation. He pays for our rent, bills and groceries, he takes care of me in every way possible. And our intimacy life is amazing, it's passionate and intimate. It's not just about money or power anymore, it's about love and connection. My therapist denied my abuse experience, is it normal? I had a therapy session where I opened up to my therapist about being frequently touched by other children when I was a kid. However, my therapist brushed it off, claiming that it was just innocent exploration and not actual molestation since they were kids too. As someone without expertise in child development, I didn't know how to respond. Despite my therapist's dismissal, I knew deep down that what I experienced was not mere exploration. I felt scared and unsafe, and for various reasons, I didn't believe I was capable of standing up for myself. Sometimes, I reflect on that moment, and I feel foolish for bringing it up. I had intended to discuss how these experiences contributed to my struggle with pornography addiction and difficulty focusing in school. However, since my previous therapist didn't acknowledge it as trauma, I've been hesitant to bring it up with another professional, fearing that I may be overreacting. I want to emphasize that despite my experiences, I have never harmed anyone. However, I did approach dating with a nonchalant attitude during my teenage years. It wasn't recklessness or promiscuity, but rather naivety. I trusted people I dated in the past to the point of dissociation when I should have been more vigilant. Consequently, the intimate abuse continued throughout my adolescence. It's ironic because I don't consider myself a pushover, but my exes and those kids seemed calculated in exploiting my vulnerabilities and trust. They knew how to manipulate my kindness, capitalize on their strength, or exploit my emotional instability at home. Growing up, others often referred to me as smart, but the other kids didn't accept or appreciate it. They would mock or try to distract me with alternating kindness and meanness. My exes, however, recognized my intelligence and patiently waited until I trusted them to exploit me further. By the time they had me trapped, I was terrified and shocked, knowing that verbally expressing my discomfort, fear, or even having my body language convey my distress wasn't enough to escape safely. Moreover, I carry the fear that no man would want a long-term relationship with me because these experiences occurred before I turned legal age. I've overheard guys saying that being with someone who has experienced intimate abuse is too much to handle. I've even heard women advise young women to keep these secrets until they're married, but I disagree. Despite my trauma and the influence of purity culture, having a family remains one of my biggest dreams. I feel like that dream was shattered because of what I've been through. For those who might blame me, I genuinely trusted the kind and decent guys I knew as teenagers, unaware of their hidden expectations or ulterior motives that surfaced months or even a year into our relationships. I never thought the notion of boys will be boys applied to them. I do want to return to therapy, but I've been gaslighting myself since my last session, convincing myself that my experiences are insignificant and unworthy of discussion. But that's why I'm here, seeking support.
My mother-in-law wants to be included in my will. I'm dealing with a serious health situation, but I don't want to get into all the details. The thing is, I've written my will to make sure everything is organized when I'm not around anymore. It's like a plan for who gets what from my stuff. I've included people who are really important to me, like my wife, daughter, brother, and parents. It's funny, my wife and the rest of the family are all good with what I've decided. Most of my things are going to my little 2-year-old daughter. It's a bit sad because I might not be here to see her grow up, but at least I can make sure she has what she needs for her future, like money for school and maybe even a house someday. But then my mother-in-law got a bit upset when she found out she wasn't in the plan. She thought she should get something, too, even though we're not really close. I got pretty annoyed. It's my stuff, and I can decide who gets it. She can't just tell me what to do with my own money. It's not like she helped me earn it or anything. She's saying stuff like, why give so much to a little kid? She'll just waste it on parties and stuff. But I trust my wife and parents to teach her how to be smart with money. They're good people and I'll make sure she uses it wisely. My mother-in-law doesn't really know what she's talking about. She even tried to get my parents on her side and make a big fuss about it. I told her to leave them alone. They're going through a tough time already, and money isn't what's important to them right now. My will is safe with my lawyer, so she can't mess with it. But she's making threats and being all negative, which is not helping anyone. Everybody else is fine with my plan except my mother-in-law. It's weird how she thinks she deserves something when she hasn't really been a big part of my life. I worked hard for everything I have, and she acts like she deserves a piece of it without doing anything. If she wants money so badly, she should go out and earn it herself.
Could my boyfriend be planning to leave me for a prettier friend? Apologies for any language issues in advance. Recently, I attended a friend's party where I met an intriguing guy who uplifted my spirits. He was charming, funny, tall, and incredibly good looking, a great conversationalist and stylish too. After the party, he started following me on Instagram, and though I hadn't given him my account, I followed him back. A few weeks later, while walking home, I ran into a man who looked exactly like him. He even asked if we knew each other. It turns out it was him, and astonishingly, we lived just a 10-minute walk away from each other. We had a brief conversation, and when I got home, I reached out to him through direct message. He responded positively, and we agreed to hang out. During our first hangout, we ended up talking for 3 hours straight. I discovered that he is incredibly intelligent, has great taste in various aspects of life, and shares many common interests with me. He also reminds me of my male best friend. Feeling the connection, I invited him to have drinks at my place with some friends the following week. He instantly clicked with my friends, and we all had a blast. I was so impressed that I invited him to my upcoming birthday party. At my birthday party, he again became the life of the gathering. Everyone found him hilarious and he was kind and friendly to everyone, even my dad. He willingly helped out with the party arrangements. As the night progressed, we both had a few too many drinks, and at one point, we found ourselves alone in the kitchen, devouring leftovers from the cake. Suddenly, without knowing how it happened, we ended up hugging, an incredibly romantic, heartfelt embrace. We didn't discuss it and quickly separated when someone walked in. Throughout the rest of the night, we avoided the subject altogether. Once my friends left, he stayed behind to help clean up, and we ended up sitting on the kitchen floor, chatting. By then, we were both intoxicated and tired. There was a strong sense of intimate tension, and he made advances. However, due to recently ending a 2-year relationship, I hesitated to kiss him. We remained in that situation for about 10 minutes until a loud noise interrupted us, and he abruptly left. In the following weeks, we continued talking, but he hasn't been able to hang out or ask me out again. I also discovered that he spent time with some of my friends, including my stunning best friend. Let me emphasize that she is exceptionally beautiful, even by modeling standards. In contrast, I consider myself a solid 7 on the attractiveness scale. Additionally, she has a history of getting involved with male friends of her female peers. While I understand that we are not officially a couple and that we only recently met, I genuinely want to explore where this connection can lead. I would appreciate a male perspective on the situation. Does he have genuine interest in me, or is he likely to move on to my friend? Oh God, this child is a sociopath. I was substituting for a special needs class. It had 7 boys from 8 to 10 years old. The days were normally lively, but I always had everything under control, and the boys had learned to trust me and at least tried to do what I told them to. Never had any real problems, just normal stuff. Then one time there was a new boy in the class. Their teacher had written me a note that said to keep a close eye on him at all times. He had the telltale features of a Foz child and small, black eyes like a shark. He never showed any emotion whatsoever, excluding immense excitement if someone else got hurt in any way. Few days passed without any incidents, and then, out of the blue, he stands up in the middle of class, yanks the much smaller guy sitting in front of him down with his chair from behind and starts to pummel him in the face with his fists. I ran to intervene and grabbed him off and set him in a corner, ordering one of the trustworthy boys to run and get the principal here, now. The attacker stood in the corner, emotionless as ever and completely calm. I turned to check out the crying kid on the floor, and miraculously he seemed unharmed but was just shaken by the surprise attack. I sat down on the floor to calm him down and to help him up. Next thing I know is the shark eye kid standing beside me and stabbing me on the leg with my teacher's scissors. Which were actual scissors instead of safety scissors. But these scissors were supposed to be locked up in my drawer. It was then when I realized why the attacked kid wasn't badly hurt. Shark eye was big for his age, but he had no physical strength at all. I didn't even get a bruise from his stab. My trusty Lee's jeans stopped the blade, which I instantly took from him. I threw the scissors on top of a high shelf and ordered everyone else out of the classroom to wait for the principal's arrival while I watched over Shark eye. Boys ran out. Shark eye looked at me curiously for a few seconds and sat down at his desk and continued his math assignments like nothing had happened. I asked him quite sternly what had made him attack a fellow student. Shark eye lifted his empty gaze and said, "I heard him laughing at the school cafeteria." I thought he could have been laughing at me. "Larindel, can we play football today in PE class?" The boy had no empathy nor remorse. The episode meant absolutely nothing to him. When the principal arrived, we went through the situation and the class affirmed my description or events as they had happened. Shark eye's mom picked him up early and he stayed at home for a few days. The principal told me that this was not the first such incident and that the boy was on cue for a hospital school class. The principal commended me for my actions and was surprised that I had been able to keep my cool even after getting stabbed, even if the attempt had been pitiful. Turned out that's my teacher's superpower. I never lose it. Even when I've been spit at, got chairs thrown at me, someone trying to gouge my eyes out while holding them. Luckily, the years in the same school have accumulated my reputation, and nowadays it's very rare that someone even dares to try to mess with me. This incident was nearly 20 years ago, but I'll never forget it. Doctors of Reddit, what is the most heart-wrenching diagnosis you've ever had to give? While I was on neuro consults, a 23-year-old girl came in complaining of a headache for 6 months. At first I thought she was exaggerating, possibly looking for painkillers. Then I saw she'd actually been to an outpatient neurologist, who tried every med under the sun for presumed migraines, and had gotten a CT scan and MRI without contrast, both unrevealing. The pain became unbearable, so the girl came to the hospital and was admitted for further workup. Right after she is admitted, per our recommendation, She gets an MRI with contrast, which shows leptomeningeal carcinomatosis, cancer metastases all over the matter covering her brain. I had gone home for the day by the time the result was read. I was just on consult service, but the attending from the primary medical team sat down with the girl around 7 p.m. that night and explained she had cancer, and they didn't know where it was coming from yet. He explained the most likely places were either her stomach or her uterus. He asked if she wanted help in telling her family, who had also gone home to rest for the evening after being at bedside all day, but the patient decided to have tests done to find where the primary cancer was first so she would have a better idea of what the plan was moving forward when she told her family. The next day, I get to the hospital around 9 a.m. Consult service hours are nice. I pull up my patient list, and she's listed as not being in the hospital anymore. I thought maybe she signed out against medical advice. I open her chart to find out that around 6:30 that morning, the patient became altered and then quickly unresponsive. Code was called, CPR started, the whole works. Her family shows up at around 7:15 a.m. to see a team of doctors doing chest compressions. The team hadn't even had time to inform them of the code yet, because it all happened so fast. Remember, these people had no idea the girl had cancer or even anything seriously wrong with her, other than her headache. They were devastated and initially insisted that everything be done to keep her alive. But after witnessing a few rounds of CPR, they asked for the priest to come and give her her last rites, and she passed away. I cried so hard I couldn't see patients for most of the day. This poor young girl, all of a sudden just gone, and her poor family who had no idea it was coming. She was trying to protect them and give them hope, such a mature decision for someone her age, but they ended up in pain anyway. So tragic. I remember her often as an example of how fragile life is. I have known my parents were cheating on each other for years. So, actually getting to what happened. I went on ignoring everything for a couple days. It's exam season after all. I wanted to take full advice from here. I just didn't know who I could talk about this with in real life. But on Friday I was talking to a professor and mentioned all of this. She told me that I should look into possibly taking them to court for psychological damages and that sort of thing. That same day I got an email from my dad's lawyer requesting a DNA test. The cousin I've kept in contact with all this time told me that my dear mother admitted to cheating before I was born, so I may not be my father's child. Honestly, I don't give a crap. In fact, I've been looking into changing my full name and transferring to another uni far away from here, so didn't care, but coupled with my professor's idea it made me realize something. I could mess them up a little bit. A lot of people think revenge is stupid. I think it only is that way if you let it consume you. I spent a night awake planning this, but it ended up being so easy. I replied to the email from the lawyer, but not to him. I replied to a joint account my parents had, told them how I didn't see them as my parents, regardless of biological bonds, so I would not be taking the test, how I was waiting for their divorce, how much better it'd be like that. It just went on. I know they read it, because I got responses from both of their lawyers. It made me so mad that even after reading all that crap they didn't talk to me. Then, on Saturday evening I had lunch with my uncle, mom's brother and dad's best friend, and his wife. They were supposed to be on my side. They were the ones who told me they were sorry for me. I told them about how I planned on taking my parents to court so that they would have to at least still pay for the rest of my degree, but I also told Annie how I was planning on posting about all they'd done. I asked them not to tell my parents, and confessed how I had been planning their divorce so that I could get money on advance, without waiting for either of them to die. It almost made me sick, saying all this bull. But it worked. Not even a day later and the entire family was turning against me. Even my cousin seemed a bit put off, but she lives for the drama I guess, so she still talked to me. A family full of rats, not a single trustworthy soul. I mostly confirmed it to some of the people who talked to me, telling them about how I really wanted the money and couldn't care less about my parents. I was contacted by the lawyer, now apparently their lawyer, and with the help of my professor we crafted a contract where they would give me right now enough to finish my education. It was way more than just enough, but I wanted it to be as bad as possible. We wouldn't have contact again and I would give up the right to sue them for this reason in the future. It took them 2 days to announce they'd be renewing their vows, now this time without a devil by their side. They said that they could work through anything if they had each other. They have each other, but they don't have me anymore. That's the curse they're disguising as a blessing. I know for a fact that they won't divorce now. They already tarnished their perfect little reputation by publicly admitting that they cheated, but they messed with their own egos by going back on their word and not actually divorcing. There's not a single possibility now that they admit they were wrong again. They cursed each other when they met, they passed the curse on to me and now they took it back. They are, once again, getting stuck in a loveless marriage that's filled with hate and resentment, but this time around they don't have a middleman. They're going to make themselves miserable, and I'm so happy about it. Sure, they may have taken being a little girl away from me with their bull, but I sure feel like one now. Watching with glee as the two people I resent the most bind themselves to one another permanently. The best part is knowing that, if they were at any point even remotely decent people, they could so easily get out of this. But no, they never will, because they'd rather rot in that misery than admit they messed up. They got exactly what they wanted. They're the victims, the poor souls who were so in love that they couldn't see through it. It's perfect. At this point it's too late for them to do anything, even if they do realize what I did. What are they going to do? Admit they're not the victims? That I played up how bad I was to make them look better? That there's no real love there? No. They won't. They will not realize, because right now they're riding the high of getting what they wanted, and by the time it fades away they'll be like two bulls in a pit. Too busy fighting to think about anything else. If they do realize, they won't tell. Why would they? Who would even believe it when all I've done is try to prove them right? As for me, my professor has been a lifesaver. She helped me gather the paperwork I needed to transfer to another uni and got me in contact with the amazing lawyer who helped me write that contract. I needed it to be a contract. If we had gone to court over this, I would have had to deal with this idiots for so much longer. On top of that, well, a contract that seems entirely made by me makes me look so much worse than a decision made by a judge. Right now I'm trying to focus on passing all my finals, but I'll update again if I happen to be wrong and they do divorce. I'm sorry to those who assumed I wasn't like them. I wanted them to suffer the way I did, and I truly believe dealing with each other, or having to admit they were wrong, is the worst suffering I could inflict on them. So yeah, I guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.